Hello, we are back with another stream, and I'm dropping stuff already, which is great. Just trying to ah, get comfortable. Hope you can hear me well. So yeah, this is just gonna be like another stream, like we normally do. We'll play some Fortnite, we'll watch some news, we'll play in the background. What I did want to do is, yes, I did want to turn down the volume completely. Which again, yes, I am willing to play at a severe disadvantage. Not being able to hear what's going on is not going to do well, but that's not an issue because that's not our priority here. We're not trying to win. We're trying to complete quests, which we don't have a lot to do. Shockwave grenades. I need to pick up a bunch of those. Most likely, hit opponents or yourself. Most likely, I'm just going to be hitting myself because that's easier to do. And I need to find the 4 remaining gnomes. Why? I don't like having quests undone. I might take a look at some rocket racing after this. But either way, I did want to say something, but clearly I forgot. Yes, Fortnite. Yeah, as you can see, I have the Batman Who Laughs skin on. I did consider going for a different skin. A new filter that is now available is kicks. What does that mean? As in, certain skins can now wear shoes. If you can go to the store, you can see these actually look nice. If there would be shoes, I'd buy it. It would be those. These look pretty cool. Um, and then yeah, it's weird to buy shoes. These are cute, but shoes specifically for your character. I mean, clearly this is a Nike collaboration. I don't know if there's going to be any more. Do this little emote where you show off what shoes you're wearing. Not a bad emote at all. Okay, that last bit, not the biggest fan of. Yeah, some Lethal Company merch, some Nike stuff. Is this also Nike? Yeah, it's also Nike. Cool, cool. Ooh, do let me know. Do you call it Nike or Nike? Because I've always called it Nike. I've heard people call it Nike. I think the correct version is Nike. I've never been comfortable saying that. I mean, this skin, yeah, this skin looks cool. This looks cool. Problem is, it's not going to be floating. It's going to be anyway. That's an issue with some of these poses. Actually, if I click on them, can I see them stand normally? Yes, I can. Still looks cool. Definitely looks cool. Lego version looks cool, I think. Yeah, very cute. Either way, I'm not going to be buying anything, not with the amount of V-Bucks I currently have. Cool. Coming soon in 6 days, we should have an event, I believe Juice World? Yeah. Uh, to honor Juice World's legacy, all players who log in between 9 a.m. Eastern on November 25th to 10 p.m. Eastern on November 30th will receive the Juice World outfit the next day when they log in, completely for free. I think that's very cute. I think that's a very nice thing to do. Uh, these look really cool. I mean, yeah, I definitely intend on logging in and claiming the skin. Uh, Nothing too special going on here. Yes, I am interested. The event on November 30th. What's that gonna look like? But we can take a look at our outfits. Honestly, my favorite skin to use will always be the Goku skin. It has to be. The ability to switch out between a bunch of different modes is always gonna be awesome. I'm a big fan of the scythe here. I do have the golden scythe, but I think I prefer the one I normally have. I think Goku makes sense with this the power pole, but I'll stick to the scythe for the time being. Julio. Uh, we have a video by Bisan. Uh, Definitely intend on checking that out. We're gonna be watching it as usual. Videos are set up with closed captions, played back in 1.5 speed at the highest quality available. So yeah, this is from Middle East Eye. It's a video by Bisan journalist Bisan Owda describes the Al-Aqsa Martyrs Hospital massacre. So yes, these topics are quite heavy. They're not lighthearted and fun. I understand that. Would I prefer for everything to be, for us to be doing lighter and more fun topics and gameplays and stuff? Absolutely. But unfortunately, this is the current state of the world. This is what's going on, and this does have to take priority. This is where I'm going to focus my time and attention. And if I can share it to at least one more person, then I think I'm helping in at least a little way, raising awareness, even if a little bit. Um, I don't think any one person has a responsibility to change the world, but uh, you know, a collective is only made up by individuals. So everyone does their little part, and we can come together and actually do some good change in the world, hopefully. But that change has to come. You're not going to fix a problem unless you know there's a problem. So that change has to come with awareness. So yeah, that's kind of what I'm going through here. This video is from a month ago. I understand I am way behind. There are lots of videos that I'd like to get to. So I'll stop wasting your time and I'll get started on this video. Take it away, Bisan.
Kill them by burning them. Everyone is watching that. Even after they were kill them by burning them. Everyone is watching that. Even after they were killed, the fire expanded to the next tents. Even if some people survive this, they will be just without any place to go to. It was not the first time to bomb Al-Aqsa hospital or some tents, but I keep shaking. I don't know. They burned people alive. I don't know. They picked this missile to cause this fire at this time of the night to kill people while they are sleeping. And then these people are waking up, watching their bodies burning, turning into black, and having their last breath in front of the camera. That's what happened. They did this. I know that you will not be able to watch the videos, to watch the pictures, to hear them screaming while they are burning and no one can do anything for them, but the Israeli army did this.
This video was quite short, but impactful. It was a gruesome scene. I remember when this first happened. I am sorry I'm so far behind on the news cycle on a lot of stuff, but I do think it makes sense that we need to see what's happening bit by bit.
After the horrific attacks.
This is by TRT World, a historical timeline of Israel's brutality towards Palestinians. It's not a super long video, it's also only 10 minutes. 1.5 speed, closed captions on, and highest quality is already on. Perfect.
After the horrific attacks of October 7th.
Think about October 7th.
What Hamas did on October the 7th.
About what happened on October 7th.
October 7, the date you've heard repeated over and over again. Well, here's the truth. The conflict between Israel and Palestine did not begin on October 7, nor did Israel's brutality against Palestinians. It's 1897. The first Zionist Congress is held. The first Zionist Congress convened, led by Theodor Herzl, an Austro-Hungarian journalist seeking a Jewish homeland in Palestine, spurred by widespread anti-Semitism in Europe. Fast forward to 1917, the Balfour Declaration, a letter from the British Foreign Secretary Arthur Balfour to Lord Baron Rothschild, the wealthy figurehead of the British Jewish community, expresses support for the Zionist objectives to establish a national home for the Jewish people in Palestine, which was occupied by the UK after the defeat of the Ottomans in World War I. 1920, the creation of the Haganah, a terrorist militia formed by Zionist settlers that conducted numerous massacres of Palestinians with the goal of driving them off their land by force and seizing their properties, paving the way for an Israeli state. The tension escalates. By 1936, Jewish immigration into Palestine reaches its peak. More than 350,000 Jews had migrated to Palestine over the course of just a couple of decades, mostly from Europe, boosting the Jewish population in Palestine from roughly 3% in the late 19th century to over 30%. Pressure mounts as indigenous Palestinians deal with land dispositions and economic hardship due to the massive influx of Jews and subsequent demographic shift leading to the 1936 to 1939 Great Arab Revolt. Palestinians stage an uprising, fighting for their land and livelihoods, but face brutal suppression at the hands of British troops. Over 5,000 Palestinians are killed, nearly 15,000 wounded. British forces demolish Palestinian neighborhoods and impose a harsh military occupation. By the 1940s, new Zionist terrorist militias, the Irgun and the Stern Gang, emerge. Alongside the Haganah, they target British forces and Palestinian civilians, using violence to force Britain's hand. In 1946, the Irgun bombs the British administrative headquarters in Jerusalem's King's David Hotel, killing 96. 1947, the UN steps in with its partition plan. On November 29, 1947, the intergovernmental body proposes partitioning Palestine into 2 states, one Jewish and one Christian and Muslim Arab, but allocates over half of the land to the Jewish minority, which owned less than 7% of Palestinian land, ignoring Arab opposition. In 1948, Zionist militias commit at least 30 documented massacres at the start of what becomes known as the Nakba, or the catastrophe. The April 1948 Deir Yassin massacre is the most notorious among them. The Irgun and the Stern gang slaughter more than 100 Palestinian men, women, and children in the village of Deir Yassin. 2 days later, the Haganah illegally occupies what remains. It's May 14, 1948. Zionist leaders declare the establishment of the State of Israel, and just 1 day later, the US recognizes Israel as a state. The Nakba, 1948. Zionist militias, the Haganah, Irgun, and Stern gang violently expel over 750,000 Palestinians, 80% of the Palestinian population at the time, from their land, stealing or destroying their homes. Over 2 years, more than 400 towns and villages are entirely destroyed. 15,000 Palestinians are killed. Thousands more are left homeless and stateless, scattered across refugee camps throughout the region. In 1950, Israel's Knesset passes the law of return, granting every Jew around the world the right to settle in Israel while denying these same rights to Palestinians. 1953 marks one of Israel's first major attacks on Gaza. The assault on the Bureij refugee camp kills at least 50 Palestinians in the Palestinian stronghold, where more than 200,000 Palestinian refugees had sought safety after the Nakba. In October 1956, the Suez Crisis erupts. As world attention focuses on Egypt, Israeli forces carry out brutal massacres under the cover of war in Khan Yunis and Rafah. Nearly 400 Palestinians were killed. 1967. The Arab-Israeli War. Israel launches surprise airstrikes on its neighbors, killing some 20,000 Arabs and achieving an overwhelming victory that leads to the further occupation and illegal confiscation of Palestinian land in the West Bank, East Jerusalem, and Gaza. Nearly 400,000 Palestinians are evicted from the West Bank, half facing their second expulsion, and the number of Jewish settlers on occupied Palestinian land increases to more than 600,000. It's 1982. After invading Lebanon to weaken the Palestine Liberation Organization, Israel teams up with the Phalangists, a Christian militia which kills over 3,000 Palestinian refugees living in the Beirut neighborhoods of Sabra and Shatila. 1987 to 1993, the First Intifada begins. Frustration among Palestinians living under Israeli occupation was reaching a breaking point, and the death of 4 Palestinians in the car crash caused by an Israeli vehicle triggers a revolt against Israel that emerges in Gaza's Jabalia refugee camp. More than 1,000 Palestinians and 100 Israelis are killed during the first Palestinian uprising. Fast forward to 1993, Israel and the PLO signed the Oslo Accord, effectively ending the First Intifada and supposedly meant to ensure peace and Palestinian self-determination. But the hope fades quickly. 1994, the Hebron massacre. An Israeli terrorist settler kills 29 Palestinian worshippers inside Al-Ibrahimi Mosque. This tragedy marks the bloodiest day since 1967. It's 2000. The Second Intifada erupts. In spite of signing the Oslo Accord, Israel continues its illegal occupation, and the number of illegal settlers living on occupied Palestinian land doubles from almost 200,000 to 400,000 in just 7 years. Ariel Sharon storms Al-Aqsa Mosque with 1,000 soldiers on September 28, sparking the Second Intifada. For Palestinians, the uprising is about much more than just Sharon's provocative act. It's about years of broken promises, expanded illegal settlements, and Israel's refusal to honor peace agreements. By the end of the Second Intifada, nearly 5,000 Palestinians have been killed, including over 1,200 children, and more than 5,000 homes are demolished. January 2002, Israel begins constructing a 70-kilometer separation wall in the occupied West Bank, later outlawed by the ICJ in 2004. Under the pretext of security, Israel expands the wall on stolen Palestinian land, separating Palestinians in the occupied West Bank from Palestinians in occupied East Jerusalem and heavily restricting their movement. Today, the wall is over 700 kilometers long and growing. Between 2002 and 2007, Israel launches at least 12 military operations in the occupied West Bank towns of Ramallah, Tulkarem, and Nablus, as well as in occupied East Jerusalem and Gaza. Thousands of Palestinians are killed. Hundreds of Palestinian homes are bulldozed, and more than 5,000 Palestinians are incarcerated without clear charges or trials. In 2005, Israel withdraws its troops from Gaza, but by 2007, Tel Aviv imposes a full blockade on Gaza, accusing newly elected Hamas of terrorism. Israel cuts off access to Gaza by land, air, and sea, and fully controls its water, electricity, imports, and border crossings. Between 2008 and 2021, Israel wages 4 wars in Gaza. Over 4,000 Palestinians are killed. Tens of thousands of homes, schools, and historical sites are reduced to rubble. More than half of Gaza's population is internally displaced over the years. Rebuilding becomes nearly impossible, as Israel's siege chokes off crucial imports. And on October 7, 2023, following Hamas's surprise attack, Israel begins indiscriminately bombarding the besieged enclave in a relentless onslaught that killed more than 40,000 Palestinians so far, including over 17,000 children, with many authorities around the world labeling it a textbook genocide. While Israel and its allies obsessively fixate on October 7 as the day when the violence began, the real tragedy lies in decades of silence over the ongoing suffering of Palestinians, a suffering that started over 100 years ago and has been systematically ignored by the majority of the world as Israel continues its goal of erasing and exterminating Palestinians, their heritage, their culture, and their future.
I know this video was quite rapid. There was a lot of information, and a lot of it wasn't really didn't go into super depth. There was just a lot of things to get through, which is kind of the horrific part. How much brutality there was in just the history of Israel and Palestine. But I do think it covered a lot of information. I do wish we could have more details of because I trying to remember exactly. A lot of these events went on for a lot longer. A lot of them were insanely brutal, and how horrific they were, and how I just think it's an important point to understand that, hey, yes, we often like to say this started on October 7th. Yeah, I'm dead. That this started on October 7th, but quite clearly it didn't. This has been going on for 100 years. It hasn't, yeah. I mean, since before Israel was a state, these people have been suffering under them. It's ridiculous to pretend that this started on October 7th and to ignore the fact that, yes, you want to say that what Israel is doing is a response, and I brought this up before. Then if you want to say that Israel's genocide now in Gaza is a response to October 7th, well, then October 7th is a response to years of occupation and brutality. And it is nowhere near where it started. Sorry, I'm losing track of my thoughts quite a lot. This is Katie Halper. Israel supporter throws hot coffee at man and toddler in NYC over Keffiyeh. Oh, this was from a month ago. I saw this quite recently, unless this is another event of this happening. And I don't know. I hope it's not. Does that make sense? I hope this hasn't happened that many times, that this is another story that I'm hearing about this. But yeah, let's get started.
You're about to see a clip of Ashish Prashar, and I wanted to let you know that Tuesday, October 15th, I'm doing a live event in New York City with Ashish Prashar, Daniel Santiago, and Tyler Reynolds, all of whom have volunteered in the West Bank. Daniel was shot in the leg by the Israeli military. The event consists of a screening of the excellent documentary Holy Redemption, Stealing Palestinian Land, about settler violence. The screening will be followed by a discussion with Ashish, Daniel, and Tyler. It's Tuesday, October 15th at 6 p.m. at the People's Forum at 320 West 37th Street, and it's organized by Code Pink. If you can't make it in person, you can watch it at youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show, and it starts at 6 p.m., so an hour earlier than I usually start my show. Thanks so much. You mentioned that you and I are both based in New York. This is actually something that happened to you in New York City. Here's a news clip about something that put you into the media spotlight yourself.
Investigating a confrontation Park as a potential hate crime. The alleged victim says that he was accosted because of the color of his skin and the scarf he was wearing. CBS 2's Naveen Dhaliwal has the story from Fort Greene.
As Ashish Prashar stands near Edmund Park,
I don't even know if they'd registered how bad it was at that moment. Why?
it's unclear what led up to the moment before the video, but the attack is caught on camera.
Get away!
A woman went on a rampage Tuesday morning as Prashar shielded his 18-month-old son on the basketball court.
She told me she's Jewish American and I don't belong here.
That's how it started. Then the woman throwing more insults.
You're a terrorist. You don't belong here. And she told me several times that I didn't belong here.
Prashar stunned as things got worse.
She threw her phone viscerally at both our heads. And I ducked and it missed both of us. And at that point, I put my son on the ground behind my legs. And when I looked back up, hot coffee was coming towards my face.
Nearly missing his son.
She targeted me because I'm wearing a Palestinian scarf. I'm wearing an Arab scarf.
She stopped once a bystander against the fence stepped in. Prashar, whose family is from India, is appalled that he has become another case of mistaken identity and a victim of a possible hate crime because of the color of his skin.
I'm Punjabi. I was born in London. But it doesn't mean I don't have solidarity with anyone in the world who is seeking to be free.
And after the 2 recent hate crimes in the Sikh community, one fatal, now he wants local leaders to address the bias louder than ever.
It's been carried over from everyone from India to North Africa with the Middle East in the middle. We're not safe. Simply that. And our children are not safe.
Prashar says he's never seen this woman before, and now police are investigating this as a possible hate crime. So far, no arrests. In Fort Greene, Brooklyn, Naveen Dhaliwal, CBS 2 News.
So can you update? First of all, really sorry that happened. And how old is your son?
He's nearly 2.5 now, but he was 18 months at the time.
18 months.
18 months.
And can you update us about this case?
Yeah, so I did a grand jury appearance. It moved really quickly. She was arrested. She surrendered, frankly, and I have to thank New York, frankly. I don't think there wasn't a mum in New York or parent that didn't mobilize to try and find her. Like there was posters from Fort Greene to Grand Army Plaza that had nothing to do with, all over looking for her, taking screenshots from the video that I posted. I owe New York so much in the public, but she surrendered because of that, not because of the police. She surrendered because her world was getting. So someone found her in Whole Foods, put a photo out, tagged the NYPD, and I think she just had to surrender. So she surrendered through 2 weeks after it happened. It was November 7th, so a month after October 7th. She surrendered 2 weeks later. I did a grand jury appearance in December. They found her unanimously that it had to go to trial. And since then, it's just been court appearance, and she changed lawyer, back and forth. We should find out soon if she wants to go to trial or take any prospective deal that the District Attorney of Brooklyn offers her. This is also complex for me, as you know, someone who's been in prison. I don't believe in prison, right? I'm an abolitionist. I don't think prison is going to be good for her or any other person involved in this. Like, we've healed as a family. We don't, the reason people know, the reason I wear that scarf isn't because of what's happening now. I was gifted it by a Palestinian mother in 2011 when I worked in the West Bank, who said I would do the right thing before I resigned. So that scarf has a lot of meaning to me. Where my son was wrapped in it when he was born. But that's how much meaning that scarf has to me. So, when someone does something like that to you and believes in you, there's a connection, and you take it with you. This woman, hopefully before September, in a week, will know if there's going to be a public trial or whether the DA offers her something. And look, I don't really think jail's great, but if she wants to go to trial, I can't see. I mean, you never know with trial, but like everyone who's watched that video, forget what my race is or my scarf is. The idea is they see a toddler.
Yeah.
And she attacked him. And the reason people are you sure it wasn't just you? And look at the way Israelis are attacking Palestinian children. And she's Israeli, not just Jewish. Like, she's Israeli. She's Israeli. She's dual citizen. So she went for my child. The second object was definitely targeted at my child. Direction. She wasn't a bad throw. She knew what she was doing. And she said the comment. I think it's in all the coverage of New York Mag and everyone covered it. Which I hope someone burns your child. And then she attempted to do it. So I have no doubt that she tried to target our little toddler. At time. But I said back then, like I said on camera, but also I went further. I was like, what a lot of media edit out is I blamed President Biden for the environment that we had built for the first month of this. Palestinians were demonized here.
Yeah.
Anyone who looked like them was demonized here. And
beheaded babies lie that he put out, despite the fact that his own staff told him it wasn't true.
Thank you. Thank you for the intensity of your support. It matters. It matters that Americans see what's happening. I mean, I've been doing this a long time. I never really thought that I would.
Sorry, I don't mean to cut off Sleepy Joe over here, or Genocide Joe. What's shocking to me is that I was wrong. This isn't the video I was talking about. This is a second, or I don't want to say second, I don't know if it's the second, but this is a different incident than the one I was talking about. And the fact that there are multiple is horrifying. This isn't the first time such a thing happens, and I know that sounds obvious, but no, I mean specifically when it comes to targeting Arabs, Muslims, whatever. I'll take you back to the most well-known example that essentially, I don't want to say birthed this anti-Arab sentiment or anti-Muslim sentiment. 9/11. The first person that was attacked, that was killed in a anti-Arab or anti-Muslim, whatever you want to call it, which again are not the same thing, but incident after 9/11 was a Sikh man. The reason I'm not the biggest fan of calling this anti-Muslim, because I don't think it is. I do think it's just brown people. Most Muslims are not Arab, but that doesn't really mean anything to these bigots. You know what I mean? The first person that was attacked was a Sikh man, and he had nothing to do with it. And even if you attacked a Muslim man, that doesn't mean anything. It was just because he was a brown man, and they assumed, hey, brown terrorist, or dangerous, or violent, or whatever. The people doing the violence are the ones that assumed the person they're targeting is the violent one, which the irony is unfortunately lost on them. I think this is going to happen again and again, and it has happened before. Like I said, the majority of Muslims are not Arab. There are plenty of Arabs who are not Muslim. And of course, this is not to justify these attacks to, if they were against specifically an Arab Muslim, it would still be dumb and bigoted and stupid and everything. But the fact that these people really it's just a matter of skin color. That it is just dumb hatred that is truly just skin deep. It is, hey, that is a brown person. I assume they're dangerous. Full stop. That's as far as that thinking goes. Oh, taking fire. You don't attack and then run. You don't attack and then run, buddy. Yeah. Anyway, back to Joe Biden straight up just lying, saying he saw videos or photos of beheaded babies, which is just not true.
See and have confirmed pictures of terrorists beheading children. I never thought I'd ever. Anyway, but there are countries in the region that are trying to be of some help, including Arab nations that are trying to be of some help.
100%. And they said on one of the interviews, I think Pix 11 didn't edit it out, that like more people will be attacked, more people will have worse outcomes than what happened to me and my child. A few weeks later, this boys were shot in Vermont, and he hasn't called them. The president still hasn't called them. If you are showing what our administration, what Kamala and everyone else believe in, this is what they believe in: violence towards the oppressed, ironically, in this, and empowering the oppressor, whether it be Israelis in the streets of New York or Israelis in or the Israeli occupation in Palestine.
Well, sorry, and one more thing. Yeah, this was an Israeli American woman. I believe this was in the UK. Telling him he doesn't belong there. Just the complete audacity.
Ash, thank you so much for joining, and really want to thank you for participating. How generous you've been with your time, and please come back, and we'll link to all your projects in the description.
Thank you. Appreciate you.
Thanks so much. Don't forget to come out and see Ashish Prashar live along with me, Daniel Santiago, and Tyler Reynolds, Tuesday, October 15th at 6 p.m. at the People's Forum at 320 West 37th Street at a screening and talkback organized by Code Pink. And if you can't come in person, you can watch it here at youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. Again, that's youtube.com/The Katie Halper Show. The screening starts at 6 p.m. and it's followed by a discussion at 7 p.m. To see you either live or online. Bye, everyone. Thanks a lot.
Thank you, Katie.
Susan, if I could begin with you. I'm going to sort of reintroduce you. I know you've already been introduced once.
All right, so this is a rather long video. It's by Middle East Eye, also from a month ago. Israeli soldiers document their own war crimes online. Why? Yeah, that's a great question, and I can answer it for you. It's just impunity. They don't see themselves ever being held accountable, and they're proud of what they're doing.
Susan, if I could begin with you. I'm going to sort of reintroduce you. I know you've already been introduced once. Susan is a Palestinian writer and a best-selling novelist, a human rights activist, an animal rights activist as well. So Susan was inside Gaza twice during the last year. Susan, do you just want to briefly explain to us what you were doing in Gaza during those two visits?
So officially, I was with the medical team. Unofficially, I went in to document and to bring in as much aid as I could, and also to work with young people, young children, and also young adults, doing writing workshops, and really in any way that I could be of service. That was why I was in there.
Thank you. Victoria, I'll turn to you. Victoria's a plastic surgeon. She's involved with Ideals, which is a charity supporting trauma care services in Gaza. It's been operating there since 2009. Victoria spent 2.5 weeks working at the European Hospital in Khan Yunis in March. So, I mean, the Khan Yunis is where the NASA hospital is as well, which is featured in our film. So Victoria was in Khan Yunis at one of the other hospitals in the city just a month after the events described in our film. And Victoria, I was just going to kick off by asking you, what are your overriding memories of the period you were in Gaza?
I was also at NASA for a month in August, and one of my really good friends was involved in that scene.
So, right, okay, in August, just gone?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm sorry, I didn't realise that. Yeah. Who was the friend?
Ahmed Al-Maghrabi. He's a plastic surgeon. He's now in Egypt, but he came to see me at the European when I was there in March and told me what had happened to him.
And so you were back at NASA?
And when I went back in August, I went to NASA.
To NASA. So how is NASA now?
Functioning. It doesn't look like it does in your pictures. But it's a very strange perception that what we have here in the UK of hospitals in Gaza, because the OCHA data continually tells you that there are 36 functioning hospitals in Gaza, and currently there are 17 in operation. But that's not really true. When you look at the 36 hospitals in Gaza, there's only really 4 that do anything significant. And that's NASA, the European, Shifa and Al-Aqsa. The others are very small facilities, and a lot of them are privately owned, and they just do investigations, so imaging, physiotherapy, and these are all classed by OCHA as hospitals. So I really feel that when you hear this, 17 hospitals are functioning, you think, well, that's not so bad. But most of those facilities couldn't run an emergency department. You know, Kamal Adwan has got, I think, 1 theatre. They're not hospitals as you know them. Only the 4 are functional.
And of course, in the last few days, the Israelis have ordered the evacuation in 24 hours of hospitals in Jabalia in Gaza City, which again is getting no coverage in Western media at all.
But it seems to be that you're on a rotation where you can only really have 2 of the big 4, or 2 large hospitals functioning at any one time. I mean, when we left the European Gaza Hospital in April, it was then evacuated in July, and it only reopened again when we left in August, but only partially. And during that time, the only hospital that was fully functioning with an emergency department and all the facilities was NASA. Shifa, the main building, has been destroyed. They're trying to rebuild, or they're trying to refunction, or get things up and running in the second area, but it won't be what it was.
There is an Arabic language film on AJ360 about the destruction of Al-Shifa, which is partly why I didn't go into it in this film, but the destruction of Al-Shifa really is astonishing. I mean, Al-Shifa was destroyed in a way that
yeah, and Al-Shifa was the biggest. That was always where we went before the war. It was the hospital that offered everything. It's twice the size of any of the others. It did renal transplant. It did everything.
Yeah. So Yumna El-Sayed is a multi-award-winning journalist, originally from Egypt, has lived in the Gaza Strip since 2014, married to a Palestinian, has 4 Palestinian children, and has been the correspondent for Al Jazeera English in Gaza since 2021. I mean, first, a very simple question. Just how dangerous is it working as a journalist in Gaza Strip?
Working as a journalist in the Gaza Strip just basically labels you as a legitimate target. And it's not just you, it's you, your entire family, everyone around you, everyone you get in contact or in touch with, everyone is subjected to that targeting every single time. It wasn't just this genocide, it wasn't just this war. Even in previous wars, journalists were always targeted. Every single time we went to cover, even the protests that took place along the border fence, unarmed civilians and journalists covering those protests, we were sniped. We were attacked and directly attacked by drones throwing gas grenades over our heads while we're covering, or shot by sniper bullets of Israeli soldiers that are deployed about 600 meters away from where we are. So this has been the condition for any Palestinian journalist inside the Gaza Strip.
And Maha Husseini speaks very powerfully about that in our film, The Dreadful Burden of Realizing That You Yourself Are a Threat to the people around you because you're a target. Okay, I'd like to open the discussion out to the audience and invite questions. Who'd like to go first? Gentleman here.
I'd like to ask when the panel, sorry, my name's David Panel from Jewish Network for Palestine. I'd like to ask the panel when the UN is going to wake up to the fact that Israel, and for that matter Ukraine, are simply the cutting edge of Western imperialism, and is the UN part of that?
I'm not sure if anyone feels able to answer that one.
We have that question too.
Yeah, I think that's a question. I've just realised I haven't introduced you yet, have I? I'm terribly sorry. Just before we move on, this is Heidi Dagstall, who is from the ICJP. She's a US attorney and a barrister specialising in international and human rights law. She's chief counsel for the ICJP, and she's taken a number of cases to the ICC, including ones involving Palestine. Which sort of, in a way, ties in with that. It's the degree to which Israel can be held account before international tribunals for its behaviour in the Gaza Strip. I mean, just from the material you saw in that film, Ida, how much of a case can be built against the Israelis from the material they themselves have provided?
And the West.
Yes.
Well, thanks very much, Richard. First of all, for making this film and to everyone that's been involved in it as well. I think to answer your question, I'd look to the applications for arrest warrants that the ICC prosecutor submitted in May this past year. So we're going on about 4 months ago. And there's a number of crimes that the prosecution set out in those applications for arrest warrants, all of them going to those fundamental principles that are part of the laws of war that make up the crimes that are in the Rome Statute. So looking at principles of distinction, proportionality, and also precautions as well. And some of the things that we'd heard in this film. I think what struck me as I was watching this film was the amount of evidence that you've even been able to bring together just in this film. Now, when it comes to the ICC prosecution's applications for arrest warrants, so of course the prosecution has submitted applications, submitted all the evidence that they're relying upon, and it's now before the judges, the pretrial chamber, to consider that evidence and whether or not to issue those arrest warrants. We don't know exactly the extent of that evidence. That's not public. It's been submitted confidentially to the judges. But what I can say from watching this film, that if, just from what you've been able to bring together, and also from what I've seen that ICJP has been able to gathered in their investigative unit, it's an enormous amount of evidence that speaks to these crimes, that speaks to violations of these very fundamental principles that I could go through in length of the amount of things towards direct attacks on, intentional attacks on civilians, on civilian property and infrastructure, about using starvation and the blockade of humanitarian aid and medical supplies to the civilian population as a method of warfare, and then flowing from that, using it as a method of collective punishment as well. And the prosecution has even brought it to assert the crime of extermination as in the context of starvation. Just even those are reflected in the information, the evidence, the testimonies, the statements even from the perpetrators that we saw in this film, and that I've also seen ICJP putting together as well. So let me pause there, and maybe there'll be more questions on that.
I'd say this was the tip of the iceberg. I mean, we didn't have to spend ages and ages looking around to find this stuff. My job was mainly sifting stuff out. I mean, there's mountains and mountains, and this stuff wasn't unrepresentative. I mean, it's all like this. One thing a scene we did have in the film at one time, but cut out because there wasn't room for it. The thing you never see is combat, or hardly ever see. You hardly ever see them actually fighting Hamas, which is extraordinary. Just a very quick follow-up question to that. Do you have any idea why it's taking so long with those ICC warrants?
I think it's a question on everybody's minds. Historically, at the ICC, there's always this process of applying for arrest warrants, and the judges consider it. But what we've seen in the past is that for other arrest warrant applications, the time frame is usually about a month for the turnaround time. This is what happened with the arrest warrants for Putin and other Russian accused persons that are now before the court and other heads of states as well. So, very serious crimes against those most responsible and heads of state. So, we can't say that this is more complicated, I suppose. We are going on for 4.5 months now, and I think it is something that's worrisome, particularly because the ICC, one of the goals is deterrence. And the longer that we have these delays and there isn't a decision on these arrest warrants, it prevents that goal of the court as a court of last resort being a deterrent effect to the continuations of crimes that we see every day continue to happen.
Okay, thank you. Lady over there in the glasses.
Richard, first of all, thank you very much indeed for an incredibly powerful film. And I hope very much that it gets to be seen outside the people in this room who essentially are all on the same page. Just two quick questions, really. Susan, for you. You said something really powerful at the end. You said that this stage of the ongoing conflict in Gaza has shown the rules-based order to be one that really only protects people with white skin. If you could elaborate on that, I'd be grateful. And Victoria, everywhere I go and everyone I speak to, in terms of the general public, feel entirely helpless. They don't want to see any more dead babies, to put it simply. What can members of the general public do to help people in Gaza?
So Gaza has pulled off the veil, among other things, over these Western slogans of democracy and the rule of law and international law, humanitarian, human rights, and all of these Western slogans that they've been pummeling the rest of the world with for decades. Just the example that Haiti was talking about, when the ICC prosecutor Khan decided to, take this up, he uncharacteristically, I don't follow things, but from what I've read, that it's not typical for him to announce an application so publicly, which that application for usually it's done and it's sent to the ICC for review, if I'm correct, right? But that wasn't done, and so in making this public announcement, he basically opened the doors for the UK and the US and anybody else who wants to lodge objections. And I've said this before. Israel is an anachronism. It's an ethno-religious, settler, colonial state that's premised on privileging one group of people to the detriment of everybody else on a patch of land. And that's something that fits well in history. It doesn't fit well in our modern milieu, especially with these Western slogans that I was talking about. So now the whole world, this is something we've always known. We've always understood, as the victims of this violent, barbaric settler colony, we've always understood who Israel is, but now the whole world gets to see them. They get to see what we have endured for decades. And so there's this tension between what people are seeing and the response. And it's hard to reconcile. Despite the gaslighting, there's all this, you read all the gaslighting at the end. We're the most moral army, where we adhere to international law, human shields, etc. And the only way to sort of reconcile what we're seeing with our own eyes and this reality that they claim, this world that they claim exists, one of order and fairness and whatnot, is by lying. And this is the role of the media. And Western media in particular has played a really profound role in nurturing this Holocaust and allowing it to continue by lying, by spinning, by banning us, by silencing us in all manner of ways. And there's another documentary that just came out too by the Grey Zone called Atrocity Inc. that at least just exposes that first part of all the lies that the media has pushed on everybody else. But yeah, so I'll just stop there.
Thank you, Susan. Victoria.
I think it's a really hard question to ask. How you can help on the ground. I was continually asked by my Palestinian colleagues when I was working how the world can just stand and watch what was happening, watch us sort of treat all these infants that have been sort of bombed and burnt. And it was very difficult for me because I felt while I was there, and still now even more that I'm back, that that's not what everybody I know thinks. Everybody that I know and I speak to thinks that what's going on is absolutely outrageous and it needs to stop it immediately. And unfortunately, I think what's being portrayed to the Palestinians is the party line. And I don't think the government speaks for the majority of us. I really believe that the government does not speak for the majority of us in the UK. And I think that we have to keep making that point. We have to desist. We have to boycott Israel. We have to let this voice out that we are not supporting this party line. We want an end to this. I'm sick of hearing about, Hamas terrorists and Israel's right to defend itself. The bottom line is this is a human rights issue and children are being murdered. It's got to stop, and we've got to stop supporting it.
I think it's very interesting. This is... I don't think there's any issue today where the political media class, which is pretty out of line with the rest of the population on a lot of things actually, but it's really out of line with the population on this. And I think the great challenge for everyone is how we convert that massive opinion into actual power and influence. But anyway, other questions. Rada Kami.
Thank you very much. Look, first of all, I want to pay tribute to you, Richard, the filmmaker, who has produced this devastating film, which I very much would like for it to be shown everywhere so that people can really understand what's happening. Certainly in Parliament. Secondly, I want to pay tribute to the people on this panel who've been out in Gaza, have risked their lives. I commend you, I admire you, and I cannot thank you enough for the dedication that you've shown. But the point I wanted to make was about the question of international law. Many things have been exposed since October 7th last year, but one of the most serious, I think, is the way that international law, international humanitarian law, international norms of behavior have been blown up by Israel and by the United States. Now, I consider this, and I'm sure you do too, and everybody in this room, extremely serious, because what is to stop any other state, any other group from doing the kind of things that Israel has been doing and that the United States has been? What is to stop them, since we've created a precedent that it's actually all right? So to my question, which is addressed to our legal colleague here, do you not think that the time has come for the legal community to mount a campaign to actually protect international law, to make this absolutely clear, to declare it to everybody? I would have thought international law, which I know is not perfect, but it's all we've got. So doesn't it deserve a campaign, not just, hand-wringing or regrets or something like that, which I'm not accusing you of, but so that's the question. Do you not think there should be a big legal campaign to protect international law? Thanks.
I think it's an excellent question, and I think everyone in the legal community and beyond is enormously worried about the way that international law is being disregarded. I think it's terrible to see such blatant evidence of this disrespect for these fundamental principles of international law, but then also the fact flowing from that there isn't immediate and universal outcry about the fact that those principles aren't being respected and applied uniformly. What I would say about your question for a campaign, I think there have been some efforts by the legal community to do that. There is a group of lawyers here in the UK that signed a letter in regards to the various human rights violations and international law violations, and emphasizing the importance and the need to respect that and to apply it. But I also want to say that I think one way that lawyers as well are expressing their concern and their adamance that international law is respected is by applying it and continuing to use it and to not give up on it and to insist that we look to the law as being the solution for preventing crimes and addressing them when they happen and providing justice, accountability, and reparations for victims and making sure that this doesn't happen again. I think it's completely understandable and warranted for victims and for the international community as a whole to express that we've lost faith in international law from what we've seen, that we've lost trust, and that needs to be rebuilt. But in doing so, in recognizing that fact, we don't reject it. We continue to use it and to build that trust back by using it and applying it in our cases.
Thank you. Rivka.
Hello, thank you so much, and well done, Richard, for a really powerful film. I want to ask about international law again, quite a specific question actually, which is the two sort of main genocide trials that I know of, the Nuremberg trials and the Rwanda genocide trial in 1994-5, happened after the perpetrators of the genocide were defeated militarily. So obviously you had the Tutsis defeating the Hutus and the Allies defeating Nazi Germany. How, and therefore with forcing the perpetrators to come to court through, the defeat of the enemy. But what is the mechanism for forcing the perpetrators of Israel's genocide in Gaza to international courts if countries like the UK and the US are continuing to support them diplomatically, financially, militarily, and in so many other ways? Are there mechanisms for extraditing people, or will we see a situation in which Israeli war criminals are effectively in lockdown in Israel or in a number of countries that they're able to kind of travel between in order to avoid arrest? And could that situation basically, continue indefinitely? How will we be able to hold these people to account when we talk about arrest warrants? Who's going to arrest Benjamin Netanyahu? No one in Israel, obviously.
I think you're absolutely right in identifying the fact that in past, when we look back at the history of international criminal law, there are instances where let's say, for example, the tribunal for the former Yugoslavia, that tribunal happened after the conflict ended and therefore allowed those trials to move forward free of the conflict in hindsight of it. And I probably assisted with the arrest and surrender of those individuals to the court. When it comes to the ICC, if those arrest warrant applications are granted by the pretrial chamber, then what will happen is the pretrial chamber will send out a request for cooperation to all of those states that are members of the Rome Statute. By signing on to be a member of the court, a member of the Rome Statute, then you accept the obligations that come with it, that if the court issues arrest warrants and one of those individuals travels onto your territory, that you have an obligation to assist the court by arresting.
Yes, that is completely true. You have an obligation as a signatory, as a member of the International Criminal Court. You have a responsibility, you have a duty to arrest somebody who has an active arrest warrant out for them. Since this is taking place in the past, this video or this panel, I have the benefit of knowing what happens more recently. And if you don't know, that arrest warrants do come out against Benjamin Netanyahu and Yoav Gallant. While it is fantastic news that these arrest warrants came out and that accountability looks like it's going to happen, and I'm very happy to hear that these war criminals will be treated as war criminals, well, that's kind of the thing. I don't know that they'll be treated as war criminals, as Germany, one of the countries that prides itself on its, how it upholds laws and how it, it does everything by the books, came out and said that if Benjamin Netanyahu would step onto German soil, they don't know, they're not sure if they will actually enforce that arrest warrant. So please explain to me how that's supposed to work. Because it really, it is blatant, it is very obvious, and I obviously should see it coming. It is rules for thee and not for me. It is these systems of upholding international law. They don't mean anything. It's just a matter of, hey, can we apply these against our political enemies? Who was it that came out and said that the International Court and Criminal Court and the International Court of Justice are for Africans and thugs like Putin? This is what I mean. You're not going to use the master's tools to take down the master's house. This is what I mean. This oppression it's built into the system. international law doesn't apply to everyone equally. It applies to who we want it to apply to, and it defends who we want it to defend. So we'll see. We'll see what actually ends up happening, but I'm not holding my breath.
Them and surrendering them. Now, of course, we know that the ICC can't physically force any state to carry out those obligations, but there are some remedies in holding states to account when they fail to complete those obligations. Like we've seen this with South Africa when Omar al-Bashir traveled to South Africa and an arrest warrant was pending, and they did not arrest him. And the court considered whether or not South Africa had breached its obligations and whether or not to refer them on to the United Nations or to the Assembly of State Parties as well. So I think there are diplomatic solutions, but then I think it comes also to the support as a whole for the court. If these arrest warrant applications are granted and there are pending arrest warrants, that the international community respects the rule of law of the ICC and any other court, whether it's international criminal law, international human rights law, or what we're seeing at the ICJ, respects the rule of law of these courts, allows them to move forward independently and impartially, and allows them to do their work.
The lady back there. Yeah. You get the microphone.
Hi, thank you so much for sharing that beautiful and harrowing, powerful film with us all. My question is for Yumna specifically. I work for, independent Western media outlet. And we always constantly hear about the need for independent Western journalists to be allowed into Gaza because Israel isn't allowing them to, and partly Egypt as well. And I was just wondering, as someone who was on the ground, how do you feel about this sentiment? Do you find it insulting to the work you do? Do you feel like, I personally see, I think it's important to get Western independent, journalists in there because I think it's important for us to be able to tell the world these stories without having Israel say anything about it. But is it an insult to your craft and to the journalists out there on the ground already?
Well, it's not an insult when journalists they're demanding their legitimate right to go into an area of conflict, war, or genocide to cover that. That is a legitimate right of any journalist around the world. It's insulting when after all this life-threatening on a daily basis to us as Palestinian journalists and our families, that we would find other journalists coming out to say, oh, there is a lack of information coming out of Gaza because there are no Western journalists in there. No, that's just a lame excuse because you have abandoned your right in fighting that fight against Israel that has oppressed you and has oppressed the freedom of press, and you were not able to get that right by entering Gaza to cover that war. There is no lack of information coming out of Gaza, and the fact that there are no Western journalists in Gaza is putting an extra burden on us as Palestinian journalists because first of all, we are legitimate targets for the Israeli army. We have no any sort of protection, and yet we continue to work in very immense conditions that any human being can endure. And I will tell you, to be honest, it's not just our professional work that is keeping us going on a daily basis, every day like that. No, it's that moral and ethical responsibility and duty because the entire world has abandoned Gaza and the people of Gaza. So we look at it as, how can we abandon our own people after we've felt that bitter taste of abandonance by the entire world? But yes, it would have been very beneficial for Western journalists to enter the Gaza Strip, but the fact that they did not enter the Gaza Strip is not an excuse that they are not exposing, with all that material that they have coming out of Gaza, the atrocities and the crimes committed by the Israeli army inside Gaza. Because at the end, when a Western journalist enters Gaza, he needs a Palestinian fixer, he needs a Palestinian translator, he needs to speak to Palestinian officials and Palestinian civilians, and at the end writes that story with a lot of Palestinian help. So his story doesn't get to be more credible than the Palestinians' story. I'm a Palestinian, but I speak your language as a Western journalist, and I'm reporting in your language to expose what's happening in my country. So what other excuse do you have as a Western journalist?
Mohammed Al. Mohammed Al-Hallo puts it very powerfully at the end of the film, doesn't he? So, I've filmed the hospitals, I've filmed the bombings, I've filmed the starving children, I've shown you.
Exactly.
It's up to you what you do with it.
Exactly.
Yeah.
You can never say there is a lack of information or anything. I mean, we always say a picture speaks for a thousand words, right? There are thousands of pictures and videos coming out, so there's no excuse.
Next question. Lady here.
Hi there. On war crimes, there was a recent interview with an American doctor who said that himself and all his colleagues had treated patients, children, with sniper wounds. And I know, Victoria, in your reports that you were doing online, you said that there was your last trip, you had a big increase in injuries in the under fives. Can you sort of say why you think that's happening?
We were discussing it while we were out there. It's sort of that age group from sort of 5 to about 12. There seems to be a huge number of those children that are quite severely injured. So they have, over 40% burns, loss of limb, facial injuries. And one of the theories behind it is that the under 5s are often picked up by their parents and shielded, or somebody grabs them and runs with them. And the over 12s are pretty quick, so they can get themselves out of a situation and run away. So that age group from 5 to 12 is just unable to defend themselves, and that's why we see so many of them.
Thank you. Jeremy.
First of all, Richard, thank you very much for the film. It's absolutely brilliant, and I endorse everything you said about Al Jazeera and its ability to report on Gaza. Without them, we wouldn't know what's going on. The question I want to put really is this about the arms trade and British complicity in it. And I'm very pleased you had Matt Kennard in the film describing what's going on at RAF Akrotiri. I've raised this question with Starmer and others in Parliament, as have my colleagues, on a number of occasions, that Britain, as a signatory to both the ICJ and the ICC, is knowingly allowing flights to go from Akrotiri to Israel, which we believe are carrying the bombs that are being used to kill people, and that British companies are making crucial parts for the F-35 jets and other things, and so the war crimes that have been committed could not be committed without British assistance. Now, in legal terms, does that mean that a case can be taken against the British companies that are involved, or indeed against the British government for its complicity in this? Because Britain is clearly signed up fully to the ICC and the ICJ. The US is not, but Britain clearly is, and therefore logic tells me something could be done about that. By the way, we have a debate in Westminster Hall tomorrow afternoon, and Adnan and myself are going to be referring to the film, and also raise many of the issues being put here tonight. But thank you very much again to you and to all the panel for all that you do.
Thank you, Jeremy. Just before I pass that over, Matt Kennard's work for Declassified. Quite often at Al Jazeera, I'll be honest, we're drawing on wonderful work being done by independent journalists. Matt has done far more work than we were able to fit into the film. And there's a basic point about RAF Akrotiri, which is clearly an absolute hub facilitating this war. And we own RAF Akrotiri. Bizarrely, we own this little corner of Cyprus, and it's clearly playing a key role. And the answers the British government are giving, are not satisfactory. They clearly don't explain what's going on. But for the specific question, Jeremy, I'll hand over to you.
Sure. So I guess my answer is yes. At the International Criminal Court, individual criminal responsibility attaches not only to those who directly perpetrate crimes or who order them and oversee them, but also to those who aid, who abet, and who assist crimes as well. And the International Criminal Court, the ICC, and the other ad hoc tribunals, the case law has looked at the fact that aiding, abetting, assisting can be a number of things. That can be military support, economical support. It could be intelligence that's provided that allows for potentially crimes to be committed. And it also can be moral support and encouragement as well. So I think that anyone that's providing any of that kind of support needs to be aware. And the key thing is to evaluate whether it's another government or, as you raised, companies as well. Are they aware that crimes are being committed with the assistance that are being provided? Have they been put on notice? And once on notice, do they continue to provide that assistance or aid? And that's when there is a substantial evidence that can be brought forward in order to include individuals from other governments or from companies that could also be held responsible for crimes at the International Criminal Court. I do want to make a comment on one thing you did say, because you said that you referenced UK officials or companies as opposed to US officials or companies. At the ICC, the jurisdiction of the court over who perpetrates crimes does not flow from the nationality of the perpetrators, it's the territory on which those crimes are committed. So any national from any country, if they are either perpetrate crimes or assist in perpetrating crimes that occur in that territory, could potentially be prosecuted for those crimes. And those individuals don't even need to be on the territory. They can be outside of the territory. We see that with President Putin, who's outside of the territory of Ukraine. Ukraine is the territorial jurisdiction at the ICC. He's outside, and Russia's not a member state of the court. So we could see that with the United States as well. And the last thing I wanted to draw reference to is the fact that we should also remember that the UK as well has its own legislation that incorporates many of the crimes that are reflected in the Rome Statute into UK legislation, and therefore these crimes can be prosecuted in UK courts as well, and we should keep that in mind.
Thank you. Gentleman here.
Richard, one of the aspects of this conflict that I find so sad and at times makes me so angry is the utter, complete futility of it. I mean, the IDF campaign is little more than a barbaric, medieval, punitive raid, but it's just designed to inflict violence on the Palestinian people. There's absolutely no attempt that I can see to bring about a positive political outcome as far as Netanyahu is concerned. So my question for the panel, please, is what do they think the prospects are for some form of positive political solution to this long-running problem? And can I throw in a subset to that as, and where is Iran on that?
I didn't recognise you there. You had your haircut since I interviewed you.
I was also asking myself the same question. It's good to have you with us. Thank you for your inputs in the film. Honestly, before the war with Lebanon started, I felt personally, as Yumna, there is still hope that some kind of ceasefire agreement could be reached and this genocide would stop, these crimes would stop, because I know for a fact that the people, they can't take it anymore. They have endured, like, they've exceeded the highest amounts of sufferings that they can endure as human beings. And a lot of people in Gaza, if you speak to today, they will tell you, we just want to...
Egyptian Yani just caught. Sorry, just Yani is a very common Egyptian filler word, I suppose. Sorry, Yona, didn't mean to interrupt. You're doing very important work.
Die because we want to rest. We can't take it anymore. The fact that for Palestinians, committing suicide is prohibited is the only thing that is keeping them from dying at this point. And the fact that Israel has taken over the border and has completely destroyed it from the Palestinian side, it's closed it since May. And since the war started in Lebanon, it has been relentlessly ongoing in the Gaza Strip in different areas, especially in the north, where they are forcibly displacing the rest of the people. So in 3 hospitals over the past 3 days, they have been completely besieged: the Indonesian hospital, Kamal Adwan hospital, the Yemen Said hospital, and they are they're firing at these hospitals. They are forcibly evacuating the hospitals from the patients, the doctors, the displaced people. Jabalia refugee camp is under a siege now. Everyone who's trying to come in or out of the camp is being shot at. This has been going on for 3 days, and we're barely hearing about it even in the news, because the entire world has got their attention with what's happening in Lebanon. So that just shows you how much Israel is using that situation that is happening in Lebanon. And how I see it, honestly, is that Israel has no intention in militarily withdrawing from Gaza anytime soon. So we have 2 issues now: the right of return for the Palestinians who have evacuated from Gaza, including me and my family, and that's another Nakba, and the fact that Israel would withdraw. So I believe that the upcoming period, whatever kind of agreement that they will reach, will be with a military existence of Israel inside the Gaza Strip. The basic plan for Israel now is to displace as much Palestinians as possible from the Gaza Strip. And that plan is being implemented on 2 approaches. The first one is completely from the north in Gaza City, and then that's when there will be some kind of agreement reached with Egypt to open that border and to displace the rest of the Palestinians into the Sinai Desert. Now, at the end, I'm saying this from my experience of how the political situation is developing in Gaza and on the ground, and how I see it happening. I don't know if there is, and I hope that there would be a miracle that this plan is not implemented in this way.
Susan, would you like to answer that one as well?
Sometimes I feel frustrated engaging in conversation that assumes that our leaders are negotiating in good faith, or that what they're telling us they're doing, that they're actually doing. It's very clear, we have plenty of evidence that nobody, except maybe Hamas, were negotiating for a ceasefire. We can listen to what Israelis have been saying. Israel, for the past 20 years, has been talking about doing this. For 20 years, we have been, at least, as far as I can remember, they have been preoccupied with returning to Gaza, with the demographic threat of Palestinians having too many babies, of how to transfer large swaths of the population out, how to get rid of us, how to take more land. And Netanyahu himself has been angry ever since Ariel Sharon removed the settlements from Gaza. So it's been a personal thing for him. And the same thing, he has been upset about the withdrawal from Lebanon, because they feel like this is, God gave them this land, that it's theirs. So this has been the plan. And they have also said, we need a 9/11 moment to do what we need to do. And it's no coincidence that the conversation immediately after October 7th was this, soundbite of this is Israel's 9/11 moment. There is an enormous amount of natural gas off the coast of Gaza, worth trillions likely. It's in the northern part, the biggest field is, and so that's why they're really keen to take the north. As of yesterday, they have been issuing evacuation orders for the people who have withstood the past year of genocide in the north. And there are reports that they're literally just going through and killing people. So they want the north to be emptied. And as Jared Kushner said, they want that prime real estate, that shorefront real estate. So I think we need to listen to what they say when they talk to each other, not when they talk to us, because they're lying to us. Israel, I think the only thing that they are actually preoccupied with at this hour is how to make this entity that defies everything they say, they claim they believe in, that they hold dear, democracy and all the things I mentioned before, how to make this this thing that is antithetical to life, this racist, supremacist, settler colony, how to make it fit in a modern world. That is what they're preoccupied with. And in the United States, even, now we're starting to hear this very troubling rhetoric about how to adapt the First Amendment, the freedom of speech, how to adapt that to modern times to avoid what they call fake news. This is fake news in their mind. And all the independent media that where we get actual good political analyses and information is what they consider fake news. So these are the things that they're preoccupied with, and you can hear it because they talk to each other and they make statements and that are meant to talk to each other in conferences and things like that, not when they're talking to us. And I think that's where we can find what they're doing. That's where their aims are. And that's what we should be talking about.
I think here as well, now that Morgan McSweeney runs the country, we need to watch very, very carefully the legislation the Labour Party introduces about freedom of speech and controls on online information and everything. And you have to be very careful, as you're saying, about their rhetoric, about fake news and misinformation, because they are the ones who will define what it is. And I think a lot. I think it's still the case that in this country, I'm drawing here on the experience of the Labour files, which I think in time will be seen as very prescient. I think a lot of sort of Guardian readers haven't yet quite grasped how illiberal this government is. It's profoundly illiberal, and you have to be very careful on issues of civil liberties and so on. Anyway, next question. Over there.
Thank you so very much for really, really important work, and everybody on the panel for doing what you do. My question is regarding the role of the universities, the academics, and I've realized that in this context, the issue is not knowing. The issue is not understanding or the lacking critical consciousness. The issue is the political will, the courage to hold truth, to speak truth, and the issue of how anti-Semitism weaponized and self-preservation. Also funding from the UK government to do international development in my field. So what I've realized, even scholars who have made their careers talking about genocide, writing about genocide, or even institutions like Genocide Watch, that's one of the supposedly foremost bodies, have not spoken for Gaza in the way they should be. What do you speak to those audience? For them, it's not lack of information, but there is something more going on. What do we do? I, as an academic, how can we fight back in our own universities? Thank you.
Sure. Yeah, I mean, we've seen a lot of these scholars and institutions, and they're meant to talk about everything. This is about land acknowledgements and looking in retrospect. And when it's staring them in the face, people don't have the courage to do anything, because when it matters most is when is at this hour. It's not after it happens and then everybody can just oh, that was terrible and just and look back and lament and again do land acknowledgements and all the other absurd things that mean nothing, that have no material effect in the world. What's happening on campuses is terrifying. I don't know what's going on here, but in the United States, university spent the whole summer imagining the most absurd and ridiculous new protocols to punish students, to keep students in line, to make sure that nobody raises a Palestinian flag, to make sure to actually monitor what professors are teaching in their classes, to create new rules that they're calling temporary, to prevent students from gathering, in a certain, more than a certain number, to prevent them from being critical of Zionism. There's a couple of schools in the United States now who have made Zionism and Zionists a protected class. So in other words, if you criticize anyone for being a Zionist, it's like you are attacking them for being black or for being a woman or for being disabled. That's what protected class means in the United States. So Zionism is now a protected class at NYU and Columbia universities. And so they're putting all these new protocols in place to criminalize dissent, to criminalize free speech. And this is kind of what to the first question, what I meant by just pulling back the veil. I don't have a whole lot of faith. I know we've talked a lot about international law. I don't have a lot of faith in that, because at the end of the day, I do believe these are mechanisms that were put in place to serve Western interests. But now you have this settler colony that defies all norms and and the genie's out of the box. They're finally exposed. You finally know what we've always known. And they are going to, just like they're doing on campuses, they're going to do all manner of gyrations and new protocols and temporary measures and whatever it is to make sure that Israel is protected. Or if anything, maybe they'll throw somebody under the bus to pretend to do a theater of international law to show some show of accountability, but it won't really be. So I don't think that's where change is. I think change first and foremost is from Palestinians and it's from the resistance. And change comes from civil society. It comes from us. It comes from us really demanding and putting pressure. And I think that's where the pressure is coming from. It's coming from us because we know people. Not everybody's cowardly. People have been in the streets. People have been posting. People have been demanding. And I think that's where the answer is. We have to participate in this moment. Everybody has to. And I don't think it's any exaggeration to say that this moment, the outcome of this moment will determine world order for generations to come. And if Israel is allowed to get away with what it's trying to get away with, there will be no limits. Chris Hedges said it best. He said, "One day we will all be Gaza," and that's it. If they can show us a genocide, a Holocaust, if they can make us watch people running for their lives from one place to another, carrying everything they can possibly carry, traumatizing children to no end, watching brains spilling out of people's heads day after day, people being buried alive day in and day out. They can make us watch that, and then we fall in line. All you're signaling to them is your acquiescence, that you have no power. You relinquish everything you have when you accept this reality. And I think, to me, that's the bigger danger. I think that's the acquiescence or the apathy of the masses is a bigger danger than them, because I don't expect anything from leaders. That's not where the moral universe exists. It exists with us. And that's, if nothing else, that's the point I want to make, is that the answer is with us. International law has a place, and there are so many tools to liberation, but ultimately it's in mass mobilization.
I'm afraid this is going to have to be the last question as well. Yes, gentlemen up there.
Hi, yeah. Thank you guys all so much, and Richard for the work on the documentary. Victoria, as of today, I was just checking, the death toll in Lebanon has surpassed 2,000 people. And so far we've seen people like Dr. HasanAbi go back there to help out as well. Do you see yourself going there sometime soon? And does the health community fear a similar devastation to the one we've seen in Gaza so far?
I think that going to help out in Lebanon has definitely been an option for a lot of the UK medics. One of the reasons why so few UK medics have gone to Gaza since the Rafah border closed is due to the restrictions that COGAT put out, saying that if you were part of an emergency medical team, you have to deploy for a minimum time of a month. And that's very difficult for a lot of useful doctors in the UK who are actually working in the NHS and carrying out sort of trauma care. They all have jobs. It's so hard to take a month out. It will exceed your annual leave. You're talking about taking unpaid leave. That's at the discretion of your employer. So that has cut our volunteers at Ideals. We basically had on our books in February 105 people that were prepared to deploy, and by May it was just myself and Graham. And that was just through circumstances that I was changing jobs and Graham is semi-retired, so we could go, but nobody else could get the leave agreed for a month. No, I don't think. I think that it's intentional that COGAT have said you have to go in for a month. Yes, I do think that's intentional. Just as I think that they've said you can't return if you're Palestinian, because a huge number of emergency medical teams at the moment consisted of Palestinians from some form or another. Most of the Palestinian doctors I know around the world came out to support Gaza and were there in the December, the January, the February, and then suddenly they couldn't get back in. And this is what happened to Ghassan, it happened to Arbeid Mokhalalati, it's happened to so many prominent surgeons that they've just been excluded. So yeah, I think that was purpose. Again, I think it's on purpose that you can't go unless you can secure a guest house for your team. You have to have a driver 24 hours. You have to have an evacuation plan. You have to have satellite phone. You have to have a Garmin. You're only allowed to take one suitcase with you. It has to weigh 23 kilograms. You're not allowed to take more than one phone, more than one laptop. They go through your belongings and they're expecting you to take water for 3 days because you have to support yourselves. So all of this has been designed to stop doctors going.
So just to be clear, who is it that's drawing up those rules?
COGAT.
Which is who, sorry?
Israel.
Israel, that's all right. Right. That makes sense. Okay, well, listen, thank you. I'm afraid that's all we've got time for. I'm sorry. Thank you all so much for coming. Just a final thought, please share the film, because, God knows the British media is not going to mention it, the American media is not going to mention it, so share the film, talk about the film, and when you share it, write about it as well, because it's the only way this gets spread through word of mouth. Thank you.
Thank you.
I'll try to find the link to the film to include it below, right under this video.
The definition of the contours.
And this is also from Middle East Eye, still from a month ago. We can try to stop the hell on earth, ICC prosecutor Karim Khan.
The definition of the contours of the law is interesting to lawyers. But what drives the law? It is our empathy and our sense of humanity. I've been honored to meet Jewish families after the 7th of October. Most recently on the 7th of October and just yesterday, but also in Kibbutzim. And there was one child, Keffiyeh. He was 10 months old with shocking red hair, taken from his home, a place of safety. And how many pictures have we all seen of babies in Gaza with faces blown off and limbs blown off, parents holding them or them crying, where are their parents? And a realization that children young, do they know? We have children, we have nieces or nephews, we have family. Do children know what is a passport? Do children and babies know what is nationality? Do they know even religion? Unless we can see past these accoutrements that are part of a world that we wish was civilized and proclaim sometimes it is becoming ever more civilized, and see the humanity that should drive the law, we were going to be condemned. So ultimately it comes back to this: we can do better to investigate, to plot, to present. Who will enforce? This is for states. Is law for power or is law for people? Is it children or is it interests? Is it for right or is it for wrong? Now, this will be condemned, of course, as being overly simplistic, but is it? Is it simplistic? Why is it simplistic? Do we choose light or do we choose darkness? Is it going to be never again? Is it going to be time and time again? Is this place going to be honored? The victims, the pictures, the testimonies that are represented by the Nuremberg Tribunal and the Yugoslav Tribunal and Rwanda and Sierra Leone and the ICC, are these to honor the victims, the promise that they give us their accounts not out of some voyeurism, giving jobs to lawyers for doctoral theses to be written, but in a quest to ensure never again becomes a reality, because it is a reality. And it comes down to this as well, I think. When we weep, when we see pictures and stories, do we accept, do states accept, this must be the price of doing business for economic advancement and for strategic interest? Is all of this, suffering of children, the price of doing business? And if not, it could stop today if we viewed those children of different hues and colors and creeds and languages with different hopes and dreams as our children. So much of this would stop far more quickly. So the legal aspect is clear. It requires a will, a determination, an insistence, a groundswell of opinion, not from lawyers and judges, but from all people around the world, to demand in the name of God, in the name of humanity, in the name of the continuation of the species, stand up for children. Because if we together feel stronger, together we can make sure children are seen, we can make sure children are heard, and in the name of our future, we can try to stop the hell on earth that is their experience as we speak right now. Thank you so much.
While Karim Khan mentioned it himself, this will be seen as overly simplistic. If you want to look at the root cause of all of this, sure, there's an aspect of, racism and dehumanization and that and just bigotry and hate. Nothing new, nothing that we haven't seen humans do since the beginning of humans. But there is a new malicious aspect, and I don't want to say new as if it's something that just started recently. It is new in terms of just historically, in terms of humans deciding that this is the path they're going to choose to go down. It's new in terms of how recently this started on a human scale. It is capitalism. It is just unfettered greed. It is more land, more for me, and hey, these are not from my in-group, so I can take from them. Whether I'm going to take their land, whether I'm going to take their resources, whatever the fuck I want to take. So imperialism was the natural extension of capitalism. You're going to have people be like, okay, I want more and more and more for me, and I don't care about the other. I don't care about the group. I've othered them already. I don't see them as human. So what's the issue with taking more of their land or killing their people? Because I've already decided they're not like us. They're not like me or my in-group. I can use whatever ways to differentiate that, but if you're going to have a system that will always and always prioritize the bottom line, prioritize profit over people, you're going to get insane exploitation of the other. You're going to other people just so it's easier to do this. You can only do this if you other them. You can only do this if you don't see them as human anymore, and you can get something out of taking from them. It is going to be, I want their resources, whether it's oil or gold or whatever the fuck, which is why the entire Middle East has been ravaged, which this applies to more than just the Middle East, obviously. But the Middle East is the clearest example of it. So yes, Israel is a US outpost in the Middle East. It is the unsinkable airship carrier. It is the foothold into the Middle East to secure the imperial core's interest.
I need to preface what I'm.
I mean, I know this sounds simplistic, but I mean, and it is. I don't think I can give as good of an analysis as others, but I can share my perspective, and that's about it. This is from James O'Brien on LBC a month ago. My God, I'm not making a dent in the amount of content I want to get through. So let's keep it at 1.5 speed, captions on, and highest quality available. Israel has been given a free pass to continue the carnage. Yes, it has. Yes, it undoubtedly has.
About to say with two observations. The first is what we call a trigger warning. I know some people pretend not to understand what that means or to understand why it's important, but I'm about to share with you some details of scenes in Gaza that are, I mean, for many people, close to unbearable. And I put myself among that number, to be honest with you. And the second thing I need to do is to remind you that Israel continues to keep foreign journalists out of Gaza. So we rely upon much less detailed footage and reportage than we would otherwise. The question of why Israel keeps foreign journalists out of Gaza is probably answered by the events that I'm about to relay to you. And the fact that not having foreign journalists there leaves at least some room for carefully cultivated doubt and denial. So the Al-Aqsa hospital has already been reduced to such a condition that many people are sheltering in tents outside the hospital, and those tents have now been attacked. Some of the footage appears to show people burning alive while attached to IV drips. This is 2024. This is the 21st century. This is an ally of the United Kingdom. There's also been a school attacked. And the Israeli policy that is now under discussion, or that is now being contemplated as something that may actually be underway, is the brainchild of a former general and effectively involves treating everybody as though they are, well, terrorists. And I'm going to quickly tell you what the least intelligent analysis in this entire hideous field involves. And it is the suggestion that because Israel is possessed of an almighty war machine, if it really wanted to embark upon ethnic cleansing or, God forbid, genocide, then it would have done so already. This displays an ignorance, not only of military history, but also of basic moral decline, so profound that you wonder how anybody, even offering up such a thought, could tie their own shoelaces. No atrocity in history happened in 24 hours. The build-up to atrocity is slow and hideous. Because, to use an utterly inadequate analogy, it's the mother of all exercises in boiling a frog. So you don't go in on day one and start burning people alive in tents while they're attached to IV drips. You claim on day one that you're trying to rescue hostages, or that you're only going to attack terrorists, or that you're taking enormous care to spare civilians. It's only by day 370-odd that you can undertake this sort of thing with some confidence that America, and to a lesser but still significant extent.
I disagree with James on this. I don't think it took a year for this to happen. I agree. It is the frog boiling in the pot, but it didn't take 1 year for Israel to dehumanize Palestinians and make the world look away when they see scenes like this. It took years, lots of years, and it wasn't Israel alone. It took years of dehumanizing an entire group of people. All Arabs are barbaric. They're all dangerous. They're all violent. They're all fanatical, and somehow they're all Muslim, despite, even if you want to say that's some disqualifying factor for their humanity, which it isn't. Again, I know we live in a post 9/11 world, and I understand 9/11 did a lot of heavy lifting. I don't think 9/11 is where this started. 9/11 was a catalyst. It sped it up, and it made it easier for people to dehumanize Arabs and to see them as these violent, dangerous, barbaric people, if they even consider them people at all. But this took much longer, and this came out of a mentality that never went away. I say that in World War II, the Nazis lost, but fascism lives on. Fascism lived on far beyond the Nazis. Fascism lived on before the Nazis, and fascism is alive and well today. It is not one fight that you get into and it's over. It's a continuous fight. Fascism can rear its ugly head anytime, any day, and in any society. You need to be on the lookout for it. You need to be aware of what it looks like, how it communicates, and how it propagandizes, and how to fight against it. The apartheid in South Africa did not come down in a day, and it took effort from the entire global community. When it became untenable for South Africa to continue apartheid, then, and only then, did they start taking steps to end it. The Nazis would have never relented if they weren't defeated militarily, if they still had wiggle room. Israel is no different. Only when it becomes completely untenable for them to continue down this path will they stop, or will they take steps even in the right direction. The Union in America did not willingly give up their slaves. It took a civil war to do that. And I guarantee you, if the Union had won, the Union? No, it's the South and the Union. My mistake. The South. The Confederacy, it was the Confederacy and the Union. My mistake. I confused the two. The Confederacy. If the South had any chance to hold on to their slaves, they would have. And to an extent, the US still has legal slavery, but that's a topic for another day. When people have become so fascistic, you're not going to get them away from it easily. They didn't arrive there through logic. You will not get them out of there through logic. It cannot be an option for people to continue down this bloody, murderous path.
Extent, the United Kingdom will stay silent. The second stupidest contribution to this conversation is the idea that if somehow the remaining hostages were released, Israel would stop attacking Lebanon, where there aren't any hostages, and Gaza, because Benjamin Netanyahu has made it absolutely clear that that is simply not the case. And anybody following these matters closely will tell you that the families of the remaining hostages are among the least supportive Israelis. Many of the families of the remaining hostages are among the least supportive Israelis of Benjamin Netanyahu's administration. But make no mistake, it is an administration that still enjoys great support in Israel, even as people object and protest to what is going on. The democratic nature of the country means, effectively, that they wouldn't be able to continue in power without a mandate from the electorate, and that mandate remains. And that's, where we are now. I don't want it to sound like I'm trivializing anything, but I think this is a moment where everybody can actually agree with each other. The hospital courtyard where people were sleeping was preceded by an attack upon a school sheltering families. That was in Nusrat. The school today was scheduled to become a polio vaccination site. Philippe Lazzarini, who is the Commissioner General of UNRWA, describes another night of horror. Tents up in flames due to an airstrike on the courtyard of Al-Aqsa hospital where people sought shelter. A school hit with 20 people reported killed. That's where the polio vaccination campaign was due to be conducted today. That has now been cancelled at that school, at that site. He describes Gaza as a never-ending hell. All of this must not become the new norm. Humanity must prevail. Is it too late? Has it already become the new norm? In Lebanon, as you know, United Nations troops have come under attack. There are reports of Israeli tanks moving into United Nations compounds, and as that contributor to the news just explained, that is akin to a sort of conscious, if you like, attacks on civilians, and it is something that is being undertaken with, and here's the word that I think describes most of what we are describing today, it is being undertaken with apparent impunity. Some countries, of course, continue to at least make the right noises, most notably Spain and latterly Ireland as well, who have troops in the space affected, but of course America, crucially, and the United Kingdom, relevantly, continue to essentially, I can't say turn a blind eye, but engage in complicity while also condemning. And without proper condemnation, of course, Netanyahu will carry on. This is a statement from UNIFIL, which is the United Nations interim force in Lebanon. Last night, a peacekeeper. Just think about that word for a minute. A peacekeeper. UNIFIL's headquarters in Nakara was hit by gunfire due to ongoing military activity nearby. He underwent surgery at our Nakora hospital to remove the bullet and is currently stable. We do not yet know the origin of the fire. Also last night, buildings in our UN position in Ramya sustained significant damage due to explosions from nearby shelling. We remind all actors of their obligations to ensure the safety and security of UN personnel and premises, including avoiding combat activities near UNIFIL positions. I think we've reached the point now where, and of course the condemnation of various United Nations organisations and United Nations institutions by members of the Israeli administration and members of the Israeli government is well underway. So I don't know how much you have listened to our coverage of this over the last year and a bit, but the point at which the really terrible stuff moved into focus was the point at which people who rang me would not answer a question about how many deaths would be too many deaths. Now, I appreciate it was a very simplistic question, but you had people in the Israeli cabinet who were prepared essentially to suggest that there was no such thing as an innocent Arab. They would certainly claim that there was no such thing as an innocent life in Gaza. The ludicrous and frankly insulting insistence that great measures are taken to spare civilians should never really have been allowed to see the light of day. But it didn't just see the light of day, it got rolled up so many flagpoles in the United Kingdom and the United States that it became actually a sort of accepted analysis of a situation despite being completely at odds with all available statistical evidence. But that to me, and I apologise for reducing it down to the conversations that we've had, but that's all I've done. That's all I've done. Is have conversations. And God, it feels inadequate, doesn't it, when I'm reporting to you that I have seen footage this morning of people burning alive while apparently still attached to IV facilities, IV equipment in tents to which they have been consigned as a consequence of the hospital in the courtyard of which these tents have been erected being either completely unfit for purpose due to previous bombings or utterly inundated. So the idea that inability to answer the question of how much looked like too much, how much would constitute, if you like, disproportionality. How far did entitlement reach? And I had this terrifying fear, and I told you at the time, that people didn't have the guts to say out loud what some members of the Israeli cabinet were saying, that they didn't really think there was a limit on how many people could die or be killed by the Israeli Defense Force. You could hear it sometimes in the voice. You could hear the fury about even being asked the question. You'd simply say, well, how many is too many? It's 40,000 now, or it's 20,000 now. Would 30,000 be too many? And this, to my mind, utterly spurious notion that you're going to eradicate Hamas or get the hostages released by killing tens of thousands of civilians And when perhaps the bloodlust was no longer being satisfied by what was going on in Gaza, they turn their attention to Lebanon and start killing civilians there, and up to and including, it would appear, United Nations peacekeepers, at least attacking. So is this a moment, and this is what I mean about the fear of sounding as if I'm trivialising it, is this a moment where finally everyone can actually agree that Benjamin Netanyahu's administration is embarked upon a course of utterly detached impunity? They care not a jot what the rest of the world may think. They don't care about the United Nations. They don't care about their allies in the United States or indeed in the United Kingdom. They don't care about the civilian death toll. They don't care about the burning children. They don't care about anything, really, except continuing this, I don't know what you would call it now, carnage? Dozens of Israeli soldiers were hurt after Hezbollah said it struck a military base with a swarm of drones. So, I mean, again, looking at the early coverage of the events of the last 24 hours, it looks at the moment like Hezbollah is making more effort to confine its attacks to military sites than Israel is. Just in the context of that attack, obviously the missiles continue to fly into northern Israel. So a squadron of attack drones crossed the border into northern Israel. And I will get now probably 5,000 text messages accusing me of imbalance for pointing out that nobody died. Nobody has been filmed burning alive. No children are now being mourned.
Look, I cannot say that Israel doesn't care about its allies or what the international community thinks. It is well aware of what the international community thinks. It's able to propagandize to its people and tell them that, hey, any criticism towards us is just anti-Semitism. They just hate us for no reason. They hate us because we're Jewish. That it has nothing to do with what our actions are. You know, we call ourselves the Jewish state, and we do this in the name of Judaism. So when they criticize our war crimes, they're not really criticizing the war crimes. They're just anti-Semitic, which is ridiculous. And it ensures that its allies are well taken care of. That is in the UK, that is in Germany, and that is most importantly in the US. Those three countries provide Israel with military aid. That's all that matters. And these three countries have been adamantly supportive of Israel. They have never backed away, regardless of what it has done, regardless of how many innocent civilians they kill, regardless of what war crimes they commit. They always stood by Israel, and they, as far as I'm concerned, always will. They are ideologically committed to it. So it doesn't matter what the rest of the world thinks. It doesn't matter when everyone condemns Israel's actions, as long as the US is there to veto any resolution that would, impose a ceasefire or try to bring, some sort of peace agreement. It doesn't matter. As long as you have this imbalanced system of, hey, we can veto whatever the fuck we want, you're not going to get anywhere.
Warned by displaced parents. So is this the moment at which everybody can agree that Benjamin Netanyahu's government is completely without, what's the word I want? Completely without, what's the word I want? Conscience? Pause? Unstoppable? There is literally nothing in place in this context now that could be meaningfully described as a deterrent to continuing the killing, because countries have called for it. Individuals have called for it. Allies have called for it. People in Israel have called for it. The point now is that every death, you can no longer pretend that it's a question of proportionality or that it's a question of ebb and flow. We have reached the point that everybody feared. Everybody who has insisted for the last year and a bit that they feel no more or less horror at the thought of a burning Israeli than they do at the thought of a burning Palestinian. There is no hierarchy of human value for so many people who are not personally invested in the region, the politics, or the war. And the greatest fear of people like them, people like me, the greatest fear has always been that extremist attitude inserted into the very heart of government by Benjamin Netanyahu as an exercise entirely in self-preservation is now just government policy. We will carry on. We can't even tell you why we're killing anymore. Oh, we're trying to eradicate Hezbollah, or we're trying to eradicate Hamas, or we're trying to get the hostages released. How does burning people alive while they're hooked up to IV facilities, and if that in any way turns out not to be true, the reason why it's been so widely reported today is because Israel won't let journalists into the region from overseas. This is just the point, isn't it? I mean, it's almost as if the debate is over. Israel is going to do whatever it wants. Israel is going to display absolutely zero compassion or compunction in its continuing carnage, in its continuing killing of civilians in Lebanon, peacekeeping, it would appear, forces and civilians in Gaza. Israel has gone completely rogue. And the weird thing is that I don't think there's any debate to have here. Because you can't, with a straight face, claim that Israel is demonstrating compassion, or Israel is demonstrating restraint, or Israel is still enjoying proportionality. This is now gone, and because it's a boiled frog, because it's a slow increment. I mean, it's only a year and a bit since I was sitting here trying to explain to you why nobody could expect Israel not to respond in an incredibly violent fashion, why Hamas had handed Israel the right to exact appalling revenge upon territories that sheltered Hamas. And I believed it then, and I still believe it now. But my God, we passed the point of proportionality. We passed the point of entitlement. We passed the point of retaliation. God knows how long ago. Be a different point for many people. For me, probably, the point at which my alarms started ringing loudest was the point at which they started bombing the places to which they told the people to move to stay safe. An experience that Lebanese civilians are now sharing in, following the experiences in Gaza. 19 minutes after 10 is the time. That's it, isn't it? This is the point at which no one can pretend anymore that there is any break upon Netanyahu's murderous ambitions. There is no compassion to be exercised. There is no compunction to be applied. This is it. I don't know how it ends. I don't know the point in asking how it ends. I just know that the Israeli army is going to carry on butchering civilians on a scale that is almost beyond belief, because they have established without any doubt whatsoever that if there are any people in the world capable of stopping them, it would be Joe Biden, and he is not going to do it. So that's where we are.
No, he is not. No, he's not. He said it himself. He's a Zionist. And that is a dirty word, as it should be. It should be treated and looked at with the same disgust as the word Nazi, because that is exactly what it is. Oh. This is a video by Zeteo Media. Check them out. Mehdi, amazing. The normalization of mass slaughter of Arabs. Yes. Mehdi and Owen on Israel's attack on Lebanon, I think is what it was meant to say. Closed captions on, 1.5 speed, and highest quality.
I'm Mehdi Hassan.
I'm Owen Jones.
And we are too outspoken. Owen, good to see you. It's been a while.
Yeah, it has been a while. I've missed you, Mehdi.
We took a summer break.
We did. It was quite an eventful summer. I think for you, I think this is quite a change for you, actually, which is the first time you've been in a room with someone who isn't a dead-eyed sociopath, if I can write my own reviews.
Is that because I'm speaking to you shortly after I spoke to a certain former Israeli spokesman in New York?
You get all the best gigs, don't you? Some of the worst people on earth, I would say, at this point. Who's next? Is it, I don't know, Freddie Krueger? Who's going to...
Not as bad as Freddie Krueger.
No,
yeah.
I think less charm.
Less charm.
Less charisma. Less appeal.
Actually, some of these people do have charisma. It's just what they do with it. And what we talk about, what we do with it is a good segue to what I want to talk to you about today. Since we last spoke in the summer, things have only gotten worse in the Middle East, as you and I were warning they would. Mm. And the folks with the dead eyes have been making the case for new war, new genocide, new killing of civilians, just in a different part of the Arab world. This time, Lebanon. We're speaking this week after a horrific massacre on Monday. 550 people killed, at least. We don't know how many are still under the rubble. In Lebanon, in southern Lebanon, we're talking about 50 kids killed, over 90 women killed. It's insane. I was reading the New York Times. It is maybe the single day record for number of people killed for many years in a conflict. And yet very little outrage here in London, where we are, or in DC, where I normally am.
No, of course
not. One of the
not.
deadliest days in the history of Lebanon, and Lebanon has a hideous history of brutality, including, of course, brutality by the Israeli state. I mean, the UN Secretary General, he's saying this could be another Gaza. I mean, you know, when we're at that point, you know, what we're talking about here is the normalization of the mass slaughter of Arabs. The world is being told in no uncertain terms by Western governments and much of the Western media that Arab life means absolutely nothing. I mean, the fact hundreds of Lebanese civilians, and this is, I think, just to show this kind of normalization. So we're thinking back to when Israel invaded Lebanon back in 1982, and US Republican President Ronald Reagan got on the phone to the then Israeli Prime Minister Menachem Begin and said, this is a Holocaust. You have to stop this. Yep. Now, the US Democratic President Joe Biden, I presume, is not on the phone to his Israeli counterpart, yelling down the phone to stop this Holocaust. And that was, you know, I mean, we've seen these terrible Israeli atrocities in Lebanon before, but the fact is, in Gaza, we've now had nearly a year, and we've had some of the worst atrocities of the 21st century live streamed to us every single day. And you would imagine now there's some sort of, well, whoa here, come on, this has to be contained. There isn't any of that.
It's the opposite, right? It's if you're the Israelis, you're like, well, they didn't stop us for a year in Gaza. Why not do Lebanon? And Joe Biden is a feckless president who hasn't stopped us in Gaza. There was reporting a few months back, which was they go into Rafah, then he's going to be really mad. And they went into Rafah, and he wasn't. And then there was reporting that, well, if they escalate the war in the region, America's not going to support them on that. And now they're saying, oh, by the way, if you need extra weapons for your new war in Lebanon, if Iran is provoked into entering the war, if et cetera, we've got your back. And if you're the Israelis, it's kind of like, well, why wouldn't you?
No, exactly. They've been given carte blanche to do exactly what they want. I mean, it's striking as well. Some Israeli outriders, in fact, Israeli ministers are talking of, well, we've shown huge restraint. Even the BBC, which frankly its coverage has been often appalling, but they point point out that 80% of the cross-border attacks between Lebanon and Israel have been perpetrated by Israel. And obviously, if we're looking at the death toll, I mean, we're talking about 99% of those being killed.
I mean, just on Monday, I just want to put this into context, half as many people were killed as were killed on October the 7th, right? And these are civilians. Let's be clear. The health minister in Lebanon said these are almost all, if not all, civilians.
And he's not Hezbollah or anything.
He's not.
Like
They can't play the
no.
Hamas-controlled health ministry game in Lebanon. He's a neutral doctor, not affiliated with any particular party.
A technocrat, he's Sunni, he's not.
But nobody cares. I mean, this is a frustration. And I think, I said this in New York at the debate I was at the weekend. We have opened the gates of hell well beyond Gaza. We've basically said anywhere around the world, you can do this, you can get away with it. The regional implications, you and I and others have been warning since October 7th. If this turns into a regional war, it's a moral disaster, a legal disaster, a geopolitical disaster. And of course, for Joe Biden and Kamala Harris, it's a domestic political disaster. Do you really think that they're going to win an election if this escalates even more and America's dragged into a war with Iran? Which is clearly what
No, they will not.
Netanyahu's buying time for Trump.
Netanyahu can't do any of this without knowing that he's got the US behind him, come what may. He can only escalate this because he's got the world's only hegemon behind him. And
he's about to screw over.
Well, that's exactly it. He's calling their bluff. He knows, he can see in Gaza he's got away with everything, that the red line that the red lines he set in the past are meaningless, that all Joe Biden will do occasionally is hand-wringing, which he knows is for a domestic political audience. He knows that isn't, for Netanyahu actually.
And Trump somehow will be worse. I can't even imagine. Like, that's the West Bank gone. And hey, prepare for a war with Iran, prepare for, a significantly wider regional war. It's going to be Israel lobbing bombs at Iran, Iran going to strike Saudi Arabia, oil prices around the world are going to be affected. You're going to have Israel obviously trying to take over all of Palestine, going to take over northern or southern Lebanon, southern Syria, maybe Iraq. I don't know where this ends. And it's going to extend further and further if you keep giving this fire more air.
Actions matter, not words. And again, the other similarity is Israel's not being subtle about its intent. From the very beginning in Gaza, and this is why we need to listen to them carefully, there was never, and Raz Sigal, the Israeli-American professor, said it's almost unprecedented in history for a state to be so open about their intent. They said from the beginning, we're going to raise Gaza to the face of the earth, we're going to impose collective punishment. They did that. This time, for example, the Israeli Minister of Education, on television, he said, we are going to annihilate Lebanon. It will be wiped out.
There's no difference, he said, between the Lebanese people and Hezbollah.
He said exactly that. And Yoav Gallant last year, the Minister of Defense, who has a request for an arrest warrant for war crimes and crimes against humanity from the Chief Prosecutor of the International Criminal Court, he said last year that it will be the civilians of Lebanon who will pay the price. He said, we know what we've done in Gaza, we can do to Beirut. We've got to take them seriously because those blood-curdling threats were put into practice in Gaza.
Yeah, and the Minister for Diaspora Affairs, a super right-wing dude who loves to hang out with Marine Le Pen, he put a tweet out with weird maps showing the redrawing of borders going back 100 years of Syria and Lebanon. He said Lebanon's not a real country. He said the enemy Shia population should be driven from the border. We should have a buffer zone, which just basically means we're going to take your territory. Very grand geopolitical language. A buffer zone is a new word for just we're going to take your land.
Which is ethnic cleansing. They're going to depopulate.
Yeah. But funny, when Medvedev and Putin say this about Ukraine, it's not a real country. We deserve a buffer zone. We need to annex this part of territory for security. The Western governments lose their minds. Western journalists rightly lose their minds. And just as you say, I think it goes back to your original point. It's Arab life in an Arab country. It doesn't really matter.
I mean, that contrast. I mean, this
is
racism
at the heart.
Well, exactly, and that's the fact that Ukraine's happening simultaneously provides
forever.
It's a control. I mean, in a laboratory control where, and the world can see this. The world has seen how the West has responded when it comes to the pronouncements by senior Russian figures, even just Russian TV channel shows where they speak.
But there's a like for like with Israeli channels.
I mean, I spoke to what's his name? He's a courageous Israeli journalist. Why have I just forgotten? Gideon Levy, and he pointed out that actually it's worse, those Israeli television segments, and you'll get there on national television, including Israeli ministers talking about collective punishment, and that's what they've enacted here. And I just think the point of Arab life there is the West is going to reap a bitter harvest for generations to come because, in the age of social media where people can see these atrocities, they can see Israeli soldiers throwing the bodies of Palestinians off roofs like they're ISIS. They see all this, what's happened to children, the slaughter, the wiping out Gaza. They can see this now happening in Lebanon, and they see just hand-wringing it best from the West, in contrast to Ukraine, and that's going to radicalize people for generations.
American intelligence agencies are already saying this. You don't need to be an intelligence official to know this. It's obvious. Hosni Mubarak, the Egyptian dictator, who no one was a fan of, actually did say something very wise in 2003 when Bush and Blair were going to Iraq. He said, you're opening the gates of hell. You're going to create 1,000 bin Ladens. He was right about the Iraq War. Gaza has now become Iraq on steroids. So God help us all in the coming years. And by the way, should just plug, since you mentioned Israeli TV shows and how they speak about Palestinians, we did a documentary called Israel's Real Extremism, which covers some of this and interviews some of those TV hosts. So I would urge you, those of you who have not seen it, to check it out on the Zeteo website. Oh, and before we run out of time, we've got to switch tack and talk about what's happening here in the UK. It's been a couple of months. When we last met, Labour had just been elected. England was still in the World Cup. Lots has changed since
those heavy days
in the European Championships, I should say. Sorry. It's been a quite a busy couple of months for UK media and politics. Just to quickly start, Labour government did a good job on arms licences by restricting some licences?
Well, look, let's be clear. They suspended 8%, and the bar really is on the floor, isn't it?
The bar was zero.
The bar was zero. And a really crucial point is Britain supplies crucial components for the F-35 jets, which are raining death and destruction on Gaza. They're all excluded from any of this. And by the way, when they did their 8%, based on legal advice, so actually they're legally obliged to actually suspend arms sales to Israel, they basically just bent over backwards apologising for it, saying Israel's this great ally and all the rest of it. And that I think, is a striking example of the political antennae of this government. Because if you look at the polling shows the vast majority of Britons want a total arms embargo. Over half of the British public want Netanyahu arrested for war crimes. The vast majority think Israel is committing war crimes. And if you look now at where Labour's at generally, I mean, they won this landslide because of our electoral system. They didn't have any enthusiasm. They got 33.7% of the vote in the lowest turnout of British adults in the history of British democracy. And they've plummeted since. They're now, I mean, Keir Starmer is, according to one poll, less popular than Rishi Sunak, who is the defeated Conservative leader after a cataclysmic defeat for the Tories after the worst government in our history.
To put that in further context for those watching abroad, Sunak, of course, took over from Liz Truss, who was defeated by a lettuce.
By a lettuce.
Okay.
God bless the lettuce.
Labour Party conference. Keir Starmer giving a big speech. Heckled. What happened?
You know, he got heckled by someone who, Keir Starmer's talking about children in Britain, you know, talking about improving child's well-being with no policies to back it up. But someone heckled, what about the children in Gaza? He was then manhandled and thrown out. But the thing, what Keir Starmer's response was really instructive. He laughed, he started laughing and said, this guy's obviously got a pass for the 2019 Labour conference when Jeremy Corbyn was leader. But I should add that at the time, Keir Starmer was at the conference. I know because I interviewed him at 2019 conference.
Corbyn loyalist.
He was in the shadow cabinet. He was a shadow minister, saying he was 100% behind Jeremy Corbyn. For me, that was borderline sociopathic. You're being heckled about slaughtered children, and
rather than engage. And as to be fair, Kamala Harris got heckled in America. First she got mad, and the next time they did it, she actually engaged and said, look, we're working for a ceasefire, which sadly they're not. But at least she engaged with the protest. To just mock the idea of protest is something a Jeremy Corbyn supporter would do, rather than anyone with a conscience.
What's he saying? He's saying, because he said, we've changed the party. What's he trying to say? We don't have a soul anymore. We don't, oh, you care about Palestinian kids, do you? We'll get a time machine because we don't care about Palestinian kids anymore. What's he trying to say? I mean, there was another, Rachel Reeves, the...
she was heckled also.
She was the chancellor.
I saw that they physically pulled him out.
I interviewed this guy. So she's the finance minister, the chancellor, and he was dragged out by his throat by someone it turns out was a Labour councillor, a Labour local politician, and he's got these red marks all over his throat. I think he should take legal action. And again,
That's what social democracy looks like these days.
Well, clearly. I mean, there's a long history of that, to be honest, with Social Democrats being pretty brutal. But yeah, I mean, it just shows, again, you know, this is a Labour Party, a Labour government, I think, without a soul. They are still providing arms to Israel. They haven't, you know, with Lebanon now, for example, Keir Starmer is saying that Britain should evacuate and all parties should de-escalate and come back from the brink.
He has not condemned them.
No condemning.
Hundreds of civilians.
What does that tell us? And again, that complicity continues. The fact, you know, yeah, the bar was on the floor because, for example, Rishi Sunak, they were trying to stop the International Criminal Court's arrest warrant process with a vexatious...
Which, to be fair, the Labour government has stopped trying to stop.
Exactly. But
what would they do? I mean, again, we've been hearing this for weeks now, that warrants are coming, the Chamber's looking at it. There have been lots of attempts to delay it from the Germans, from the Brits, from the Americans who aren't even signatories to the court. Now, the US administration, Joe Biden's ambassador to the UN, went out of her way to say, we will not arrest Benjamin Netanyahu if he's here. She seemed to think that arrest warrants were already out. They weren't. They're not. We're still waiting. But obviously the US is not a signatory to the ICC. To be fair, they don't have to. I mean, they should, but they don't have to. UK is. UK has been a strong supporter of the Rome Statute and the International Criminal Court throughout history since it was created. You wrote a really good piece for The Guardian, which was kind of an imaginary speech for Keir Starmer that I read. And one of the lines in there was like, we will execute arrest warrants. What's Keir Starmer going to do if the ICC comes out and says, okay, we approve arrest warrants? Where's the British government?
To be fair, I think they absolutely will say we'll abide by the ICC. I mean,
so just BB and Sarah can't come shopping at night?
Oh no, they can't be off to Harrods. But they've been briefing. It was this ridiculous article. Well, not the article wasn't ridiculous. I'm not attacking my colleague in The Guardian, but the briefing was ridiculous because it said the British government was dreading the ICC arrest warrants because they hadn't prescribed the Iranian Revolutionary Guard Corps, and people would say that's inconsistent. What does that have to do with anything? What are they talking about? It's just whataboutery, isn't it?
Well, one of the great lines at the debate I did with Elon Levy in Saturday was when he said, "Oh, the ICC is just picking on Israel." I was like, "You do know that he put out 5 arrest warrants requests, 3 for Hamas, 2 for Israel." I mean, that's not picking on Israel. That's actually giving Israel a pass. Saying, well, fewer for you than for the other group. So it's just always...
Although one of those is now dead, I suppose. So
he's already killed the guy before he could get a trial. Some of us like the idea of trying people on all sides.
Yeah, he should have been tried.
I have I always have to tell Americans to get mad at me. I have the unpopular view that maybe you should have tried Bin Laden, not killed him in the middle of the night in a secret raid. People go mad if you say that. It's like completely crazy to want a trial.
Well, it's a living in a Hollywood film, isn't it, for a lot of them?
It is. But it's also the same people who love the idea of, due process and rule of law and courts.
No, but do you think, I mean, it is disturbing that they've not issued the arrest warrants, and there has been lots of... I mean,
unprecedented, I think it's fair to say, this kind of gap between his request, was it May?
There have been...
now into October?
The wrecking attempts, I think, delayed it, the likes of the British government. But nonetheless, I mean...
And threats. Karim Khan, the chief president, talked about being threatened.
Well, we know
foreign
that.
Government.
Don't we know the history? Because his predecessor, this came out that Israel had tried to threaten them. They're basically like, oh, nice husband and kids you've got there.
That was Israel threatening his predecessor. Karim Khan is saying it's even worse. It's other governments on Israel's behalf threatening him.
Well, almost, we know the US. I mean, there's already evidence showing they're putting massive
we broke the story at Zeteo that multiple Republican senators wrote a threatening letter to him saying, we're going to come off your family, not just you.
But the point, a lot of, I mean, I don't know if you know Alonso Gomendi, a brilliant international relations lecturer. I mean, the point he made is international will just collapse if they don't issue those arrest warrants. There will just be no credibility.
Again, it's one of the many things that will come out of Gaza that we will regret in years to come, the tearing up of the post-war settlement for one country. There's no way you can ever enforce any of this stuff again, the various conventions, the Geneva Conventions, the various treaties.
Yeah.
You've seen the US this week, ProPublica is reporting that the US government, forget Human Rights Watch, forget UN rapporteurs, Francesca Albanese, forget all of them, the US State Department's own Bureau on Refugees told Blinken, the Secretary of State, Israel is in violation of American law. They're blocking American aid. We cannot send weapons. It's against American law. Blinken went to Congress, said the exact opposite. I'm told that it's fine. We're in
He covered it up, didn't he?
So he covered it up. Complete cover-up. It's like Iran-Contra level cover-up.
But that shows, by the way, because the ICC case, what they focused on is starvation. It's the deliberate starvation, which is obviously a heinous war.
Unimpeachable and undeniable.
Yeah.
Just to come back to our friend Sir Keir Starmer.
Our buddy boy.
If arrest warrants come out, will he read them closely with his Wahid Ali paid glasses?
Well, you know,
talk to me about Wahid Ali. Tell the world what is going on with Lord Wahid Ali, because every time I go on Twitter and see a clip from British News, it is a Labour minister saying, yes, I took money from Lord Wahid Ali to have a birthday party, to go to a concert, to buy clothes, to have glasses. What is he doing?
He's just a very dangerous man, Mehdi, because, look...
Well, I also saw a clip of West Streeting saying, giving money is public service.
He said we should cheer out, it's like charity. It's just a noble thing
the left
for people
is now
to
embracing the idea of big money donors.
West Streeting is not the left. Can you just take that back? Wahid Ali, he's a long-standing Labour donor. He's extremely rich, very deep pockets.
And just to be clear, no one's saying anything wrong.
No, this is all perfectly
And I actually
legal.
don't think he's the villain of this story. I think it's these Labour ministers who look so desperate and tacky.
If you take Keir Starmer...
I think he paid for a 40th birthday party of one of the ministers.
Yeah, which apparently cost £13,000. What happened at his birthday party?
What is it, gold?
But it's just ridiculous. I mean, Keir Starmer's taken more freebies in hospitality than every Labour leader since 1997 put together. That includes Tony Blair, by the way.
Wow.
Now, that's £100,000 worth of freebies in hospitality.
He's also not a poor man.
Top 1%. I think he can more... I mean, they paid, I think it was £13,000 worth of clothes for him and his wife, who didn't properly declare. I think
that's what really bothers me. I'm sorry to get into the nitty-gritty of the quote-unquote corruption. Legal corruption, which is, like, if it was... He bought them a trip to, like, the Bahamas. I'd be like, all right, I get it. He bought her clothes to wear? Like, did she have to check with him first?
£2,500 worth of glasses.
Like
glasses?
What happens? Does he go with them to Specsavers? Like, how does this work out?
Does he give them the money? Does he give them vouchers? I don't know.
Do they send him photos from like the shop?
Is Keir Starmer even that well dressed? Like, where are these clothes? What
does
is
he
he
do?
doing?
How the conversation happens? Like, he goes, Keir, do you need some clothes? And he goes, yes, please. I'd like a jacket and some jeans. I don't.
Yeah, because if one of my friends asked to buy me clothes, I'd just be. Well, I mean, I was.
Like I said, I'd take a trip to the Bahamas if somebody says I want to buy you a trip. It's very generous of you, but like, I'll buy you your T-shirt.
But the reason it's gone down like a cup of sick, if I'm honest, is they came to power and said, "Oh, the finances are really tough, so we're going to have to take fuel payments away from pensioners, including really poor pensioners. We're going to keep the 2-child benefit cap that drives huge numbers of children into poverty and hardship. I'm sorry, guys, life's going to be really tough for you. We've got to make sacrifices. Oh, we're just going to take tens of thousands of pounds of freebies on top of our already. And this is the worst one because they got Taylor Swift tickets, which were worth thousands of pounds, and they used their kids as human shields. They said, "My kids really want to go. Loads of people's kids want to go to Taylor Swift. You have to pay for the tickets. What's wrong with you? They're not on your salary." It's annoying. It's aggravating.
All right, well, last point on this because we're out of time, but I do know you feel strong about it. I think it's an important point to make. This is all about Labour not really having any kind of vision right now. Right? It's just a bunch of careerists. Is that fair to say? And this is what happens to a government. Normally happens a few years in. It's happening a few months in.
Oh, a few years. This feels like a fag end of a government already. I went to Labour conference and I ran after ministers who didn't want to speak to me. And the problem is there's no vision hanging it together. They were handed power because the Tories destroyed themselves. And this wing of the Labour Party are the sorts of people who see politics as a way of getting a bit of power, getting a bit. You're in this. It's often called politics showbiz for ugly people. I'm not commenting on the looks of the Labour front bench, but that's what it's often called. And then you end up using it as a springboard to get lucrative jobs in the private sector, often related to the ministerial job you once had. And I just think the problem is that it's not going down well with the British public who are sick of austerity. They want something different. They want change. And now they see more politicians on the take. It looks a little bit like a Tory government at the end of a Tory government.
What a way to end our first episode back after a summer break. It looks like a...
my word. We've got to work with the material we've got.
Name of the show, Too Outspoken. I appreciate you being so outspoken. I'm sure they'll love you for it. Owen, a pleasure. Hope to see you soon.
See you soon, buddy. See you in a bit.
Cheers.
Did you like this video? Don't forget to subscribe to this YouTube channel and turn on...
I mean, I liked the video because of the content. I didn't like the video because of how depressing it was. But yes, thank you, Mehdi, thank you, Owen. Yes, corruption is not a new thing. It's been around forever, and hey, we've legalized it by calling it lobbying.
People understand. He got banned.
Yeah, this is a video of Hassan talking to ASMONGOLD from a month ago. Let's speed it up, and yeah, there we go. Take it away.
I didn't realize he was banned. That is not the main point. The point is that a ton of people were apparently upset with me. They were like, there was a guy that said I was basically like the equivalent of like a Nazi going to a Holocaust museum, like to whitewash their sentiment. Like that's what they were saying. I love hearing from white Americans about how to combat Islamophobia. As a Muslim guy, I like white Americans telling me what's what. You don't know how to deal with Islamophobia, brother. Hassan, you're ill-equipped, you know? Annoying, let this matter you again? That's fine. That's like neither here nor there. That's not like a big constituency. But then of course the other part was hella people just being like, you know, this guy loves terrorism, right? You know what I'm saying? I love when a guy is out there trying to combat Islamophobia and the retort against that sort of of misinformation defense is basically just being like, hey, this Muslim guy's a terrorist. He loves throwing gays off roofs, baby. Just saying. You know them Muslims. You know them sand N-words, you know? Love throwing the gays off the roofs. Like, that was literally the counter to this of like me talking about this. And I know it's one of those moments where FD Signifier says always, I texted him this morning. It's one of those moments where FD Signifier is like, remember, you're not white in the eyes of a lot of people. And it's a somber reminder of that reality. There's levels to the whiteness. Watching two people debate whether or not I'm human should have a right to live is really on my head. Yeah, except the thing is, he knows what my position is. That's not a criticism towards me. Also, I speak to the humanity of Muslims and Arabs and Palestinians in general on a regular basis. But a lot of people don't understand this. But like, yeah, when I'm talking to Asmongold, I'm not talking just to Asmongold. I'm talking to motherfuckers exactly like Asmongold. You know what I mean? And there's millions of them out there. I'm talking to his audience. It takes a ton for him to reconsider his stances. It's not about him reconsidering his stances. It's not. It's about people in the margins that are in his audience that are going to look at the situation differently after that conversation. You guys have to understand something. Maybe if you're not Muslim or Arab or Palestinian, you know, this might come as a surprise to you, but you can kind of get away with saying whatever. I'm shocked that he got banned to begin with. Like, I think you can kind of get away with in mainstream media, especially with saying the most unhinged that not only Muslims, about Muslims, directly about Palestinians, directly about Arabs, but also beyond that, you can literally say unhinged to defenders of Arabs too. So like, it's just legitimately not that surprising. What's surprising is that he got banned at all. I didn't even realize that he was banned, but I'm letting you know, dude, what Asmongold said is not any different than Bill Maher, dog. What are you talking about? Bill Maher says it to a larger audience. The only difference between what Asmongold said and what Bill Maher says on a regular basis is that Bill Maher has 40 years of media training. So he knows not to say certain things so overtly, but the sentiment expressed is exactly the same. Okay. That's the only difference. Like, the language that Bill Maher uses is still like crafted around like liberal tent poles and liberal cultural signifiers enough that it can like masquerade as polite conversation when what he's saying is identical. Bill Maher never said to kill the kids before they grow up. First of all, you're literally wrong. You're wrong. Bill Maher literally does say that every broadcast. That's my point. You're so stupid. He literally says exactly that. What are you talking about? Have you not watched Bill Maher? Like, you gotta be joking. Oh, dude, that's awesome. Love you, man. But I question the efficacy of yesterday. He's a giant POS. That I get that there might be some people in the margins of this community, but if we're watching him through this arc, is very likely much on board already. And he just used it as a 3-hour attempt to rehab his image of truly incomprehensible said and believes. Yeah, I don't see it that way at all. I don't think he rehabbed his image at all throughout that process. But here's the thing. The way I view it is, and I will describe this one more time.
I'm trying to find if I had played the video of the entire debate, or, I mean, I think a few streams ago, 2 or 3, I had shown the clips. Oh, I think I might have shown the debate between Hasan and Asmongold, and what Asmon had come out and said. Yeah, this is addressing that.
Time for many of you that simply fail to comprehend this. Okay, I rate everything on a curve. That's number one. Number two, I have this understanding, especially as someone whose name is Hasan, who is like a white dude, but still someone who grew up in Turkey, someone who is Muslim, from a Muslim background. I know that the average person is unimaginably Islamophobic. I've dealt with it for damn near a decade since I came to the United States of America. When I'm talking to a person individually and maintaining my composure and working through the steps, step by step, and explaining why someone is bigoted or someone's opinion is wrong or bigoted, offering historically relevant information, there's a reason for that. The reason is I might not change his mentality, okay? Other events might play a larger role in his mentality changing on this matter, but there are a ton of people who are watching him who are going to respond to that patience, especially respond to the way that I'm communicating, and most likely be more charitable to what I have to say, okay? On any number of different fronts, because that entire conversation is an information faucet for me, utilizing virtually every opportunity to talk about different aspects of how, for example, freedom of speech is revoked, things that a lot of people in his community might not be aware of. It's not like I agreed on his framing. It's not like I agreed to anything he was saying. That's my goal. My goal is to change people's minds. Do you understand? Even if his perspective might not change on the matter, there's plenty of people in his community that are going to look at the situation differently. And if I get 100 people in Asmongold's community to look at the situation a little bit differently, learn something new that they hadn't known, then that's it. That's my goal. I've succeeded. Yeah. If there was any moment where I was like conceding to his framing on the matter, that would be an entirely different conversation. I'm not going to go in front of like a Ben Shapiro type, for example, who I would categorize as simply different than Asmongold as well, right? But even if I were to go in front of a Ben Shapiro type and have like a relatively cordial conversation, which I would not be able to maintain composure in a similar capacity to Ben Shapiro. He's a professional speaking head. He's a talking head. But here's the thing. There's never going to be a world where I concede to his framing on anything. Just like I did not concede to Asmongold's framing on anything either. And that's how you get comments like this. This debate perfectly illustrates my own internal struggle when it comes to forming a kind and normal view of Middle Eastern people. I come from Poland, raised in a conservative family. I watch a lot of Asmon, and I love Hasan's commentary and the way he presents his arguments with solid factual backing. Listening to this for 3 hours and seeing the insane amount of patience and collection Hasan has had throughout, and also listening to Asmon repeat his point that I used to share over and over again, actually helped me finally see how weak, stupid, and sad such belief is. Thank you, Hasan, for doing what you do. My life has become healthier because of you. There you go. People forget that streamers like you and Asmon are talking to stadiums full of people every day. A lot of minds can be changed, and it's not too late for them. Yes, there's never a person who I think is above having their mind changed. Okay, I think there's no one that is above having their mind and their heart changed. Now, of course, tactically speaking, there are certain people that I'm not going to be as charitable to, you know, a Ben Shapiro type or a professional right-wing commentator or someone in a position of actual power. You have to understand. My commentary is like water, okay? And if you want to understand my method, basically my method is simple. I give back the same energy that I take. That's number one. Number two, I'm not going to concede to like that I don't agree with no matter what. But more importantly, I also am consistently, and this is something that like I think marginalized people who are professional commentary people understand this, like always, there's always something in the back of your mind. Like if you are a black political commentator, you know that every single thing that you say is going to be under a microscope by a broad audience of predominantly white people who do not have your understanding of the world, who have never empathized with your position. So if you get really angry, for example, that they're going to, even if you're completely correct, it does not matter. The facts in that situation, no matter how hard they are on your side, are irrelevant, okay? This is just simply how debates and how commentary and how, you know, existing in America in some ways works. That's it. So I am cognizant always of not only the person that I'm talking to and the energy that they give me that I choose to match, but beyond that, I'm also always thinking about the audience and the way that they are responding to it. Islamophobia is baked into every orifice of American society. In the post 9/11 universe, the United States of America needed to do this to justify its endless bloody war campaign as they ravaged the entirety of the MENA region, okay? And Americans responded to that. So every American, especially over a certain age, chat, what are the laws for gays in Gaza? A gay man in Gaza, his life expectancy? Yeah, dude, anyone in Gaza, their life expectancy is pretty short. That's why, you know, 50% of the entire Gaza Strip is under the age of 18. And that is not because of Hamas or because of Islamic fundamentalism. That's entirely because of Israel. But, you know, you can try to keep making a woman in Gaza her life expectancy. Yeah, I think you're making like, I suspect you're making an anti-Israel argument without recognizing that you're doing that. Yeah, the median age of people in Gaza is literally 15. Has there ever been a group of people in history that has deserved genocide? No, of course not. That's not how that works. It is, genocide is the #1 crime. Like the Germans post World War II did not deserve genocide. You know what I mean? Like there is no moral genocide. There is no defensive genocide. I read a comment that shows you are right. To be honest, Hasan changed my opinion on it a little bit. Not the fundamental of what Asman was saying, but my look at Palestine, hearing someone who heavily understands it and isn't some random Twitter user posting, hey, look at me, was pretty interesting. The fundamentals of what Asman was saying isn't wrong. And I do mostly agree 100%, but Hasan was pointing out that you can't imply that here the country and its people aren't in a functioning state, be it because of Hamas, Israel, or outside forces. Hasan was pointing out that Palestine as a people and culture hasn't been able to be who they are for decades because they're consistently being bombed and killed. But in the past, when Palestinians were able to be themselves, this kill all non-believers, rapes and kills for fun and concept never exists in their culture. So he wasn't sure why Asman was assuming that they would. I know some will say, well, they're doing it now. And the point I think Hasan was making is that they is a handful of people and they're only doing it because there's no established ruling or government and do not represent the rest of the people. The majority of people aren't able to sort this out, stand up or call it out because the country is constantly being destabilized. I don't think going against the only group that's fighting against the constant destabilization is a smart thing to do. It's a die by Hamas or die by Israel situation, in my honest opinion. So the only thing most Palestinians' minds is how to survive the day. That's awesome that this person who still has like resilient Islamophobic sentiment baked into his argument is like so close to fully recognizing the situation. You know what I mean? But that's it. That is the reason why I try to have these conversations. Okay. And this is being on Reddit. It makes it so crazy. I think that's where the overall problem lay, was that it felt like Asman was painting a broad brush across Palestine for the actions of a few crazies in other countries, where the majority have no voice or say and are only thinking about when they will be bombed, not who's gay, and we need to get them. Yeah. So that's my point, and that's why I do what I do. So if you don't understand the method, it's cool, it's fine. And you can usually say this about any other kind of like marginalized identity that I seek to protect or talk about. You can be like, you're cis, you're a cishet man, you don't understand trans issues like that. Why are you arguing with transphobes in the way that you want to argue, that you think is the most successful method, and not in the way that I want you to argue? And you can say that because I'm a cis guy, I'm not trans. So you're right. I mean, you're wrong ultimately because I know what I'm doing and you don't, but I get it. But you can't really say that about Islamophobia. It's the one thing you can't really say that about me on. That's the one thing, right? So like, I'm the one getting bomb swabbed at TSA, baby. You can't. So it's funny when white people try to overstep and do that. But it's fine. You do you. It's the same thing I say about any kind of group that I defend, that I talk about. It's not for you. If I'm talking about black issues with someone who's anti-black, that's not for black people, bro. That's not. It's for white people. There's a conversation for white people. Most of the conversations that I have when I am talking to an outside group is specifically targeted towards young white men, okay? So if you sometimes feel like I'm out of pocket in the way that I'm communicating certain things, and it makes you feel a certain type of way, it makes you feel angry, okay? Yeah, well, it's not for you. You already know where I stand. Trust me, okay? Do you get what I mean? You're already black. You already know what being a black person in America looks like. You live it every day. You already have a certain amount of lived experience, okay? You might be able to brush up on certain talking points and effective counters or whatever in terms of messaging when you watch a debate that I might have with someone who's anti-black, but you already have that lived experience. I'm talking to people who don't have that lived experience. I'm using my privilege specifically as an effective communicator that looks a certain way, that acts a certain way, that behaves a certain way to break through on a lot of people who would never listen to a black person because of their anti-black status from the start. The goal is to chip away at that because bigotry is quite resilient, especially when it's consistently being propped up by social conditioning. And that's it. Give it a break, Lamau. No, I'm not going to give it a break. This is like fundamentally something that I believe in, something that I care about, something that I think I'm quite successful at, as a matter of fact. And no, I'm not going to give this a break. How about you take a break for 3 minutes at the top of the hour? Okay, but don't get upset if I check you. I forget this isn't for me. I wish more people were progressive on blackness. It's just us defending ourselves. I mean, good luck. It's impossible. His entire society is designed in an incredibly anti-black fashion. It's just like, you know, my job, where I see myself is someone who is a communicator of these sorts of issues to people who would not be responsive in any other circumstance. Like someone who's anti-trans is not, especially in a debate format, is not going to be responsive to a trans person. That's the unfortunate reality, right? So my goal is to penetrate that barrier as being a bro cishet white dude. You feel me? As opposed to like in the real world, the number one thing that you can do as a trans person to combat transphobia is just like be a normal, chill trans person existing in the real world and hanging out with your coworkers. Like I'm sure every single trans person in this chat who actually does that on a daily basis will tell you that that is the number one way of just like destroying transphobia.
Conversation between HasanAbi and ASMONGOLD right now. I'm about an hour into it, and if you're unfamiliar with that conversation, basically ASMONGOLD is coming under fire for saying that Palestinian culture is an inferior culture to that of Western culture because of its roots in Islam, making it more prone to homophobia, transphobia, and more extremist conservative views. And I find Hasan's response to that to be very interesting. I'm going to put this into my own terms, the meaning that I understand and take away from it. Namely, Hasan seems to be saying that there's no such thing as one culture which is inferior to another culture so much as it is one culture which is more or less mature than another culture. And maturity can be hampered or stunted by a lack of material circumstance, and or from the restriction or taking away of material circumstance, a culture might regress, which we might be experiencing here in the United States, unfortunately, at the moment. Now, that's not to say that as cultures mature that they all homogenize into one identical culture. Not at all. Much like individuals, each person develops and matures into their own self. And Hasan goes on to argue that all cultures should be supported insofar as making sure that their material needs are met so that they have enough autonomy so that the liberation movements that are necessary for them to mature can occur. But right now, especially in Palestine, they are constantly under attack. They are in survival mode. And when they are in survival mode, there cannot be the necessary steps towards liberation for marginalized people groups. So the first step is to get to a place of stability, get to a place of general liberation from an oppressive regime. And then
that's a good summary.
From there, we should start to hopefully see like cultural maturity. Now, another point that Hasan argues that I would be remiss not to mention is the fact that historically the idea of one culture being inferior to another culture, like inherently in such a way that it cannot necessarily change to become, more mature in those terms, but it's this more static thing of being inferior, that has historically been used as an excuse to commit atrocities against people groups, whether it's been indigenous people or black people. So we need to be very...
Because the debate was stupid, he only had one argument. It doesn't matter because just listen to my words, man, okay? For 45 to 47,000 people that were listening to ASMONGOLD, this was the first time where they literally heard someone from start to finish describe that there is no inferiority in cultures, that like these guys are too busy surviving to actually turn around and be like, oh, let's do a gay pride parade. You know what I mean? Like all of this stuff is basically just repackaged historical materialism. All of this stuff is basically explaining American foreign policy and how devastating that has been for entire regions, showcasing like that these places, when they had a crumb of autonomy, were able to actually, have a more, I guess, Western focused, like liberally palatable existence. That all went away when fundamentalists came in to the fold as like the number one emancipators and liberators away from the influence of the treacherous parasitic Western imperialist forces. All of this stuff is obviously important for these people to hear, okay? It doesn't matter what ASMONGOLD's argument is. Like, even if a lot of people are going in there to be like, oh, ASMONGOLD's cooking, he's going to destroy this guy. Ultimately, there is still a ton of people that hear that for the first time ever when they haven't ever heard about that, and their framework will change.
Very careful in the language that we use when speaking about other cultures, especially cultures that have yet to mature and are under intense oppression. Now, Hasan's take on culture was something I'd actually never heard before, and up till hearing it, I actually wasn't entirely sure how I felt about the whole cultural situation. I had heard somebody bring it up to me before, and I wasn't sure how to handle it. I like Hasan's take on this. I'm curious what other people think.
I feel like Hasan's take is basic sociology. There are probably a lot of YouTube vids on the topic that can help you explore further. Maybe trying to find a vid on Maslow's hierarchy. It's not culture that causes homophobia or whatever. By this logic, I'm a dirty Indian because I'm from an immature culture, not due to material conditions of the subcontinent. Culture is completely separate from social conservatism and social liberalism. Culture is stuff like food, language, dress, literature, and their history. Exactly. No, absolutely. That's precisely what it is. That is what it is. There is no like, this culture is better than others or whatever. Culture is just the sum total products that the output that you create as you respond to your material conditions. To be a theory nerd and add on, the political sociologist Charles Tilly, whose most famous theories covered exactly this phenomenon, in that European society's linear timeline of cultural and capitalist progression cannot be applied to countries that have been colonized, specifically the global south, because they have not been afforded the same opportunity for linear progression. But even more, there's also the fact that the global south has been rejected from equity overall. There's also another side of this, which is why I find at least attempts towards socialization, higher degrees of socialization, to be truly unique in terms of development for even other countries that have historically been undermined due to a number of different reasons, but specifically China. When you look at Chinese development, it's insane to consider that they went from humiliation, ritualistic humiliation, and the grips of colonial violence to becoming a superpower that is competitive in the global marketplace with the United States of America damn near overnight. When you look at even the USSR, going from a rugged terrain full of potato farmers that were constantly in the grips of famine, and there was still plenty of famine in the USSR as well, okay, before you blast me for that, going from that to being another superpower that beat the United States of America to the space race is crazy, okay? I mean, that is, in my opinion, in my estimation, these are massive leaps. These are massive projects that even at a time when technological prowess had not caught up, simply the ideological resilience and an interest in doing something different caused so much of this collectivization to occur in such a short period of time without 400 years of chattel slavery and colonial exploit. And a lot of people cannot look at that on an even playing field. One, because they are just simply ill-equipped to understand any of that from a materialist perspective. They just don't, there's no way to comprehend it. There's no way to look at the situation with a broader snapshot and try to, I mean, in Russia, they had plenty of of colonial exploit as did China, just in the way that the West did? Yes, but their overall standing from their starting point of this project to its peak is insane. It's not like there was any sort of like genuine liberalization initiative or any sort of like, I mean, you had serfdoms. You did not have the bounties of empire to the same degree, in my opinion, that the Western world did, specifically with chattel slavery. Anyway, culture is not simply a response to material conditions, as there are a ton of other cultural forces such as kinship and adaptations to local ecosystems. What adaptations to local ecosystems would still be material? Like, anthropologists would see your view as reductionist and too deterministic. PhD here, by the way. You just said it's not materialistic and then described like materialism. PhD, by the way. But anyway, it's fine. It's fine. There's a spiritual, sure, I'm willing to concede on this point. Okay, I'm not an anthropologist. I am far from the most knowledgeable person. I'm just a dumbass. Okay, you're right. From what I understood, his original statement implied that because there are aspects worth criticizing in Palestinian culture, as with any, it allows him to have complete apathy when Israel bombs that society in extinction. I don't know if it was intentional, but it seemed like you passively guided the conversation to a place where we both agreed this notion is ridiculous, and I thought that was nice. Yes, thank you. That is what I was doing. I think like one of the major points of contention in that conversation, one of the high notes, was basically when I asked him if he would feel the same way about like, you know, firebombing a white Alabama enclave that hosts some of the most far-right radical Christians. And obviously he was like, no, I treat American citizens differently. And that was it. There's also the factor to consider that the presence of most bigotry stems directly from the cultural imports of the global north to the global south. Colonialization didn't just stunt cultural development, but also regressed in some factors because colonies were punished for engaging in their indigenous culture, which in many cases was more progressive than their colonizers. Yeah. I think one of the most resilient points there is always when I talk about how religion can be a tool for good, it can be a tool for bad. Historically, it has been used for both the justification of chattel slavery and also been used in the abolition of chattel slavery. And ultimately, you don't have an issue with religion. You have an issue with fundamentalists. You have an issue with right-wing conservatism. That's what it is. And I think that's a good thing to separate for a lot of people, because a lot of right-wing conservatives in the United States of America hate other right-wing conservatives that are brown for doing the same that they're advocating for here, but more responsive to what is permissible in American society. Obviously, the Westboro Baptist Church can't run around, roam the streets with AR-15s and like throw gay people off the roofs, but they would if they were living in an ISIS-dominated territory of Syria. Okay, they would 100% be doing that. Here, they just get their rocks off by calling a gay person that died the F slur at the funeral and then going and eating jalapeno poppers at Applebee's. Like, that's how you also stunt radicalization to a certain degree, by offering people some material benefits. This does not mean that like American culture is more prosperous or better than others. It simply means that America has the bounties of empire, and therefore our right-wing nutters here are stunted to a certain degree in comparison to the right-wing nutters everywhere else. Anyway, I hope that people understand where I was coming from, what I was doing. I think it was ultimately successful. The below are my personal thoughts and do not reflect my employer or any company or person I'm affiliated with. Hello, everyone. As many of you are aware, some comments were made by Zach yesterday about Palestinians and Muslims. Before I address his comments, I'd like to take this opportunity to share some details about my background in hopes that those reading this post may better understand who I am, where I come from, and what those comments mean to me. For the record, for those of you who don't know, he's going to describe that he is you know what? Tips is the co-owner and co-founder of OTK. That's why I kept repeating to ASMONGOLD yesterday. I was like, dude, talk to Tips. Like, I can't believe you're saying this, because, you know, your comments directly are on him personally. He's Muslim. As many of you are aware, some comments were made by Zach yesterday about Palestinians and Muslims. 34 years ago, I was fortunate enough to be born in the United States of America, a blessing and a lottery ticket that I thank God for every day. My parents, Syrian immigrants from Damascus, came to the U.S. in the 70s/80s at a time when the likes of Hafez and Rifat al-Assad were massacring tens of thousands of their own people in Hama. The sole reason I exist today can be attributed to the words of one of my father's neighbors, who informed my late grandmother that my father's friends had just been arrested for political dissent and that the Mukhabart were coming for him next. Quick on her feet, my grandmother, God Almighty grant mercy on her soul, grabbed my 22-year-old father and with tears in her eyes, shaved off his beard and sent him to Jordan, hoping he would make it out. With the help of a few friends, and at a time when many thought Syria was a wheaty breakfast consumed with my milk, my dad was one of the few Syrians lucky enough to be granted passage to America. To that we say, Alhamdulillah, thank God. At some point in the mid-80s, my father, then working as an engineer in Los Angeles, was serendipitously reunited with one of his childhood neighbors and schoolmates in Chicago, Illinois. Yeah, that's the CIA or FBI, I assume, right? The Mukhabart. This man would become my uncle, as his sister, my mother, would marry my father soon after. In typical immigrant fashion, they wasted no time, and my siblings and I were born. Growing up in the early 90s, it was clear that we weren't your stereotypical American family. After all, we were Muslims. Headscarves, no pork, 5 daily prayers, and so on. We dressed conservatively, packed foreign foods in our lunches, and spoke with thick accents until grade school. Yet strangely enough, I cannot recall a single moment in those early years where I felt different. Yes, our swim trunks could have been less goofy, and explaining what Zatar was to kids at school was a thing. But despite all that, we were just another American family in Southern California, navigating life and seeking out the coveted dream. Then 9/11 happened. For those that may have been too young to remember, September 11th was not simply a moment or a day. It was a monumental shift in thought and discourse. People were horrified, confused, but above all, angry. In a famous incident, popular radio host Howard Stern called for the entire Middle East to be nuked. Bomb them all. And his opinion was not uncommon, from school teachers to store clerks, politicians to celebrities, liberals to conservatives. One thing was on everyone's mind. We got to get them. But who was them? Surely the perpetrators and murderers who planned the attack, killing thousands of innocent people in the process and changing the landscape of modern humanity. However, to some, them had a much broader definition. And that some grew, by the way. That some virtually became all. One of the least understood aspects of the attack was the local aftermath, specifically the experiences of Americans who could be perceived as Arab passing. It didn't matter if you were Persian, Indian, South Asian, or even Latino. If you were within a certain shade of beige and had a 3+ syllable last name, you were a that had to be dealt with. Many religious minorities were also caught in the crossfire, with Sikhs, Hindus, Sephardic Jews, Arab Christians, and others receiving a significant share of the vitriol. Acts of wanton violence became commonplace. House of worships were burned down, and random people you knew from your community were being locked up, with some never heard from again. Never forget, the first victim of Islamophobic hate crimes was a Sikh man in, I believe, Texas. He was not Muslim. He was Sikh, and they killed him. Guy walked into a bar and killed him, specifically because he thought that, or Arizona, not Texas, I thought Wisconsin. Yeah, he was wearing a turban. But how could this happen? How could such a monumental shift in attitude and behavior occur in the greatest country to ever exist? The same country that opened its arms wide to the tired and the poor and not once made us feel less than any other American. Truly, to be born American is an undeniable blessing. And despite our governance, I would gladly give my life to this country and the people.
I am also glad that me and Hassan clearly have access to the same information, and so do you. The internet is a wonderful thing. You can read up on the history of fucking anything. There's so much information out there. You can do research. YouTube, as much as I have issues with it, has plenty of resources on it that you could make use of.
People that have given me and my family a chance. The reason behind such a substantial shift in attitude cannot be attributed to a single moment or event. Rather, it was the accumulation of decades and decades of subtle media propaganda designed to produce an other, so that the powerful can continue to prey on the angry and divided powerless. It is a tale as old as time, transcending region and geography, national lines and civilizations, a governance strategy deployed all throughout the history to keep us, the people, at odds. It is the same calculated dehumanization that has led to some of the most heinous crimes and bloody massacres whose horrors we do not utter aloud. To many who heard Zach's comments, the language he used, whether intended or not, reeked of the same dehumanization that plagued their ancestors, their grandparents, and in some cases their families today. It is the same language used to justify wanton violence, genocide, and the destruction of our universal brotherhood. It is the same language used to brush off a video of a Palestinian woman and a child burning alive as a price of war. I'm not writing this post to defend the dignity of the Palestinians suffering in Gaza. The dignity does not require defense. It is a right. To those who have supported the humanitarian efforts and self-determination of the Palestinian people and all the oppressed around the globe, thank you. To those brave enough to look beyond their own anger and reach out to their Jewish friends and their neighbors, thank you. These are trying times that will test us all. Zach's comments may have been the impetus for this post, but if there's one thing I hope to convey in my incoherence, it is this. I desperately plead to all those reading to wake up to the forces around you that wish nothing more than to separate you from your fellow man and conquer your hearts, your minds, and your humanity. Those that wish for you to look upon your school teachers, store clerks, and neighbors as them, for they are not them, they are you, born to different circumstances, no doubt, but they are you nonetheless. Open your skin and take a look for yourself. We all bleed the same blood, share the same dreams, and will one day rot in the same earth until our bones have long become dust and the differences in our beings will be no thicker than air. Please, for the love of all that is holy and good, look out for yourselves and those around you. And if you ever feel the urge and anger to reduce your fellow man to anything less than yourself, ask aloud who benefits. Thank you for taking the time to read this. I'll be spending most of my upcoming time working behind the scenes to ensure our staff and teams are all right and the OTK continues to grow into the place I know it can be. In the meantime, peace. So the person who wrote this is, again, Hips, who is like one of the co-founders of OTK, the organization that ASMONGOLD is also a co-founder of and a co-owner of. Like, he is one of the most important people in OTK. Good dude.
Thank you, Hassan.
Please go away. I'm gonna get a call.
Shai Davidai. Oh, this is the professor that's hoping somebody doesn't like him. He's just begging. Like, Shai Davidai has been banned from Columbia University campus. Yeah, that makes complete sense. What an enormous piece of shit. Anyway, so timer set to, or so playback speed set to 1.5, captions on. Hassan, take it away. This is from HasanAbi archive, so it's not directly from Hassan, but it's his content.
Please go away. I'm gonna get a call.
She's like, was she kidnapped? Yeah, they released her because she was annoying. They're like, bro, take this one back. Ya Allah, bro, we don't want this one. She's like, why is nobody kidnapping me? Excuse me? We don't want this. I heard, I know, I already celebrated this. Not my Shai, my big, beautiful child who's 38 years old. My Shai. Can't believe they did that to him. Shai David. What's up? How could they do that? Did you see the tips post? Yes. You're being by Twitch. You didn't show up on my recommended for you streams at all. Dog, I don't know why people always say this. Especially when I got 33,000 people in here watching the top of the hour ad break. I'm probably one of the, top streams on the platform. Yeah, the number 2 stream on the platform right now. Like, it's probably a mobile issue. I am not being by Twitch. Dude was trying to get into her building. Yes, he tried to get inside the social work school and they wouldn't allow him. ID card access is completely revoked. No. Interesting clip from Kamala's town hall. I love that they posted the live town hall on CNN like this. Anyway, guys, I'm gonna need to take a little bit of time for myself. I can't believe my favorite Columbia professor, Shai David, has been banned off the off the campus. I mean, I don't know. I guess we're all responsible for this tragic incident. We all failed him. We all failed him. Yeah. Happy Shai Davidai has been banned from Columbia University's campus for harassment day to all who celebrate. Like, in some ways, I am a little sad about it. I am a little sad about it because, like, his advocacy for Israel is genuinely a burden for Israel. Like, him and like Rabbi Shmuley go so far in the direction of being an annoying little pest that most people are just like, yeah, dog, whatever you're for, I'm against. Okay. Like, whatever you're advocating for, I'm the opposite. Like, you could get me to be pro, like, the Ayatollahs. Oh, you're against it? Okay, I'm for it now. You know what I mean? I have now converted to Shia Islam. How long will it take for him to cry on Fox News about it tonight, tomorrow? I don't know. It appears Shai Davidai has been banned from Columbia campus for harassing students. That's not the reason. Yeah, they took him down for... Okay. Who is this guy? Shai Davidai. What can I say about Shai Davidai that hasn't been said already? Shai Davidai is the 38-year-old boy to, I believe, defense contractors, if I'm not mistaken, who happens to be a professor at Columbia University. And since October 7, he has been popping the off, implying that there's a secret worse reason. Yeah, no, his reasoning is because he's Jewish. Like, I'm letting you know that he is going to say Columbia University is, and that he was banned for being Jewish. Shai Davidai has been suspended from Columbia campus for harassing students. This has been the plan the entire time in order to file a lawsuit. I guarantee this will happen in the next few weeks. Not for that. Someone said, oh, so the sexual misconduct charges are true. I heard it was because you pooped yourself. So when he says not for that, doesn't that imply that he did do that, but he didn't get banned for that? He's throwing a tantrum.
So, update about Columbia. You all saw in October.
He also looks like he looks noticeably worse since he went down this like public clown route. Like how it started, how it's going. I am straight, I am white, I am a male. But let this be clear, no matter what any court says, women have a right to control their own bodies. I am not white.
October 7th, what happened?
Wait, he's like, you all know what happened on October 7th. And what happened in Columbia today when I got banned for pooping my pants outside of the common hall and then routinely screaming, I pooped my pants. And it's because of over and over again. And then the authorities came in and apprehended me. It was kind of like another October 7th, my personal October 7th.
You saw them not just praising, but actually celebrating it. You saw me standing there where I was allowed to stand while an onslaught of students and professors kind of marched toward me. You saw the Assistant Director of Public Safety, Bobby Loud, doing nothing, even when...
Oh, he's talking about when he was standing and the students were like marching next to him and he was like, you see this? They're me. They're elbowing me. They're me. And then he turned around and went to the like deputy director and was like, you know, you are just like the... Does anyone have that video? It was so good. It was so good. He said, you are just like the guards at the...
The Jewish student is telling him that she's afraid. You saw the COO of Columbia University, Mr. Cass Holloway, do absolutely nothing.
By the way, he's been blocked from entering campus for a brief moment before. This is 1938. It says Israeli professor blocked from entering Columbia's main campus. Dude, you are such a flop merchant, dude. Like, the people say la flop, but come on, dude. He is fucking straight up. He is tossing flops left and right. This is harder than anyone you have ever seen. This is harder. He flops harder than anyone you've ever seen. Like every soccer professional, okay? Every time. Every fucking time, dude. Here, this is the video I was looking for. Columbia University Davidai attempted to goad pro-Palestinian students and school administrators by equating accusations of being... That's what he was talking about when he said they're hitting me.
It's amazing how the Assistant Director of Public Safety will not see the number of elbows that I just got in my You are such... But you know what? There were so many useless administrators in Germany.
He's saying you're a useless administrator akin to Germany. Yeah, this is how that happened, okay? So many in the... were just walking by Jewish people and slightly grazed them. And that's how they were like, what are you saying? Kicks to my shit.
We are Jewish, we are proud, and we are going to be loud.
Yeah, the famous poem. First they kicked me in the shin as they were walking past me, and I didn't say anything. This is, yeah. Twitch, please. I can't believe you guys are not stopping this man when he is showing clearly a gross hate. Remember when Shai went mask off racist at Ta-Nehisi Coast just 2 days ago? I've tried to keep my comment on our brave Jewish hero mocking because that's what he mostly deserves, but this is straight up racism and the kind of thing that's gotten black men throughout U.S. history. Ta-Nehisi Coates is not above young women at a music festival in the name of resistance. That's the headline. Everything else is commentary. Wow. I hadn't even seen that. Goddamn.
We are Jewish. We are proud. We are going to be loud. We are Jewish. We are proud. We are going to be loud.
Oh, that's really... Wow. Wow. All right, let's keep going.
Today I was supposed to be... Well, actually, right now, I was supposed to be at the School of Social Work at Columbia, where the Jewish students are holding their own memorial service for the senseless of October 7th. But then I got a call from my lawyer.
Come on, dog. It's been a year plus, you know, a year of like, you already fucking enough, I think. Like, at this point, it's like, who is this for? You know, you've abused their memory enough to continue advocating for it that has been ongoing for the past 12 months. Like, come on, give it a rest, okay? Give it a fucking rest. Jesus Christ. Bro literally did this, but unironically.
Finished reading The Message by Ta-Nehisi Coates, and you know what? Shame on you, Ta-Nehisi. He spends the entire last chapters of that book talking about how Israel is doing and isn't, without ever once mentioning why sometimes it is good, actually. It felt like a book you'd find in the backpack of an extremist, or like the Cocomelon lunchbox of it, or the Fisher-Price jumperoo of a neo. Unbelievable. You think because you went to Israel for 10 days that you can say Israel is bad and doing settler colonialism? That is an insult to me, who went to Israel for 10 days on birthright and learned that Israel is good and belongs to me. I used to respect you, man. I used to think you were like a liberal, like when you talked about dismantling. I didn't think you meant it like some sort of communist. You're not supposed to mean it. You're supposed to just say it and then do nothing about it. It's so irresponsible for you as a black man to write about Israel being it. Because like, what if you convince other black people of this and turn black people against us? I have spent my entire life protesting police brutality. So
yes, it's Matt Leave. He's joking. He's making fun of a very specific type of, I would think this is satire. It's crazy. No, it is, man. Guys, this is Matt Leib, friend of the show. Okay. The reason why you think this is real is because he is repeating a lot of the very real things that pop off on Twitter. He's just simply making fun of how stupid these statements are. This is satire.
Supporting Black Lives Matter, voting for Obama, and you're making it really hard for me to launder my support of a Jewish ethno-state by pretending to be okay? It's like you just want me to be, and you know what? I'm thinking about it. I'm thinking about it hard. I just can't understand how a Black American can't be a fan of Zionism. Like, you should love it. Like, when I racistly tell you to go back to Africa, wouldn't it be nice to actually have a country of your own to go to? It would be nice for me. I'll tell you that much. Then I would have to listen to that rap music. At the end of the day, I just think this is not something that he should be talking about, or anyone should be talking about. If we all just like take a step back, wait, a few years or something, then revisit this later, we will all have a much more level head and all be able to come together and say, yeah, that was up. That's up what they did to the Palestinians.
Yeah, no, yeah, it'll be much easier for me to launder my support for the regime once we let the regime finish its. Come on now, I've literally heard Zionists say, "Why should I keep supporting LGBTQI plus people when they're protesting for Palestine?" That's awesome. It's very transactional. Anyway, let's finish this one.
Who says that the university has decided to.
He's created many more Shais, and they're even more hilarious.
Legal, these places? I want to see the legal. You're really taking a video of me? I'm Israel. I'll tell you something, okay? What's your name? You don't have to say it.
In good faith. You're not here in good faith. We're raising money for children.
Okay.
Over 20,000 children have been in.
Oh, so sad. So sad.
You just don't care about children.
You know what happened on October 7th? Do you know what you're
Yeah, you know what happened on October 7th? That gives me the right to as many children as I want. Okay, thank you.
standing for? You for rape. You women.
There was literally, there's no.
She's wearing, by the way. Oh, but it's a big problem if I were to wave the, you know what I mean? Listen. She's wearing, laughing about 20,000 children, but God forbid you throw up the green. God forbid. Calm down, HasanAbi. Yeah, exactly. I was part of those tabling groups. She was insane.
There was no documentation of any rape.
I was there. I was in Gaza. I was there. Inside.
You're Israeli and you're
I'm Israeli. I was
That's just a lie. Please.
Let me show you.
She was in on October 7th. Wait, what? The does she mean? What?
I'll show myself there.
We're literally, with our organization, we are not allowed to engage with you. I don't want to talk to you. Please go away.
No, I don't want to go away.
She's like, was she kidnapped? Yeah, they released her because she was annoying. They're like, bro, take this one back. Ya Allah, bro, we don't want this one. She's like, why is nobody kidnapping me? Excuse me? We don't want this. This is, oh, Jesus Christ.
Listen,
you're making me so uncomfortable with all your lies.
Can you just explain to me what's going on here? What are you doing? You're raising. Wait, no, I'm really.
Have a good day.
No, thank you. I'm having a great day. What is this? What are you doing? Trying to find. What?
We're not engaging with you anymore.
Why not?
You're condescending. You're berating us. Stop.
What's your name? You have no answer other than have a good day. You know what you think here? I really want to know. I want to know. I want to understand why you're doing this. What are you doing?
Stop. That's like, he's not Arabic.
I don't care.
Stop talking to him.
Okay, you're not Arab? Have you ever been in Israel? Have you ever been in
Yes.
Have you?
Yeah.
Right,
Please don't talk to her anymore. She's an agitator.
Am I what? Listen to me. I want to talk to you really from my heart. You're a woman. What you're doing here is supporting rape. You're supporting rape. I've seen it in my eyes. I've seen this. I've seen the ladies in. I've seen it.
Wait, what? Dude, what is wrong with Israel defenders? They just make up. They hallucinate some of the most psychotic. I've seen it with my eyes. I promise. I'm not fantasizing about it. It's real.
You're on the wrong side of history. I'm so sorry to tell you that. I'm really sorry, but this is just ridiculous. You don't know what's going on there. I don't want to go away. I just want to get some explanations. I'm not going to go away until you give me some explanations. What is this place? And I want to see your license. Do you have any license for this? I can get this out of here in like 15 minutes.
Why is she talking to this lady instead of being the only corroborating witness to screams without evidence? Yeah, I know. The New York Times needs to get a hold of her. She saw it. She saw it happen. It's crazy because like they just couldn't find one like coherent testimony. And here she is, literally both inside of Israel and also on October 7, saw all the was there. It's so weird.
Oh yeah, I'll do it. Don't worry, I'm gonna do it anyway. I'm trying to give you some time to get time before I get the people here to get this up.
I just want to dance again.
Because this will get out in 15 minutes, really.
Please go ahead.
Okay, I'll do it. Do you have any explanations before I do that? Because I will do it.
We're raising money for a 501c3, Mecca.
Dude, I swear to God, bro. Like Israel defenders think everywhere. They can do Israel everywhere. And then when they can't get away with doing Israel in like America, they get so mad. They're like, what do you mean I can't do Israel here? Like, I don't understand. Hello? Excuse me. I'm going to call the manager on this table right now. I'm going to call the cops here and they're going to come in and pack you up. You're going to jail. Have fun in Zeteo, sweetie. It's like, this is not, you're in the middle of New York, man. Like you can't, you're just annoying people.
Okay.
Who helps children?
Amazing. What children?
Children.
What happened to them?
She's like, I don't know. Please tell me. Well, I thought she wasn't. Maybe she would have. I'm surprised. She's like, there's no children. I was there. They're all.
I'm not.
You don't know. You do things without knowing
They
what
have
you're
been
doing.
named. They have
By who?
no.
By who?
Israel.
No, girl, listen to me.
Please.
Wait, what? Shy David disagrees with you.
Get them away. You're actually pissing me off now.
I don't care. You don't know what you're doing. You have no answers. I ask you questions. You don't know how to answer. You only tell me like have a good day. You have no answers. You have no. Listen to yourselves, please. You don't know what you're doing. You're supporting. That's what you're doing right now. When you have this here.
It scares me to see young people act like this. Like, what about the future? Nah, there's plenty of anti-Zionist Jews, man. Like, it's more shocking to me when I see like evangelical Christians behave this way than to see someone who's Jewish behave this way. Because like, at least they were brainwashed from a very early age. You know what I mean? It blows my mind when you hear like quote unquote atheists behave this way. People who are just like people who didn't go to a school where they taught you that the Holocaust will literally happen every single day if Israel doesn't exist. You know what I mean? Like it just doesn't. Yeah, the people anti-Zionist tabling are probably Jewish. Like
This is the flag of Lebanon. They've been Israel for a year now.
one of those terrorists was on the Jets, the New York Jets. Can you believe it? He had the patch. Robert Saleh. Can you believe it?
Now the thing is, what you're doing here is just wrong. Really, it's wrong, and what you're doing here, I bless you with only goodness, really, with only happiness. I'm a Jew, and all I want for you is to be happy, really, to be loved and to be happy. And this is just what you're doing here is just madness, and you know nothing. You know nothing.
I mean, in Israel, so terrifying. It's really broken the brains of the birthright of America. Anyway.
Can I hear?
You didn't have much to think about. We appreciate that.
You know, exactly. I'm not trying to bother you. All I'm trying to do is to understand. So please give me information.
There's not a chance you would actually, in good faith, try to understand.
I'm not even trying to do anything. I'm just trying to talk to them, and they don't even know.
Isn't Khan a far-right extremist? Guys, Mayor Khan and his followers are considered by the American State Department and the Israeli government, okay? Like, for the longest time, they were considered, the Israeli government that thinks the Nakba was a necessary evil, considered those guys to be too much. As a matter of fact, anytime you see that same granulated footage with a Motorola Razr phone of like some Jewish dude, some Orthodox Jewish dude talking about how like the Goyim are cows, okay? That is the one Kahanas meetup that they were able to film. Anytime I literally shows that footage that is so common in like circles will be like, this is exactly how all Jews think. Like they literally, those are Kahanas. Yes, it's the guy who, Baruch Goldstein was a Kahanist and 29 Palestinians that were praying in the mosque. Now, they recently got removed from the watch list, okay?
This is the same Cass Holloway that did nothing about it. This is the same Cass Holloway that when the students at Columbia University announced that is the only path forward and that they stand with the armed resistance, meaning the terrorists, did absolutely nothing. This is the same Cass Holloway that allowed these students for 3 weeks last year to terrorize the entire campus, creating a so-called liberated zone that was only liberated from Israelis and Jews who refused to denounce their identity. This is the same Cass Holloway who, for more than a year, has done absolutely nothing. You know why? Because Cass Holloway is not Jewish. Because Cass Holloway's kids are not Jewish. Because Cass Holloway doesn't give a...
That's crazy, man. Like, what are you saying? Every institution must be completely controlled, not by Jews, but like specifically Zionist Jews, is a wild thing to just openly say. That's cool.
Cass Holloway thinks that if he pushes Shai away, his problems are over. Cass, this message is for you. I'm not going anywhere. And you can go yourself until we meet at court.
Shai seems like the kind of guy to go postal. Nah, he's yeah, when he goes postal, he just huffs into a paper bag, dog. What are you talking about? He's a ginormous... It looks like he hasn't eaten since October 7. What are you talking about? He literally cried that people walked near him and they were wearing keffiyehs, okay? He ain't gonna do... It's also a very common, normal thing to do to refer to yourself in the third person. Shai is not going away. Whenever I see any unhinged coming from this weirdo, I go back to the video of him being punched in the face by a hostage family member. Wait, what? Something like that exists and I didn't know about this? Can you please explain that to me? Can you please show me that? Be careful, Habibi. You might get one of these love letters yourself, Lamau. What the fuck are you talking about? You think I don't already receive that? What do you mean? I got 27,000 love letters when I attended USC campus, when I was invited to go speak at USC campus. What do you mean? Like, what are you talking about? I've been called of the week. Oh, this wasn't the hostage families, dog. This is in 2023. This is not even in 2023. When they were doing that protest. Yeah, that's different. No, this is, I mean, it's still funny, but they got 20,000 emails for something you didn't even publicly announce. Yeah, I didn't publicly announce it for that reason, by the way, which is kind of funny that they still found out about it and were crying about it and it still didn't work. Anyway,
President Obama was out there last week waving his finger at black men. When are Liz Cheney and Hillary Clinton going to wave their finger at white women? When are Bill...
Hey, he's right, by the way. Charlemagne lived, but he's right.
Clinton and Joe Biden going to wave their finger at white men? Because 52% of white women voted for Trump in 2016. 55% voted for Trump in 2020. They all voted against their own interests. When the finger waving going to start at them?
Well, thank you for highlighting that. I do have the support of over 200 Republicans.
Bro, oh my God. She's literally a bot. She's such a bot. She is such a goddamn NPC. I'm sorry, dude. Like, it's like a parody, dude. It is... The way she operates is like a parody of a politician. Like, this is like a Family Guy bit. Well, thank you for highlighting that you're, that I got the endorsement of 200 Republicans
who worked for various administrations, including everyone going back to Ronald Reagan.
It's so funny watching like New York Times and NPR coverage of the Liz Cheney rally, and even they admit that it was mostly like almost every single person that they interviewed at those rallies were Democrats excited to hear Liz Cheney talk about how sick the Democratic Party is, with one guy that they found that was a Trump supporter. that voted for him in 2020, but January 6th was a bridge too far for him.
To the Bushes, to John McCain and Mitt Romney, and including Liz Cheney. I'm very proud to have her support. And I believe that many of them who may have voted for Trump before are supporting me because they know the stakes are so high.
That wasn't the take, and you know that wasn't the question, Kamala.
In terms of our very democracy and rule of law. And
so the finger wagging should start today or tomorrow.
Well, I think what is happening is that we are all working on reminding people of what is at stake, and that is very important.
But I do want to say...
Ugh, indeed. The stuff from the HasanAbi archive, it's great that it gives us access, but a lot of it is like too censored, so it cuts out a lot of the words. Anyway.
So it's worse than I heard.
This is going to be similar. It's HasanAbi reacts.
Biden camp are bitter for many reasons. Kamala doesn't take advice from the Biden advisors. Remember, don't say weird. That was them. Fired several. Biden is bitter. He got kicked out. And Harrison is a Biden guy. So the DNC also dislikes Kamala. Remember, DNC failed with Gaza Speaker Harrison. So he's probably fired if she wins. Yeah, I think obviously internal division here. Okay? But we already know that he is an immoral scumbag. Okay? We already know that the Democratic Party is overseeing and managing this. What is shocking to me is that on top of the overseeing of this managed, that they are trying to slap on a liberal optics-focused veneer, is that they are simultaneously throwing for the election. I was talking to a liberal friend of mine who's working with some super PACs at this moment, okay, for doing turnout and trying to do door-knocking operations. And one of the conversations that I was having with him, because he is not as worried about the polls because he keeps repeating, no, not Austin. Just stop trying to figure out. These are my normie friends, okay? You will never know who they are. I will never show them on camera. Shut up. Listen, I was talking to a normie friend of mine who is currently working with super PACs, okay? And the conversation that we were having, this back and forth that we were having over it, he basically said stuff like, oh, well, these are like Obama-era consultants. Like, they know what's going on. I'm not too worried. They actually have a lot of money. They're very excited. You know, they're excited about the war chest. Like, I think their internal polling must be good. Otherwise, they're not like, it doesn't seem like they're too worried. And I was like, dog, they are worried, okay? They are definitely worried, and they should be worried. Stop assuming that they're brilliant and doing everything for a good reason, okay? Stop assuming that they are doing something for a good reason. They are not, okay? Having said that, okay, one conversation that we had, because he was like, I finally was able to like wear him out and explain to him the situation. And I was like, listen, dog, like, this is not great. He was like, so what do you think could change the tide before November? And I told him one thing. There's only one thing that could truly change the dynamic of this election and swing polling in the opposite direction in the minds of a lot of undecideds. And that is if at any step, because they can't turn around from their sentiment. They're already too invested in that. They've already locked themselves into this. The only thing that can maybe change the outcome of this election if an arms embargo comes and Israel is brought to heel and is made to concede and forcibly pushed into a ceasefire. If that call comes in, if Brandon makes the boss call and actually changes the dynamic of this, there are still going to be plenty of people who are like you have my family, I'm never going to vote for you. But a lot of people would look to that, and the media coverage that you would get from that would potentially swing this election in your favor. That's the one thing. That is the one thing that they could do. And lo and behold, what did Brandon do? The next day, he's like, 30 days, arms embargo is coming in 30 days. You can starve them for 30 days. I had a lot of faith in Biden to do the right thing once Kamala took over. The pressure was off him. I'm here to admit I was wrong. You were right. And now I think Biden is truly bitter and actually dislikes Kamala's surge. I'm full doom on Biden and he wants to hurt Kamala. There is no real reason for Biden to come out and put a arms embargo or a red line on the table with a 30-day timeline that moves the needle past the election. There is literally no reason unless you are trying to throw, okay? The election is before 30 days, chat. It is before 30 days. Him saying you have 30 days to starve out the northern Gazan population beyond the immorality of the situation makes no decipherable, discernible sense from an bloodless electoral calculus, okay? You are deliberately throwing. It would have been better if he said nothing. Do you understand? If he had said nothing and kept saying, we're working tirelessly around the clock, it would just be the same old saying that you have a red line that will be enforced after the election is done is literally the most insane thing I have ever heard. That is wild. He's hoping the empty promise swings the polls, but we aren't stupid. No, I think he is throwing. I'm not even saying, I'm not even going to go. I'm telling you right now, he is throwing. I think he hates Kamala Harris. I think he hates the Democrats for taking away his toy. And he's like, I'm going to up the bag. I love Israel. Am Israel hijack. I don't give it. It's insane. It is incomprehensible. I think they're saying that the aid should start going in now and a report of it will be in 30 days. Yes, dog. That is an enforcement and a red line that comes after the election. If you could say 30 days, you could say tomorrow. You understand that? Do you understand that? You could say tomorrow. I'm enforcing this. You could have said that yesterday. I have a friend working at the DNC, and from what I've heard, your assessment is correct. There's bad blood in the White House. This is truly a spiteful, hateful thing that you do, okay? Like, because it obviously is insane. Like, it is not only immoral, but it also directly puts you at odds with it directly puts you at odds in terms of like openly putting it out there that you recognize that Israel is human rights, okay? You are openly recognizing that Israel is human rights and saying you got 30 days to stop human rights. So that in and of itself is psychotic. Okay, that is psychotic, but we expect that from Biden. He loves baby. He is number one at baby. He loves it. Okay, 100%, 100%. The fact that he said I will do an arms embargo after the election is only spiteful. It's only spiteful. That's it. It has to be. There is no discernible reason for him not to say you have 5 days. You have 1 day until you fix the situation. We recognize that this is human rights. That acknowledgement alone is a direct activation of the Leahy Law. Okay, that's it. America is supposed to, we know that America is a consistent of international law. We know that already, right? But this stuff is in the books. And there's a reason why they play this song and dance where they're like, oh, well, we don't recognize that Israel's human rights law, even though our own internal data shows that they are. Like, oops, USAID gave me an internal memo and I just kind of ripped it apart and lied to Congress. I'm Anthony Blinken. They do that kind of song and dance because there is obviously supposed to be some kind of like, something that keeps liberals together. Something that makes liberals believe that there is like rules around this sort of thing, right? You can't go too far ahead. You have to play the song and dance, okay? So it's worse than I heard. Kamala camp and Biden camp are bitter for many reasons. Kamala doesn't take advice from the Biden advisors. Remember, don't say weird, that was them. Fired several. Biden is bitter, he got kicked out, and Harrison is a Biden guy, so the DNC also dislikes Kamala. Remember, DNC failed with Gaza Speaker Harrison, so he's probably fired if she wins. Yeah, I think, obviously, internal division here. Both parties don't necessarily care about, like, the humanitarian needs of, they don't really think that, Palestinians are human beings worthy of dignity and freedom. Like, that part is obvious, because if they did, they would be screaming. At least one party would be like, what the fuck's going on here? This is completely unacceptable. But they are losers all the way down. Okay, it's all theater. They never even cared about optics. Yes, it is all theater. And that's why you do care about the optics. Okay, Democrats might come out of an immediate embargo now because this them completely. If they want to win, they should do it like they should have before. Yes, for months and months, I have said this. And if this happened one day, you would obviously, immediately, you would see every single commentator on CNN and MSNBC speaking like they literally have been locked in and tuned into the HasanAbi broadcast for the past 12 months. Okay, oh, we knew it. Oh, how gracious, how beautiful, how bold. It came too late, but it still happened, blah, blah, blah. The fact that she's kowtowing even further than Biden instead of pulling to the left and winning with the promise of an arms embargo is insane to me. So we'll see. We'll see. The only way that Kamala gets out of this polling hole that she's currently found herself in is if she, somehow, with some stroke of luck, with a Hail Mary campaign, gets the Brandon camp to like actually force Israel to do a ceasefire. That's it. That's it. Why is Biden talking about 30 days when he won't be president either way? Why didn't they make Kamala promise? No, he'd be lame duck. He is still the president. He's still the president until January 20th. So why is this bad for Kamala? I missed that part. What do you mean why is this bad for Kamala? There is one thing that could potentially... Okay, let's dial this back for a second, okay? Boom. I have the DC wonk hat on, okay? Forget everything. I am now a bloodless sociopathic monster who only cares about woke liberalism. I love the Democratic Party, okay? Imagine me as someone totally different. I'm Jamie Harrison, okay? Now listen. As Jamie Harrison, I'm looking at the polls, okay? I'm a Jamie Harrison type. I'm looking at the polls. I'm seeing that over the past month, undecideds have started swinging in Trump's direction. And what has happened in that past month? Donald Trump has done the media campaign. He's been going after all of these other avenues where he could possibly pick up a lot of low propensity, mid propensity voters in the podcast circuit, yada, yada, yada. But all of a sudden, the momentum from the Kamala camp has completely been cut short. And now the momentum is swinging in Trump's direction. Okay? Momentum is now swinging in Trump's direction. I look at the avenues of communication. What do I have in front of me? I can't say anything about immigration because I'm locked in. I've spent tens of millions of dollars talking about how I am going to be the one that annihilates the migrants with my border wall, and Trump is silly and goofy and hypocritical, yada, yada, yada. So I can't make a massive communications change on that front. Okay? I've already destroyed that. I can't do that. I'm seeing Black and Hispanic men under a certain age slipping dramatically to the Trump camp. I'm looking at Donald Trump beating my campaign on low and mid propensity voters by 9 points. I'm, on the other hand, beating Donald Trump with high propensity voters by 4 to 5 points. That's not great. There are far more mid to low propensity voters out there by numbers, and the percentages are higher. So it's not a good situation for me at all. All signs point to alarm bells ringing, okay? The campaign is on fire. We have a massive war chest. We have pumped tens of millions of dollars specifically into Pennsylvania, Michigan, Wisconsin, and many of these other important states. And yet The needle hasn't moved in my direction. It's moved in the opposite direction. That means the message that I'm putting out there is not working. Okay? It's not working. Now, there's one thing that I have in my power that I could do. There is one weapon that I can wield here. Because like the abortion stuff, it's working, but it's clearly not enough to swing the polls, right? There's one thing I do have though. Americans broadly want this Israel thing to be wrapped up. That's it. It could be for a multitude of different reasons, but the overwhelming majority of Americans want a ceasefire. That's it. The majority of Republicans want a ceasefire. Okay? That is a massively consequential and massively popular thing that I could do. And if I do it now, there isn't enough time or money that these big moneyed interests can attack me on, right? Because right now, if she did that, how much money could AIPAC spend against Kamala Harris on the general election? How important could that be for Americans when obviously Americans don't give up and they actually like a ceasefire in Israel, right? There is not enough time and not enough money to counter this objectively popular thing that she could do. So the only weapon that they have in their hands to change this trajectory is not even a communication, a difference in communicating like the humanity of the Palestinians or the humanity of the Lebanese people. Like that is too far gone. It's done. You've lost. You have to make actionable change and immediately do a full-throated media campaign to be like, we did that. You wanted it. We did that. We are the ones who did that. Okay? That's it. That's it. Surely AIPAC money wouldn't matter. Yes, it doesn't matter. You want to know why it doesn't matter? Because this is a general election. It's an objectively popular policy that like tens of millions, if not hundreds of millions of Americans are on board with. And last but not least, there isn't enough time for AIPAC to cut anti-Kamala ads, especially when Kamala could counter that with positive messaging surrounding this issue. Okay? It's not necessarily about separating herself from Biden. It's far too late for that. It's about forcing Biden's hand to push for a ceasefire, and it seems like Biden is not interested in doing that, okay? Common sense control popular. Common sense noting popular. Yeah, except common sense noting is more popular than common sense control right now. It is the 5th priority amongst Americans. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. The 5th one is Israel, Palestine, according to the NBC poll we looked at. Kamala Harris is losing to Trump by 15 to 18 points on that issue. They think Americans, for some reason, possibly because Trump is not currently in charge overseeing this, think that Trump would be better on Israel. And that's not because they think that Donald Trump is this. They think that Donald Trump is saying that he's going to continue that, and that's why. Because that is inconsistent when you look at the actual polling numbers on the issue of the ceasefire, where majority Republicans want a ceasefire as well. Genuine question, can you explain why Republicans want a ceasefire? A little confused on that. What do you mean? Because Americans fancy themselves to be anti-war, okay? No matter how aggro they are, they still personally think that war is bad. They think the top of the hour ad break is bad. They want to defend against that. They think that, they just don't like it. They don't like war. They don't like watching ads. They like subscribing, okay? Here's a 3-minute ad break now, by the way. You can subscribe for free or get a gifted sub if you're lucky. Here's a 3-minute ad break now. Hey, Top Dog 520, thank you for the prime. Benign Burger, thank you for the 20 community gifted subs. And Comrade Shai, thank you for the 5 gifted subs. The embargo letter leaked. Yeah, we're going to read the embargo letter in a second. Donald Trump leads Kamala Harris on handling Israel-Ukraine wars. Wall Street Journal poll shows. Anyway, let's continue with this.
And that we need to see Israel implement changes. They did make changes. The changes that they made caused humanitarian assistance to increase. We got up to somewhere between 300 to 400 trucks going in on some days. But the thing that the secretary also made clear at the time is that the increase couldn't be a one-off, that needed to be sustained. And what we have seen over the past few months is that the level of humanitarian assistance has not been sustained. In fact, it has fallen by over 50% from where it was at its peak. So the secretary, along with Secretary Austin, thought it was appropriate to make clear to the government of Israel that there are changes that they need to make again to see that the level of assistance making it into comes back up from the very, very low levels that it is at today.
And the consequence if they don't do that is what?
So I'm not going to speak to that today. Obviously, we made clear when we released our report that was mandated under National Security Memorandum 20 that there are provisions under U.S. law that require us to make certain certifications, and to make those certifications, we have to see that Israel is not arbitrarily denying humanitarian assistance, making it into. When the secretary made his conclusions under that report in April, he did so based on the changes that we had seen them put into place and the increased levels of humanitarian assistance. But of course, those levels of humanitarian assistance have to be sustained.
Yeah, but what's the consequence?
There are implications under U.S. law, under policy, that I'm not going to speak to here, largely because we hope that Israel makes the changes that the secretary outlined in the letter. We have seen Israel make changes before, and when they make changes, humanitarian assistance can increase. And we have seen Israel just in the past few months work with humanitarian organizations to implement a polio vaccination campaign inside. So we know that it's possible to get humanitarian assistance in. We know it can be done. We know that the various logistical and bureaucratic obstacles can be surmounted. And so it is incumbent upon the government of Israel to surmount those challenges and get assistance in.
I mean, you say that there are implications to it, and obviously under U.S. law, that's assistance. Is there specific assistance that under scrutiny?
So I don't want to deal with any hypotheticals. You are right that it's just a plain reading of U.S. law. If you look at the provisions of U.S. law, that we are required to conduct assessments and find that recipient.
Damn, where was that earlier, bro? What the? That's crazy. That's crazy. Turns out there is a law, huh? Yeah, there is no way to read this to make sure. Force Israel. Think carefully about the vibes you are bringing to the function. Immoral. He also seemingly. I'm saying there's no way to read this other than Biden being spiteful and throwing the election. We know he's an immoral dare. He also seemingly hates Kamala enough to make sure she loses. If this timeline was overnight, they could force Israel to commit to a ceasefire. I need that hat in my life, and you never told me where you got it. I didn't get it. My brother did, and he got it from Vietnam. He was in Vietnam, including the Coochie tunnel hat that I was wearing earlier. But That one. They just gave BB a clock on, especially with the high potential of a lame duck admin as a whole. Kamala losing. BB now has 30 days to get the job done. Yeah. That sounds like you support Harris like a lib. Yeah, I don't care how it sounds. It's true. The analysis is correct. Okay. Coochie tunnel. Is it possible that Biden wants to boost Kamala's numbers as a gesture towards a ceasefire while removing any pressure to follow through while setting the deadline after the election? No. There is no reason for Biden to do this. This makes Kamala look bad. I'm still riding with Biden. I'm still going to write his name in, of course. He did this 6 months ago. U.S. official says Israel sent assurance it is using arms lawfully days before the... Yeah, this is my Turkish goat, Hümeyra Pamuk, friend of the show, pushing the state spokesperson on the humanitarian aid. Why are you waiting another 30 days to implement the law, she says. Miller says, we believe it is appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. It has been over a year now. Officials from this department have addressed that Israel is persistently and arbitrarily impeding aid. And if it's already doing it, why is the U.S. waiting? There are people inside this building who reached the opposite conclusion, he says. Good. Have you ever heard that when companies are about to fail, they assign a woman CEO and then say, see, she messed up? Yeah, like Twitter. I always thought that was just for corporations. I didn't know they could do this for an election. Yeah, they're doing it to the Democratic Party. That's such a funny, that is a funny take. I agree with that. They literally are just like, yeah, see, the woman did up. It's the same, dude. What was it? Linda Yaccarino or whatever, becoming the CEO of Twitter to throw the goddamn, to throw the goddamn platform in a wastebasket. Yeah, that's great.
Recipients of U.S. military assistance do not arbitrarily deny or impede the provisioning of U.S. humanitarian assistance. That's just the law, and we, of course, will follow the law. But our hope is that Israel will make the changes that we have outlined and that we have recommended, and that the result of those changes will be a dramatic...
Why would they do that? Why would they do that? Of course they're not going to do that. They've never done that.
The thing is, this whole idea of like Biden's spitefully trying to get Kamala to lose just makes too much sense, unfortunately, with how things, especially how things turned out.
For 12 months, you haven't done that.
Dramatic increase in humanitarian assistance. Ultimately, we are focused on the bottom line here. It's just it. Humanitarian assistance had been low. The changes that we had recommended had gotten it up, and those levels have not been sustained. And so we need...
Oh, and just to be clear, those levels were not met after the 30-day deadline. They weren't met, but you can guess what happened next. The U.S. said, yeah, it's good enough. They didn't meet the standards we wanted for them. They didn't actually provide enough humanitarian aid, but the U.S. said, hey, we're not going to cut off weapons anyway because it's good enough.
We need to see further changes by the government of Israel.
I mean, obviously, the timing of this, I know you don't explicitly do politics, but there's an election coming up here. To what extent is that a factor? I mean, 30 days from now will be after the U.S. election. It's been a year since the conflict has been ongoing. The president has repeatedly warned Israel about assistance, about civilian casualties, with, at best, mixed results sometimes. This happened just 30 days before the election. I mean, to what extent was the election a factor?
It's not a factor at all. The bottom line is we felt it was appropriate if we are making clear to the government of Israel that there are these changes that need to be implemented, that we give them an appropriate period of time to implement them. We didn't think it was appropriate to send a letter and just say this has to happen overnight. We gave them make clear there's a short window in which we want to see changes because the humanitarian situation is so dire on the ground, but it is appropriate to give them some time to work through the different issues and find ways to get the level of trucks, get the level of food, water, medicine back up to acceptable levels. Yeah, Mary.
Hi, Matt. So the 620I Foreign Assistance Act actually doesn't have the word arbitrarily. You say it's the law, but the NSM 20, which is a memorandum, has the word arbitrarily. So the Foreign Assistance Act says, when it's made known to the President that the government of such country prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport of delivery of United States humanitarian assistance, it does not have arbitrarily. So given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. And international humanitarian law does make...
They didn't cure the problem, just to be clear. They didn't do it then, they didn't do it since. It's the exact same thing.
Exceptions for certain, I'll give you an example. Dual use items is a good example. If there are dual use items that legitimately could be used as a military purpose, of course governments aren't required to let those dual use items in, which is not to say that they can use that exception as a blanket restriction on anything that can be used as a dual use item. For example, if there are military movements happening in a certain period of time, governments can restrict the provision of humanitarian aid during that period because obviously you wouldn't want to put humanitarian workers at jeopardy. So it is not accurate to say that there can be no restrictions. It's that those restrictions ultimately can't block civilians from getting the humanitarian access that they need, and that is what we're focused on doing. And so we think it's appropriate. Ultimately, what we want to see here is results. This isn't about making a...
Bro, you don't understand. There is dual use for the flour, okay? Dual use goods, baby. Scissors, dual use. Could be used for, could also be used to cut medical gauze, but guess what? There's dual use for medical gauze too. I feel like this community's gotten so doomer pilled, it's hard to watch y'all at this point. Man, something about like directly looking at a ongoing for 12 fucking months on end with seemingly no improvements to the living conditions of the Palestinian people as it gets worse and worse every day kind of has a doomer slant to it, don't you think? Like, my bad, bro. My bad if we're up the vibes for you. Brad Summer. What do you mean, dude? It's not only just like doomer pilled or whatever, okay? I try to do my very best in the midst of the ongoing coverage of that we are funding and facilitating, I try to do my very best to just have like a cheery approach to see the silver lining. But beyond that, like I give liberals what they want. I give liberals the electoral calculus as well to all of this. Like if that makes you feel bad, if that makes you feel, I don't know what to tell you, you know, smile and dial, dude. Saying you guys are doomer pilled is pretty funny. Oh, vibe check. It's no longer Brad Summer. Do you actually think libs will implement arms embargo? No, dude. What? No, they should have done it a million times over. Okay. Here's a good take, by the way, from the Trill Billy. Ray says, when I say the Palestinian issue is preeminent for me, I don't mean that it comes before every other issue. I mean that it is the primary contradiction around which everything else unravels. This is it, guys. This is what slavery was in the 19th century. It's the check coming due. Absolutely correct take. No, I'm not going to do his accent. Shut up. But it's correct. It is the most like obvious, glaringly obvious inconsistency that you can imagine. It goes against every single moment that America has stood tall and proud atop the mountain of empire and said, we are the preeminent defenders of the rule-based international order, okay? It just showcases in full display that we are a bloodthirsty empire that has no issues eviscerating children, no issues eviscerating teenagers inside of a tent in a hospital, lighting them on fire. That's it. It is a wake-up call, in my opinion, for a lot of people in the Western world, too. Like, they see it. They see how America's response to this is to try to pummel anyone and everyone that says, hey, this is up. It's so clear. The inconsistencies are so obvious. The inhumanity is so obvious. It is the issue. It is the issue. And in a way, it's like when people go, well, what about this? Or what about that? What about Sudan, right? Like those are obviously massive humanitarian crises as well that countries that we back are funding and facilitating, like the UAE. But beyond that, this is a direct through line of America, what America says versus what America does. Okay, that's it. No, it's not whataboutism Andy's. Like that is a massive humanitarian catastrophe also unfolding right there. They're directly in the hands of our allies, utilizing some of the bounty that we have afforded them in terms of security contracts. The issue here, however, is that is still like at least 2 ticks removed from direct American intervention, whereas America and Israel are like this. Okay, America and Israel are like this. It's very obvious. It's like when Israel's a Palestinian child, most people recognize that it's America and that child. So what is this guy saying here? Israel should let the aid get in, and them, yes. And Israel saying, no, we're not even going to do that.
Rhetorical statement. It's not about making any kind of threats. It's about seeing the situation reversed. And so that the civilians who are not getting adequate access to food and medicine and other humanitarian goods today actually see, as a result of our efforts, a change in their daily lives. And that's what we're focused on achieving, and that's what we are trying to achieve through this letter.
Sure, but I guess what I'm trying to get at, and I'll ask you again, is like we've been at this for over a year now. You have made these warnings dozens of times, if not more, from this podium. Secretary has done it. President of the United States has done it. And yet we're here. Other outlets have reported, but Reuters has reported all the way back in April, that officials from this department have assessed in internal memos that Israel, quote, is persistently and arbitrarily
Matt Miller to baby
aiding. So if the law is already being, like, I mean, if it's already doing it, why is the United States waiting?
So first of all, that is not, so we've been over this before, I know, from this podium. There are people that reach that conclusion, and there are people inside this building who reach the opposite conclusion. So I think it's...
Oh, shit, dude. There's people have reached the opposite conclusion. No, they haven't. No, they haven't. They're just lying, okay? That's it. They're just lying. And it's pretty obvious that they're just lying. Because virtually not even virtually, every single humanitarian aid organization, international institutions of justice have come to the same exact conclusion after stepping foot inside of Israel is not rendering aid to the civilian population of...
Sorry, there's no Fortnite in the background. The game crashed. This is a little short video. I'm not sure exactly by who. I don't remember off the top of my head, but yeah, content warning. It seems to be something severe. Just while Fortnite launches again.
When she...
What?
Mire, presidente, yo creo que de lo que estamos hablando es...
Let's restart that. Sorry.
Mire...
Look, Mr. Prime Minister, this is by Middle East Eye. Spain is complicit in Israel's genocide, says MP3. This is in Madrid. This is on October 16th. Look, Mr. Prime Minister, I believe
yo creo que de lo que estamos hablando
what we're discussing is very serious.
es muy serio. El pasado
Last Saturday, Israel did this.
domingo, Israel...
Sunday. Sorry, not last. Yeah, this. Last Sunday, Israel did this.
Hizo esto.
I imagine you can see what's happening there, but if you can't, it's the young man that was burnt alive while connected to an IV drip. This is him before, and this is him literally being burned alive with the IV drip stuck in him. These tents were set ablaze by the Israeli bombs. These tents were there since the hospitals were no longer functioning because of how relentless the bombing has been, and specifically because Israel has been bombing every single hospital in Gaza. So these tents where people have been trying to treat the injured were targeted as well, and this young man was burnt alive.
Quemó vivas.
Burned dozens of people alive in tents. Yes, he was not, of course, not the only one, but sorry about that. It was quite a prominent sight.
A decenas de personas en tiendas de campaña.
Has burned dozens of people alive while they were taking refuge in a hospital. It was right outside the hospital, or where the hospital used to be.
Campaña cuando estaban en un hospital refugiadas. ¿Qué diferencia
What is the difference between
hay
this?
entre esto y las cámaras de gas?
What is the difference between this and the gas chambers of the Nazis? It's a very, very good question.
De los nazis, se lo pregunto, señor.
I ask all of you and the president.
A todos, al presidente. Ninguna
There is no difference. And we as a country,
diferencia. Y por nosotras
we as a country are being complicit in this genocide.
estamos siendo cómplices como país de este genocidio.
You travel the world talking about an arms
Usted recorre el mundo
embargo that you are incapable of enforcing.
hablando de un embargo de armas que ustedes son incapaces de aplicar como gobierno.
You're unable of enforcing as a government. Just so you know, 70% of Israel's weapons are of Israel's arm imports are sent by the US. 30% are sent by Germany, and I think I know it doesn't add up. It's approximately 70%, approximately 30%, and approximately 1 or 2% are sent by the UK.
El gobierno,
The government, your government, has sold
su gobierno, ha vendido armas
has sold arms after 7th of October. You have bought
después del
weapons
7 de octubre. Ha comprado armas por valor de
worth 1 billion euros. 1 billion euros, ladies and gentlemen,
mil millones de euros, señorías,
during this year of genocide.
durante este año de genocidio. Han permitido el transporte de
You have
armas
allowed the transport of weapons through,
a través de nuestros puertos durante todo
allowed the transfer of weapons through our ports throughout this year. That is true.
este año. Si se cree de
If you truly believe in the arms embargo,
verdad el embargo de armas, señor Sánchez,
Mr. Sanchez, stop lying and enforce it
deje de mentir y aplíquelo de una
once and for all.
vez. Mire, presidente.
Yes. Ironically, Spain is one of the countries that have been doing better than other countries. Relatively speaking, has been doing better than a lot of countries in terms of holding Israel to account and, wanting to implement an actual arms embargo. But clearly, it's not good enough, and plenty of countries are complicit. This is another short by TRT World. Israeli soldier shoots fleeing Palestinian children. You can see the children running over there, and the Israeli soldier aiming his weapon at them. Literally, why? These are fleeing children. You know what? If they were combatants, which they're not, they are children. If they were adult combatants, if they turn their back on you, they have no weapons, and they are running away, you do not shoot them. Yeah. You can see there's 4 children running. And one of them drops. It's been shot.
This is the film you will not see on the BBC.
This is Double Down News. Israeli soldiers' sickening war crimes exposed. Closed captions are on. I'll turn up the speed while I set up the game again.
This is the film you will not see on the BBC or CNN or any other Western media. Over the last year, we have witnessed what is the greatest crime of the 21st century. And perversely, it's a crime that has been meticulously documented and presented to us by the people who are carrying it out. We at Al Jazeera have collated all that evidence, packaged it. What it reveals is truly shocking. We focus on the town of Keffiyeh, which is a small town of about 13,000 people. The Israeli army enters this town just after Christmas. It's emptied of people, and they simply destroy it. And they record themselves doing it. They post before and after videos, and the town is entirely flattened. There is no precedent for this in the whole history of the Israeli army. We have become addicted to explosions. The willful destruction of civilian property for punitive reasons, or even perhaps to create a buffer strip, is illegal. You can't do that. It's against international law. And they're doing it, and they're recording it, and they're putting it on Facebook. And we know the names of the soldiers and the commanders who did it. They go into the homes of Palestinians, and they're often clearly staying there, and they just smash them up, and they film themselves smashing them up. They also delight in going through women's underwear drawers, and this is a sort of recurring obsession. You have to see Israeli soldier videos in the context of the broader output of Israeli society.
If you gave me a button to just erase Gaza, every single living being in Gaza would no longer be living tomorrow, I would press it in a second. I would press it right now. Give me that button. I'd press it right now.
There you go.
And I think most Israelis would.
There's an Israeli song called This Was My Home. And what they would do is dress up as caricatures of obviously what they perceive Palestinians to be, being sung mockingly to people who no longer have homes. We're not looking at some sort of obscure subculture within Israeli society. This is mainstream Israeli society. When people tell you who they are, believe them.
It's an entire nation out there that is responsible. And we will fight until we break their backbone.
972 magazine carried a story about how the Israelis were using AI, artificial intelligence, for targeting. Essentially, they had a problem. They wanted a rate of strikes in the Gaza Strip, which human computation couldn't keep up with. They needed to use AI to identify these targets. They're using people's phones and their social media, any information at all they can scrape about them, and then they track them through their phones. So who are they talking to on their phone? Who are they simply near as they're carrying their phones around? And they have a little league table. And if you accumulate enough points, you can be killed. The terrifying thing is how do you kill them? Where do you kill them? And they reached the calculation that it's much easier to kill people when they're at home, which is where the second bit of software kicks in, which is called Where's Daddy? The naming is indicative of a fairly dark sense of humor. They track you. Once Daddy is home, they can kill you, and of course along with anyone else who is in the house as well. It's astonishing what Israeli soldiers do put on film, but that raises the question of what they don't put on film. You very rarely see them actually fighting. Every now and then you'll see them all firing their guns, but usually pretty clear there's no incoming. On the other hand, what you see a great deal of is them dressing up in women's underwear. Has Israel managed to destroy Hamas? I would point to a really simple, common sense thing. Israeli soldiers have posted thousands of videos online. The IDF, the Israeli army, repeatedly posts videos online. Scour those videos for the bodies of dead fighters, and there's remarkably few. I remember 20 years ago in Afghanistan when the Taliban fell, before the age of social media, and I remember making films about that. Footage with piles of corpses. It's extraordinary how few dead Hamas fighters we are seeing. Another extraordinary facet of this conflict is the repeated attacks on hospitals. They have assaulted every single one of the 36 hospitals in the Gaza Strip. We have the films of Mohammed Al-Halu, a remarkable young journalist who really chronicled the whole story of the Nasser hospital. The Israelis are very keen to drive people taking refuge in the hospital out, to force them further south. They send a messenger into the hospital to order the people there to leave, and they use a detainee, and they've made it quite clear to him they know who his mother is, where she is, and that she...
Just to be clear, that is use of human shields, first of all. And I did want to address this earlier. 972 magazine, this isn't some, I don't know, anti-Semitic magazine. It's an Israeli magazine.
He will be killed if he does not return. So he does return. They send him back because the people still aren't leaving. People aren't leaving because they don't trust the Israelis. One of the few people who does leave is his mother. She follows him out with a small group of other people, and he's killed in front of her eyes. Having used him as a messenger, as a human shield, effectively, they simply shoot him. They shoot him 3 times in front of her eyes and kill him. What is extraordinary about so many of the soldiers' videos is the sense of impunity they have. One particular video is the 202nd paratroopers. When they left Gaza, individuals within that unit put together a video. It's like a commemorative video, and it's edited and it's set to music and so on. It's been up on YouTube now for 6 months. It includes 3 men, separate incidents, men who are shot by snipers. They are putting up the killing of people who are clearly unarmed. And for soldiers to post this in their own names shows a sense that they simply don't have to account for their actions at all. Deaths by snipers are very common in the Gaza Strip, and it's not just adult men. There's a particular shot of a child, a young boy, who was shot at the gates of the Nasser hospital. It's then too dangerous to collect the body. If you're a sniper, you know who you're shooting. You've got very good sights and you know perfectly well what you're looking at. Mohammed al-Halou, he is almost killed numerous times. One of the occasions is he's shot. He's wearing a flak jacket. They've actually managed to hit the thing that says press. One of the dreadful things about working as a journalist and as a human rights worker during this conflict, not only do you not have sort of immunity, as it were, you are positively a target. As Western journalists, we sometimes work in very hairy situations and we face danger and so on. What we don't generally wrestle with is the perpetual fear that they're going to murder our children. And in fact, on a number of occasions, they have murdered the families of Al Jazeera journalists. It's shameful that the international journalistic community has not stood up more, not just for Al Jazeera, but for all those other journalists who have been killed in the Gaza Strip.
Well over 10% of all journalists in Gaza have lost their lives since this conflict began. The usual mortality rates expected of infantry soldiers is less than 5%. So we're talking about absolutely shocking levels of loss of life.
Detainees are clearly abused when they are first taken prisoner. We've all seen the images of them stripped to their underwear. It's clearly designed to humiliate. We gathered accounts in the Gaza Strip of people being beaten. We have a picture of one man who had a Star of David carved into his back. In a way, for many, this is just a prelude to when they're taken into Israel to these detention centres. In our film, we have one grotesque eyewitness account of a dog being used to rape someone.
فجأة جردوه من ملابسه السفلية. إجا كابتن كان موجود.
Sorry, 1 second.
Someone.
فجأة
They stripped him of his underpants.
جردوه من ملابسه السفلية. إجا كابتن كان موجود.
A captain came and sprayed something on his backside.
موجود. إجا زي وضع مادة حاجة يعني على مؤخرة الشر. وأطلقوا كان في كلب موجود.
There was a dog there. They unleashed the dog on him.
أطلقوا عليه كلب. كلب هذا يعني كيف.
The dog raped the young man.
أقول لك مش مارس الجنس.
It raped him, literally speaking.
اغتصب الشاب. اغتصبوه في معنى الكلمة.
Rape.
UN report at the end of June identified 53 individuals who have been killed in Israeli detention. There's a report on Israel's Channel 13 broadcasting to the world, advertising the fact, celebrating the fact that these men spend 24 hours in complete darkness with a single hole for a toilet, in handcuffs, chained together with leg cuffs. The whole focus of the report is clearly the Israeli public, and what they're trying to stress is how badly these people are being treated, because clearly the political issue within Israel is whether they're not being treated badly enough.
Sorry about that. 1 second.
Being treated badly enough.
Soldiers are suspecting of raping a shackled prisoner. This doesn't concern you? The other man replies, I don't give a rat's arse what they do to that Hamas man. The only problem I see is that it's not state policy to abuse detainees. Firstly, they deserve it, and it's a great form of revenge. Secondly, maybe it will act as a deterrent.
No one can hide here.
This is on Israeli Channel 12. It's just publicly what they say.
No one can pretend they didn't know what was happening, because the Israelis were shouting it in our faces. Human shields are an enormously important topic, and it's an absolute indictment of Western media, the way this is covered. The idea that Hamas, the Qassam brigades and so on, used the civilian population as human shields. There is no evidence that they are positively using them as human shields, in the sense that they're hiding behind them, not allowing them to leave, or not telling them that they're there. A second point about that as well. What is there about Israeli behavior over the last year that would lead anyone for a moment to think that the presence of civilians would lead them to hold their fire? There's absolutely nothing to suggest that they would respect the fact that there are civilians in the way and therefore not shoot, which means that it would be utterly pointless for Hamas. I've looked at the Qassam Brigade's own combat videos, which are a stark contrast to the videos that the Israeli soldiers put online. There's over 300 of them, and they very often show successful attacks on tanks and other armoured vehicles. These attacks all take place in desolate, abandoned landscapes. I have not seen a single civilian. Now then there is the secondary point. The UN, international and Israeli human rights organisations have found the Israelis to be guilty of using human shields. In the film we have footage of this. You can see there they are, hiding behind people, resting their guns on their shoulder. They've got a man and he's being forced to go and inspect empty buildings, open the doors and so on, so that if they're booby-trapped or if there's an ambush, he will get it. It's clearly absolutely systematic. Now, the fact that the entirety of Western media and the Western political class continues to trot out this mantra about it being Hamas that hides behind human shields, when all of the abundant evidence suggests precisely the opposite.
The Israelis today saying that Hamas use Palestinians as human shields, do they?
Killing the victims, then blaming the victims for killing themselves. I mean, what is this logic? Palestinian groups take their own people hostages. This is racism. This is sickness.
The appalling caliber of the journalism is just absolutely shocking. Israeli behavior is dependent on the indulgence of the West. We use some of Matt Kennard's reporting in Declassified UK. Matt has done an awful lot of work exposing the role of RAF Akrotiri, a place most British people probably haven't heard of, but we still own a chunk of Cyprus, and on it we have a bloody great Air Force base. And it is clearly playing a vital role in this conflict. Right from the beginning of the conflict, you had huge military transport planes flying to Israel, numerous surveillance flights in the air for 6 hours at a time, sent from RAF Akrotiri in Cyprus over the Gaza Strip. And the suspicion would be that they are providing targeting information to the Israelis. Already by March, they'd accumulated 1,000 hours of surveillance footage over the Gaza Strip. The government is not providing a satisfactory explanation of what all this footage is being used for.
Will he also explain what role, legally or otherwise, Britain has played in overflying Gaza with surveillance aircraft and the use of RAF Akrotiri as a staging point for aircraft going to Israel, which many people believe are carrying weapons that are used to bomb Gaza?
I'm very comfortable with the support that we give to Israel, and I won't comment on operational issues.
The double standards of Western media, of Western politicians, are just breathtaking. I mean, you just have to look at David Lammy and Keir Starmer's response to the Iranian attack on Israel, which didn't actually kill anyone.
I utterly condemn this attempt by the Iranian regime to harm innocent Israelis.
And they were straight to the lectern condemning it in a way that they have not condemned the Israelis, who have killed over 40,000 people. It's quite clear that the lives of one group of people are worth more than the lives of another group of people. If Israel is attacked, the Western media and Western politicians are full of rhetoric about Israel has a right to defend themselves.
Israel has a right to defend itself.
Israel has a right to defend itself.
Israel has a right to self-defense. We stand with Israel, and we recognise her right to self-defense.
If Israel attacks people, then the whole media narrative is about fears of escalation. In other words, the great danger that the other side might fight back. The double standards are just breathtaking. One way in which we're sort of liberated at Al Jazeera is we don't have to buy into this bogus two-sidesism, this bogus sort of equivalence. There is no equivalence between, on the one hand, an all-powerful occupying power, building illegal settlements on Palestinian land, and on the other side, a prostrate, helpless, powerless people. There's no moral, political, or military equivalence there. But also, on October 7th, 2 babies are killed. Okay, which is dreadful, it's appalling. At the end of August, when the Gazan Health Ministry published detailed figures, the first 14 pages, 701 names, were taken up with children under the age of 1. And that doesn't include 7,000 people for whom there's no documentation. It doesn't include the large numbers of people who are still under the rubble or who have died because of lack of access to healthcare. It's very, very likely that in the end, the total number of dead and injured in the Gaza Strip will be more than 250,000 people. There is just no comparison between the two. Now, if, as for example, the BBC often does, you achieve balance by having 2 stories in your evening news report. On the one hand, reporting the very real anguish and trauma of a family who still have a son or a daughter in captivity in Gaza, and on the other hand, an airstrike which has killed 40 people, 15 of them, whatever, who are perhaps children. If you are treating that as equivalent, you are buying into a fundamentally racist arithmetic.
There was no balance in what was going on. Israeli spokespeople who we did have on were given a lot of free rein to say whatever they wanted with very little pushback.
Babies were set on fire. Babies were shot in the head.
Whereas any Palestinian guest was asked to condemn Hamas.
But I want to ask you specifically about Hamas's actions today. Do you support them?
Israel has a right to defend itself. That was the editorial line that was drilled into us, into all of our coverage. To a guest talking about, Israeli airstrikes killing Palestinians in Gaza, that would be the response from our presenters.
Denying access to food is collective punishment, and that we should all be clear in saying that.
Israel will argue, obviously, that it has a right to defend itself.
People were terrified of using the word genocide in coverage. They still are. You will very rarely see it in any BBC coverage. And if an interviewee says the word genocide...
This is a genocide happening in front of our eyes.
That word is, as you know, incredibly emotive, and the Israelis, as you know, will be saying that they are targeting Hamas only.
No one can say they didn't know. The Israelis could not have made it clearer to us what they were doing in their rhetoric, social media they were posting, and what their own media was saying, that this was an exercise in ethnic cleansing, quite possibly an exercise in genocide. They were making it abundantly clear to us. And if we are ignorant, we are willfully ignorant. When people tell you who they are, believe them. And the Israelis have certainly told us who they are over the last year. The experience of the last year is testimony to the inadequacy of traditional media in the West, which seems simply to be unable to tell this story as it really is. And it highlights more than ever the need for independent media outlets like Double Down News. And I would urge you to support Double Down News on Patreon.
I mean, yeah. Give me a second. Just getting out of this, and oh my god, done horribly this race. A few races, but it's fine.
The reporter who's been breaking.
Biden threatens Israel arms embargo after election. Yes, again, this is from a month ago, so a lot of it very outdated. I'm sorry about that. But again, I want to stress how important it is to see the build up to the situation where we're in. I do have quite a repository of videos that have led up to even the beginning of my streams that I haven't viewed, and I would like to eventually go through those to see these videos go back to, I think, early November 2023. I'm not sure. So just as soon as this story was picking up.
Basically all of the news from either the White House or out of the Knesset or out of Netanyahu's camp, Barack Ravid over at Axios, is the receptacle for all the leaks from both sides, has a news story that is kind of reshaping the politics of Palestine. We put his piece up here. So basically what happened is over the weekend, the U.S. finally sent a sternly worded letter to Israel, which then it appears quite clearly that Israel then leaked to Barack Ravid. I want to read some of this just so people can get a flavor for it. They write, the humanitarian situation for over 2 million civilians in Gaza is increasingly dire. This is supposed to be a private letter. Despite the July transition from combat operations to special counterterrorism operations in the Gaza Strip, multiple evacuation orders have forced 1.7 million people into a narrow coastal zone from Muwasi to Deir al-Balah. Extreme overcrowding has put these civilians at high risk of lethal contagion. Humanitarian implementers report they're unable to meet essential survival needs of aid-dependent civilians. Trucks carrying humanitarian commodities, including perishable goods funded by the United States, are delayed at crossing platforms. I would encourage people to go and read this entire letter. It reads like some type of left-wing screed that you would find me penning somewhere. But it is just fact after fact after fact that says that, and it says that September was the worst month on record since this assault began a year ago for humanitarian aid getting in. And we also know that October has been worse than September. Like the situation is completely out of control. And they highlight the plight of 400,000 people. So you're talking 1.7 million people tucked into this little tiny enclave. They highlight the plight of 400,000 people in North Gaza that the IDF is ordering to leave North Gaza or be considered combatants, and has completely cut off from water and humanitarian aid and starving them to death. And the U.S. is saying, you can't do this. Like, there is no military justification for this. And these 400,000 people, most of them are refusing to leave. First of all, we have some reporting on this at Dropsite. People who do try to leave are then shot at, many of them killed. But many others are saying, we're not leaving because we have been through this rodeo. We do not believe that there is anywhere else in Gaza to go that is safe. So we're stuck here. This is part of, and we can put up this next tweet, which is kind of a summary from the Israeli perspective of what's been going on lately. So this letter comes at the same time. And so if you're listening to this, this is somebody who's doing a rundown. It says a rundown of kind of the international pressure Israel is under. One, Italian Prime Minister, it says that they're no longer supplying Israel with any weapons. Germany is refusing to supply weapons since March 2024. Some of this is like slightly exaggeration, but this is the way it feels from the Israeli perspective. United Kingdom canceled around 30 licenses to supply weapons. 4, France and Spain advocate for full weapon embargo. 5, Canada suspended 30 permits for arms sales. And then 6 is this latest, USA threatens to halt weapon supply amid its fight with Hezbollah. And then they quote, allies with ironclad support, unquote. Israel will prevail with or without you. So on the one hand, from the left, we see this letter going to Israel as, what took you so long? Is a year in, you're not serious. You're not actually going to do any of this. From Israel's perspective, they see themselves completely isolated. The left-wing perspective, or not it's not the left-wing, it's my perspective. The question of what took you so long made up most of the press briefing.
Well, that's the question, is how real is this? And also, if you put a month deadline, that's after the election, right? Because we're 20 days to the election. Yes. So reality is you're not doing anything until after the election. It seems to be key.
Right, and what that thing is, I think it's starting to become clear. But your question is the one that everybody who read this letter immediately asked, which is, what took you so long? And this was also asked of Matt Miller. We can roll this from the State Department.
The Foreign Assistance Act says, when it's made known to the president that the government of such country prohibits or otherwise restricts directly or indirectly the transport of delivery of United States humanitarian assistance, it does not have arbitrarily. So given you are already saying humanitarian assistance is very low and putting in front of Israel a bunch of concrete measures on how to improve it, why are you waiting for another 30 days to implement the law?
Because we believe it's appropriate to give them a chance to cure the problem. And international humanitarian law does make exceptions for certain, I'll give you an example, dual-use items is a good example. If there are dual-use items that legitimately could be used as a military purpose, of course governments aren't required to let those dual-use items in, which is not to say that they can use that exception as a blanket restriction on anything that can be used as a dual-use item.
So there was a lot of talking around in circles at the press briefing, which combined like some stern words like, yes, like right now, Israel, we do believe in violation of 620I, this thing that says you can't send military aid to a country that is blocking U.S. humanitarian aid. But they say, wait, we want to give them a moment to cure this. The context for this, like you said, is, okay, 30 days is after the election. What's going to happen after the election? And I think we're starting to see that. So, Control Room, sorry, we'll skip me for now. I had a couple questions that I think are interesting, but are not exactly on this particular topic. Let's finish this topic first. If we could jump to D5, this is Senator Lindsey Graham talking about a quote-unquote day after plan that is starting to be developed, kind of absent the Palestinians, between the U.S., the Israelis, and some of their Gulf partners over there. And I think you're going to start to see this come into focus. Go ahead.
Now's the time, if you're ever going to do it, to start a dialogue with Saudi Arabia about the day after.
Right, but the Saudis have also been very clear that what they want in return, that there needs to be a viable, sovereign, independent Palestinian state which the Israelis recognize.
They want two things. For them to recognize the state of Israel, they want a defense agreement with the United States. Saudi Arabia and the United States would have a mutual defense agreement like we have with Japan and Australia. In other words, the United States would go to war for Saudi Arabia. That requires 67 votes in the U.S. Senate. Senator Blumenthal is a Democrat trying to get the votes. I told MBS a year and a half ago, that will be a heavy lift, but I will try.
But the Israelis also have to want to recognize an independent Palestinian state. They're not going to do that.
An independent sovereign nation called Palestine, with security guarantees for Israel to make sure there's no future October 7th. It will be more like an emirate than it will be a democracy. MBS and MBZ at the UAE will come in and rebuild Gaza. They will reform the PA. They will create an enclave in Palestine that can live in peace and harmony with Israel. They will stop teaching their children to kill the Jews. A de-radicalized, a demilitarized.
Is that actually true? Is that how they teach it?
Yes, literally.
So what's going on there?
Yeah, so the key phrase there is, from Graham, if you pick this up, was, quote, called Palestine. So this morning, Barack Ravid had another piece, and this goes into the context of what we're talking about here.
Monster.
Basically, Ron Dermer, who is Netanyahu's top aide, and some top officials over at the UAE, met with Antony Blinken and presented him with the proposal that you basically just heard Lindsey Graham lay out. Lindsey Graham was about a week ago. But this is putting it down in paper form. And what they asked Blinken to do was perhaps after the election to present it as a U.S. plan.
Palestine,
that
and Saudi
the
Arabia
U.S. has
pay for
decided that this is the way to go forward. And the plan sidesteps the idea of Palestinian statehood because, as the report lays out, Netanyahu is stridently opposed to any mention of a two-state solution. That any idea that Palestinians would get any version of statehood in this plan is something that Netanyahu rejects. Yet he is still working with the UAE on moving forward with this plan. And so that's where it goes back to Lindsey Graham's idea of quote unquote called Palestine. So what that means basically, as he said, it would be an emirate. So it would be something
under the UAE. Is that?
So yeah. So basically, the U.S., the UAE, Saudi Arabia, who knows who else, would get in, and they'd say, okay, we're getting rid of Abbas. We're getting rid of because Israel doesn't even approve of the Palestinian Authority being involved in this, and they will create some other mechanism that they will call independent. They will call Palestine. And the UAE and Saudi Arabia will offer the security guarantees, and then they'll offer the funding. The U.S. will fund it as well, and Israel will then have to withdraw. But it will not be remotely sovereign. And it will
who will be the sovereign? UAE.
Well, the whole thing's fake.
Yeah, exactly. That's I think what I'm just trying to get at.
So basically, the way for Israel to agree to it was it would have to have no real sovereignty. But it would have to be called sovereignty.
Look, this is nation building at its absolute worst. Trying to impose. First of all, I've lived in the Gulf.
Notice what we haven't talked about here. The Palestinians.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. I've lived in the Gulf. The Gulf, they don't care about Palestine. Okay, but the leaders themselves, they don't care at all. Period. They gave up a long time ago. They wouldn't even open their mouths.
They hate that they have to deal with it.
Oh, absolutely. The actual people there who live, they definitely do. But the actual leadership, they care less. They just want to be rich, live in London. That's all they care about. But so this is like a thorny problem for them. For them to, if you have to consider this, to impose like the rule from the UAE onto people of whom they have like no relation to, both, they may speak the same language, that's about it, who they frankly like disdain and already look down upon. That's a recipe for disaster. What do you think is going to happen? You're going to have massive insurgency. You're going to have like the funding for it. It will be like Afghanistan 2.0 in terms of trying to impose this like fake form of government with allies and partners and all of this other onto. And if you were Hamas, like why would you even accept that? You would just fight against now this new insurgency. The only thing this would do is bail out Israel because they're the ones who don't want to be the occupied.
And Israel won't even accept this,
right?
Which is wild. And what's so delusional about it is that they still have this idea that it's the textbooks that's creating like the hostility and the conflict. Every school in Gaza has been destroyed by Israel's assault on Gaza. Like you're talking about textbooks? They're blowing up all of the schools. If you talk to Palestinians who live in Gaza and ask them about the textbooks, someone will say, yeah, there actually is some like cringeworthy stuff in there that should be like edited out. But the idea that the resentment of Jewish Israelis comes from the textbooks ignores the fact that they've been getting bombed for a year and starved to death and pushed into an enclave where like infectious disease is like spreading out of control. Like the material conditions are creating the resentment. And if you print a new textbook that is filled with propaganda about the virtues of the Israeli state, you don't even have a school left standing where you can hand that textbook out to students. Like it's so utterly divorced from the reality on the ground that you wonder, when is this going to actually clash?
Yeah.
Like, and let alone the fact that so many bombs have been dropped on Gaza that the unexploded ordnance itself will take decades to remove before you can even do the reconstruction.
What this just reeks of me is like imperial agenda, right? Like imposing rule, drawing state line, all these things we supposedly
my guess,
are
this
against.
is
and it might actually even be worse because it doesn't even involve any of the people who supposedly would rule over.
And my guess is we will see something like this.
Oh, absolutely, I agree with you. This is the most likely outcome. But the point is that in the 21st century, it's not going to last. As in the power, the amount of force it would take to enforce something like this is not. I mean, it is within the realm of possibility for the U.S. It shouldn't be. We have no interest in doing this. Doesn't mean, I guess, that we wouldn't get locked into it, but it would turn into a multi-decade quagmire. It would just be completely unsustainable.
Yeah, and they basically.
But the US would get itself locked in there because this isn't for anyone. This isn't even for itself. It's more important than that. It's for Israel, which the US has constantly valued above itself and above its own citizens.
Basically, it would just have to shrink the population down to, which was what they're ultimately trying to do, shrink the population down to a quote-unquote manageable size. I think we can, if people want to see my exchanges with the State Front, we can see it tomorrow. It's like we're running low on time. People can check out the Dropside Twitter feed.
There you go. Check out the Dropside Twitter feed. It's there.
Hey, if you liked that video, don't forget to hit the like button and subscribe.
Thank you, Ryan. Thank you, Sagar, for Breaking Points.
I'm going to read you something, and then I'm going to introduce you to the person that...
This is James O'Brien, LBC, 1.5, closed captions.
I'm going to read you something, and then I'm going to introduce you to the person that wrote it. No one said a word, not when the rescue worker slowly picked his way through the glass and twisted metal to reach the back seat of the pickup truck, not when he lifted out the black body bag, and not when he emerged cradling the smashed remains of the one-year-old boy on the way to an ambulance as 2 Israeli jets roared overhead. The child had been dead for a day by the time the Red Cross worker arrived yesterday, lying face down and unseen in the Chevrolet Silverado after an Israeli airstrike. That was written by Oliver Marsden, who is in Zeteo in northern Lebanon for the Times, or was when he wrote that. He joins me now from Lebanon. And I wanted to share your words, Oliver, because they sort of hit me very, very hard. And I read all the papers every day, as you can imagine. I know you don't write the headlines, and this one is in quotes anyway, but there are rules in war, but this is monstrous, is the headline under which your article appeared this morning. Why?
That's a quote from Father Esteban Frangier, who is the manager of the local hospital nearby, and that's what he was saying after, it's now 23 people were killed. He was saying that many of those who survived, they were coming to the hospital with injuries to their faces, to their eyes from the explosion, including children. He said 5 children, I believe. So that was a quote from him, and I think there are many people on the ground who are extremely affected and extremely angry and sad about what is happening here and what happened there. And so, that is his opinion, and he makes a good point, I believe.
And not least because the attack hit a refuge for displaced people, many of whom would have been making their way or fleeing north after attacks in the south. And I always note the presence of this word in some reports like this. It was a predominantly Christian area, which is why, of course, you were talking to a priest. How frustrating is it for you, reporting on this region, to recognise how little the people that you're writing for know about the region? Some people will be surprised to learn, for example, that there is a predominantly Christian area in the middle of Lebanon.
Yeah, I mean, Lebanon is incredibly complex in that respect. It has a confessional power sharing system where the president is always a Maronite Christian, the prime minister is always a Sunni Muslim, and the speaker of parliament is always a Shia Muslim. Not many people know that. That came about after the 15-year bloody civil war here. And so it's a very complex region, but it's a very complex country, given that there are so many religious, sects within it. And so far, people have been getting along, and they do have their areas. Some of them are mixed, some of them aren't so mixed. And there has been unity over the years since the Civil War. And that is, unfortunately, as Father Espan also said, it's being tested. He believes it's being pushed on purpose by the Israelis. So you have people, he said, he quoted, these people, these refugees, they're not from the moon. They're from Lebanon. People know each other. For example, many Lebanese have businesses abroad in West Africa. There are more Lebanese people who live in Brazil than live in Lebanon. There's a huge diaspora. And so these people go and work abroad, and it doesn't matter what religion they are. They mingle, they know each other, they come back. And so you have people from the Shia Muslim community fleeing the south, being put up in homes in Christian communities like they were in Zeteo, and then these homes are being destroyed. And it is sowing a lot of fear now. People are scared to house the displaced from the south. And on top of that, their families have been displaced multiple times now. They left the south. They came to some suburbs of Beirut. Those have been hit. They're heading further north. It's almost as far north as you can go away from the fighting, and they're still being hit. And so there is many religions here, and there are Christian areas, and there are Sunni Muslim areas, there are Shia areas, and there are even Druze areas. So it's very complex.
Yes, I thank you for that. I think it's important that people understand that background in order to appreciate the level of confusion about why this area, among people, up to and including Father Esteban, why this area was targeted by the airstrike. It's still in shrouds.
Yeah, we're still trying to get to the bottom of that. As I mentioned in the report, someone who wasn't particularly known to the area, he had arrived to give out cash aid to those who've been displaced. And 5 minutes later, this home that was housing a lot of families from the south was hit. One thing I don't quite understand myself is that if it was a targeted assassination of a Hezbollah commander, we're still waiting to hear. I actually even sent, sent the coordinates to the other side, asked for some explanations. They still haven't replied, or they say an investigation is still ongoing. But what I don't understand is, in the past, they've been able to hit people on highways and on roads. They've hit scooters on roads and cars on highways that are moving in areas where there aren't a lot of civilians around, or maybe they are on the highway, but they're not being as affected. So I don't understand why this person turned up and then 5 minutes later the whole building was hit. Surely they've been following him. They have drones buzzing all the time. We can hear them all the time. So there are eyes on what is moving, what is happening. So the timing of the strike is something that I'm trying to get to the bottom of.
I know that your feelings are irrelevant to the work that you do in the context of what ends up on the page, but when you have to write words like the Israeli military added, the claim that Lebanese civilians were killed as a result is under review, the incident is being examined, 7 or 8 paragraphs after describing the discovery of that dead baby, that must feel, to use an overused word, Oliver, that must be a slightly surreal experience for you.
Yes, I mean, it's surreal. I think it's not really about me, my job is
I appreciate that.
And tell what's happening. It's not, it's never easy. I think you're mad if you go to these things and it's like water off a duck's back. Of course, it affects you, and it's not easy. But I think what is surreal is what is happening to the Lebanese people on the ground. Not just the Lebanese. You have the migrant community. You have Syrians, displaced Palestinians. Everyone's being affected on both sides of this conflict. I think the fact that this is even happening is surreal.
And I suppose for people who've been following events as closely as we all should, the key difference between what's happening in Lebanon and what's happening in Gaza is that people like you can get there and report back.
Well, that's the thing. We cannot get into Gaza as much as we pushed, as much as as many open letters that have been written and signed by multiple news agencies. We're not allowed into Gaza, and so we are on the ground, going to these sites, seeing these things, so that we can tell what's happening. The Israeli military was dispute claims of stuff of what's happening in Gaza. I heard one of their spokesmen, one of the people from their party today, and he was saying that these reports that aid is not getting into Gaza, they're not true. In fact, that the aid has doubled and there is aid going in. I think they were talking about it at the White House recently. And then it's like, well, let us in. If you say it's going in, why don't you let us in, and then we can say it's going in? But they won't let anyone in. So I can't say if it is going in or if it isn't going in. But there are incredible journalists on the ground in Gaza. There are Palestinians who have been working and dying, trying to report what's been going on. But if they want, they need a break as well. It's not just it's not about sort of sending in foreign journalists to do a better job or anything like that. They're doing an incredible job, but they've been doing this non-stop for almost a year. They just need a break, I think, to let the rest of us in to help them out.
Absolutely. And finally, the surviving victims of this latest airstrike, many of whom, as you write, were already displaced. Many of them are now, as we speak, on the move again.
Yes, one of the women I spoke to, she had 5 children. She just put them into a hotel. She was already paying $500 for this tiny apartment that she was renting on that next door to the building that was hit. But obviously her apartment was destroyed. People, where are people getting $500 a month from at the moment? Given that they've already been displaced from, she was displaced from the Bekaa Valley. So, her work is a long way, and her home is a long way away from where she's been displaced to. Now they're being displaced again. I don't know where they're going to go. And I think not a lot of people know. And what's happening now here in Lebanon is that with the widening of these airstrikes, the scope of these airstrikes, there's a lot of fear. People were saying yesterday they don't know where feels safe.
Thank you, Oliver. Oliver Marsden, live from Beirut and reporting on recent events in I2, where you just heard the death toll is believed to have reached about 23, and already displaced people are now moving on once again.
No, nowhere is safe. That is unfortunately very true. Nowhere is safe. When Israel comes after you, there's no safe place. There's no humanitarian area. There's nothing. There are no checks or balances. There are no laws to hold them accountable. There's nothing. When Israel decides you need to die, it will do that. Especially since it has the backing of the most powerful country on the world. It has the backing of the global empire. But that's about it from me. If I had any points on that last video, I do think it's important for people to understand the Middle East is more complicated than you give it credit for. It's religious makeup is more complicated than you give it credit for. It's ethnic or the groups that make up the Middle East. It's more complicated than the boundaries that you see on the map, and a lot of people give it credit for. But again, that's about it for me. I do hope you enjoyed, which is what I say at the end of every video or stream. But most importantly, I do hope this was educational, helpful. I hope you learned something new. I hope you're here to learn more next week, because I'm done for today, and I'll see you again next Sunday. Take care.